Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, another packed episode.
Yes,
in the spring of packed episodes,
it has been a marathon of kind of the same topic over and over again, but like we just have to keep on plumbing these depths.
One new topic this week, which is Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah,
I saw it. I fucking loved it. What do you think?
I like it a lot. I think it's kind of... I don't love it as much as some people are, but I definitely like it probably about as much as the first Guardians movie, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, and I liked this one even more. So there's so many fun things to talk about with it. So we'll do a spoiler chat on that movie. Again, judging by box office, you've all seen it. So whatever. Come if you somehow haven't seen it, don't listen to this yet. We'll get there when we get there.
It's not like a movie you can really spoil for someone.
That
movie telegraphs his plot pretty heavily, like pretty intentionally.
Yeah, there's like one thing maybe you could, but other than that, yeah. So really good movie. We got a new episode of Doctor Who. Knock knock.
Who's there?
A great fucking episode. That's who.
Yeah,
that was really good.
Yeah, I loved it a lot. I mean, I always love the horror Doctor Who's, and in particular, I like when they go as hard into horror as this episode.
Yeah, this was a particularly good horror. A lot of horror Doctor Who is sort of on the cerebral horror side, and it's not as viscerally scary to me, especially in modern Who.
Yeah.
This episode was scary.
Yeah, this episode was like, you could probably just cut a solid, contiguous 10 minutes out of this, show it to someone, and they would just assume it's like a kind of lower budget horror movie. And that's it.
With a Scottish actor doing a really interesting performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, good episode of Doctor Who, and I think we're going to return to Persona 5. I think the length of that conversation will be dictated by where we are when we get there in this episode.
Yeah.
But we have more. We finished all the spoiler chats. We've done 4 episodes on Persona 5, but I know we have other kind of questions we want to ask with the game.
Yeah. Because now we've done all the spoiler casts, and now we can just to talk about the game in its entirety, which we haven't really had an opportunity to do.
Yeah, and so I think we're going to do some of that. Again, this might not be the last one, but we'll figure out what that is when we get there. Yeah. More Persona 5 chat. And if you still are not playing Persona 5, there's plenty of episode for you to enjoy otherwise. Yeah. Sean, how are you enjoying the weather here in sunny Colorado?
Oh, it's so good. It's just, I love when, it's 2 in the afternoon and then all of a sudden this ungodly fucking hailstorm appears out of nowhere. You're like, and when I walk upstairs, is my room just going to be covered in broken glass? Is this going to be one of those days? Luckily, nothing got broken that I can tell in the hailstorm of the fucking century. But
yeah, we had a hailstorm here in Colorado today in Golden and Lakewood that was, easily the hardest I think I've ever been in.
It's probably top 5. Yeah.
Yeah, it was insane. It was so loud. The hail was just it felt like there was a god in the heavens just chucking golf balls at my windows.
Yeah, it's like God got drunk, and God's not a very nice drunk, and he's just like, you know what I'm going to do today? Fuck you, Colorado.
Yeah. It was insane, and it's kind of funny. So I just was in my house with my dog, and we kind of bunkered down, and, we were fine. Nothing broke, luckily. My car was okay, even though it wasn't in the garage. It has some dents, but it has the windows didn't break or anything, which is good. But it was funny, after that, I had to go to an appointment, an hour later, and luckily it had calmed down enough by then, because I would have canceled it if it had still been doing it, because I wouldn't have wanted to leave my dog home alone with that.
Right.
Just for a variety of reasons. But anyway, I went out and I went over to Denver West, kind of where the Colorado Mills Mall is, and I had this appointment there, and I'm driving around, and there were cars with broken windshields and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And tow trucks, and at one point I had to go to a gas station because I had to fill my car up, and the gas station attendant was just telling everyone stories of what he'd heard, because that's probably a good person to ask of like what's going on. The Colorado Mills Mall, did you hear this?
No.
The roof caved in.
What?
Yeah, like near the food court.
Jesus.
They apparently have these like sun windows, like way up high. They caved in a bunch of them, and the mall flooded a little bit, and they shut down the entire mall, evacuated it, and they have no idea when they're going to be able to reopen.
Jesus fucking Christ! Yeah, I had not heard that yet.
And apparently, in the movie theater that's at the Mills Mall, the ceiling also started caving in certain theaters, and people had to leave.
Yeah, I mean, it's a particularly rough hailstorm when, like, 2 hours after it, you look outside and it looked like it snowed that afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how hailstorms are supposed to go. Like, 2 hours after a hailstorm, it's supposed to have basically all melted.
Yeah, I mean, another great story I heard from the gas station attendant is someone apparently was in his parking lot, like, walking to their car, got hit by a, like, tennis ball-sized hail in his foot, broke his foot, had to go to the hospital.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go outside in hailstorms, kids.
No, they're very dangerous. It is really scary. It is like you just, because I was in my basement at the time, like I think I was like fucking playing video games or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, has my dad taken up playing the drums? What the fuck is going on right now? It's like run upstairs. It's like, is God just playing drums on a roof? What is even happening?
It was a trip. My dog was so funny through it, because when it started, I was just on the couch with her, like reading a book, and it starts going crazy. And I had a hand on her anyway, because I was kind of petting her, and then I kind of just like put an arm around her, like, it's okay. And she was fine. Like, I thought, like, reasonably, a dog could freak out at that.
Yeah, because it is obscenely loud.
And she's only like 2. I don't think she's ever been in a hailstorm, But instead, she just started like looking all around. Like she stirred a little bit, and then she like kind of looked up at the ceiling, and then at the windows, and then the freak out. And she didn't really freak out, but if she were to freak out, what it was more than anything was just looking everywhere, being like, "Where's that coming from?"
Right.
And the answer was, "I'm sorry, Phoebe, it's coming from everywhere."
Yeah.
And finally, she gets up and like goes over to like the back door and is just looking out the window, like, "What is that?" And like she was just curious, like, what the hell is going on?
That's almost something where I feel like as a pet owner, it maybe almost makes you even more nervous of like, I feel like my dog should be treating this as a more serious situation. Because then it would make me more confident if I was not here, the dog would be cautious enough to be fine. When the dog's just like, oh, what is this? This is kind of interesting. You're like, no, you stupid sack of fur. Like, get away from the window.
Yeah, if I had let her go outside, she probably would have, just to see what it was. I would never do that, but because some of those hails were bigger than she was. Not really, but they were big.
Yeah.
As hail goes. So anyway, yeah, and it was like 90 degrees yesterday.
Yeah, no, it's
that's Colorado.
It's Colorado. It's what you sign up for when you come to the state.
Stupid weather. Anyway, let's talk about some stuff.
Let's talk about stuff.
I want to follow up on our Dragon Quest conversation from last week.
Okay, sure, I do too, because I've continued to play Dragon Quest.
So you've continued, so just that same, like the Dragon Quest 1?
I finished Dragon Quest 1 shortly kind of after that last podcast, because it's not a very long game, and I'm deep into Dragon Quest 2, which is not as good as Dragon Quest 1, but is a fascinating game. It's not as, like, crazy as like Final Fantasy 2 was. For people who don't know, like Final Fantasy 2 is a really bizarre game that has a bunch of really strange systems in it. Like it has a very Elder Scrolls-esque, like you gain skills by attacking, like so like you become better at attacking things by just attacking things and level that skill up that way. And part of the way that Final Fantasy 2 is designed is like you can just attack your own party members in battle to level up their attack skill, which is just insane. It's an insane system to design for a video game.
I played a little bit of that last year. I think Final Fantasy 2 has some amazing stuff in it. It also has some stuff where you're just like, you guys, good on you for swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
But this doesn't work.
Yeah. So Dragon Quest 2 is not quite as far in that direction, but is definitely, it like expands out the sort of like scope of the game in a way that's really fascinating. And it's one I've had a lot of fun playing. But I absolutely have to say, if anyone has any like inkling to try to play all these games, you get to Dragon Quest 2, fucking play the game with a FAQ. Like, it is absolutely, like, there's only one part in Dragon Quest 1 where I looked something up, and even then, like, I could have probably figured it out if I'd spent a bit more time with it. Dragon Quest 2, you will be utterly lost halfway through that game if you do not use a FAQ to sort of figure out how to progress from there. But, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm definitely enjoying the Dragon Quest.
Nice. I'm playing some Dragon Quest. I got the iOS version of Dragon Quest 1 you were talking about on the podcast, because it's like $2. And it's cool. Like, that game, I'd love to play more of it. But that port pisses me off because they do this weird thing where you have to hold the phone vertically to play it.
Sure.
They did like, Why? Why? Every other port, you hold it like a fucking TV screen and you play it normally. Don't get cute with it. That's stupid. It looks dumb and it doesn't work nice for me.
Right.
But there's, I mean, it's you get some of the fun stuff with that port, like the ye old translations.
Yeah, the very like exaggerated, which is like it's not entirely unjustified, that translation method, but it's also maybe goes a bit far with it.
But I deeply admire the like dedication to it.
Yeah,
because they don't go like half-assed either. Like it's not just a couple of these. Like I had to like stop and like slow down and like I have to like pay attention to this because they wrote it like in iambic pentameter or something. Like it's not really, but like it's crazy how far they went with it.
They were very dedicated with the Elizabethan English sort of direction they went with that.
Yeah, which as I understand it is not at all how Japanese Dragon Quest is written.
No, it's totally normal except for like the king speaks in a very kingly fashion, and so like that kind of makes sense. The normal people just talk like normal people.
Yeah, so anyway, that was not my favorite way to play that game, and I can't read Japanese, so or not as fluently as Sean can, certainly, so I didn't want to kind of go that route that you have. So I do have a 3DS, though, and as I said last week, I've really been wanting to play those ports they made of 7 and 8, so I picked up 7 because it was on sale for like $30.
And 7 was the PS1 one, correct?
Yes, it's the PS1 one from the year 2000, so it's actually newer than I kind of thought. I always forget that PS1 does transfer into the 2000s a little bit.
Yeah, because that was like right on the border for PS1 and PS2.
Yeah, and 7 is the one that's famously like 100 plus hours long. It's really kind of a series of small stories where basically you have to... The game starts where you are on this island in the middle of like an endless ocean, and all the inhabitants of the island thinks that's the whole world, and the ocean is just everything else. But you play as this kid who I named Akira because Toriyama and everything. For fun. Yeah. And you play as this kid, and his friend is like the prince of the island, and the prince is always like trying to figure out, like, I think the adults are lying to us, there's more to the world. And basically you start doing this time travel adventure where you go to different periods and like help these people solve their problems, and then that area of the world is restored. So like another island will like rise out of... It's almost like you're putting back a Japan-style continent of like a bunch of little islands, you know?
Cool.
So it's an interesting game. Like, I've been on an Akira Toriyama kick lately because I've been trying to make the final push through my Dragon Ball Z rewatch I've been doing.
Right.
And the Dragon Ball Super manga adaptation actually just started coming out in book form over here in the U.S. And that's awesome. I can't recommend that enough. As someone who read Dragon Ball in manga form first, very unusual, I know, for Americans, I love that they did a manga of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I've been doing that, and just some other, like, I've been trying to read through some of Dr. Slump also, which I've never read the whole thing of.
Yeah.
And so I'm just on that kick, and I'm like, I might as well throw Dragon Quest into the mix, just all the pillars of the Akira Toriyama, like, chapel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, that is the best thing about Dragon Quest. I think it's the art design and the character design. It's got the best monsters of pretty much any JRPG. Like, Persona, you can make the argument for, but Persona is also in a weird space where you fight the personas, and then they become your personas. But, like, the Dragon Quest monsters, especially for, like, a normal kind of JRPG, are just so fun. You know, the slime never gets old.
The slime is classic for a reason. And I don't know if this is the case for monsters you've seen in Dragon Quest VII, but in Dragon Quest 1 and 2, I really love that there's like a good like third of the monsters are just from Dragon Ball. Like there's just like you look at the skeleton and you're like, this is just the robot pirate skeleton from Dragon Ball. Just it's not a robot, but it's just the skeleton part is 100% the same, which is particularly notable because it doesn't look at all like a human skeleton. Like, it's very definitely not. Like, the dragon very much looks like the dragons from Dragon Ball and stuff like that.
In what I've played of 7, which is a tiny sliver of that game so far, it does not... I mean, it makes sense for those, like, 1 and 2 that would be the case, because that's, like, the time period when he's writing Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
By the year 2000, he was years past that, so none of that so far. But, again, it's a long game. There could be... plenty of Dragon Ball villains in there.
Yeah, like, there's one enemy that, like, in particular, I think is literally just the exact same design as, like, Giren, the guy the dragon dude that Goku fights in the first tournament in, like, original Dragon Ball. It is just the same character. Like, it's 100% the same, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
It feels like if, like, I got on the boat in Dragon Quest 2 and just sailed, like, west for like 5 hours, eventually I would just land in Dragon Ball Land.
I think you could, totally. Like, and that's the thing is, I don't think I've gotten into the weird shit yet with Dragon Quest. Like, it's mostly been like humans and human stories. I'm sure that will open up, you know, at some point in that game. It's cool. I mean, the thing that's so interesting about Dragon Quest, and I don't know if I'm hooked enough that I'm going to sit down and play this whole game right now or anything, but like, it's like the missing link of evolution in JRPGs that we have not really experienced that much over here because it's that most of them have come out, but they're not in the mainstream in the way like Final Fantasy is. And Dragon Quest just it's been doing its own fucking thing. It's been plugging along with that. Like Dragon Quest VII, not a new game at this point, but it's from this century. It's from 2000, and this is a 3DS remake, which has updated some things. Like now, it's not random encounters; the enemies are on the map, which is kind of cool because you just have like a slime bouncing on the map, and you walk up to it and fight it, and things like that, and that's nice. But you have to go talk to a priest to save every single time. And
okay, cool.
Like
that's how it works in Dragon Quest 2.
Yeah, and
Dragon Quest 1, you have to go talk to the king to save, and he's the only person in the game that actually has a save point, which is like, Dragon Quest 1 is small enough that you can kind of accept it, but I definitely appreciated playing that game in an emulated form where I was like, I can just save what I want to save.
Yeah, no, with Dragon Quest 7, you have to go talk to a priest and go through like 8 dialogue boxes to save and things like that. And the whole game just has a very slow pace to it. And I mean, 7 especially because it takes a while to get the story started. I don't think to too egregious a degree. It's a long game. It happens.
Sure, yeah.
But like, it's a while before you even fight anyone and things like that. And, the battle system, they're not getting cute with it. They're not doing anything special with it, really. It is a classic JRPG battle system. You can attack. You can have some magic. As I understand it, like 30 hours into 7, you get a class system. I'm not anywhere near 30 hours into 7 yet. But, it's a battle system. It's turn-based. They don't even have, active time or anything like that.
That's, I think, because I've been having this fun time playing Dragon Quest 1 and 2 and sort of thinking about my relationship with the old Final Fantasy games, which I generally really like. But there's something about Dragon Quest that, attracts me to it even more. And I think one of the things, if I had to boil it down into one sentence, is that Dragon Quest would never have an active time battle system because Dragon Quest knows that that's fucking horseshit. Yes!
And I am generally okay with the active time battle system.
It doesn't make any goddamn sense.
I understand. No, but I actually like the battle system in Dragon Quest, and even at the point of 7, it's all built that the battles go super fast.
Yeah.
You're never in one for too long, and actually not having random encounters in 7 I think helps because even though you still probably have the same number of battles, just the agency of choosing is like a mental thing that releases you from that annoyance factor. But it's interesting. It's very quaint, but I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as it's interesting that this is a JRPG series that has kind of stayed true to its course forever, and that's fascinating to me. And I know there are 8 and 9 are the ones past 7, and they've advanced some things more, but generally that's what the series has been, and that's fascinating to me. It is also cool. While I was doing all my research with this, I found out on a Nintendo 3DS you can play 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Right, because there's a bunch of them on Virtual Console.
Not Virtual Console. They were remade on DS. 4, 5, 6 all have DS remakes. I didn't... Yeah, they might be on Virtual Console too. I don't know that. But 4, 5, 6 are on there. 7 and 8 just had the 3DS remakes. And 9 was a DS game.
Yeah.
So, and then, have you seen what they're doing with Dragon Quest 11 on 3DS?
No.
This is fascinating. So 11 is coming out, this July in Japan. And, of course, it's going to be a really big deal there because they love their Dragon Quest. Yeah. But it's coming out on PS4 and 3DS. Which you never hear that combo.
Yeah.
Games never come out, unless they're little indie games. Mainstream games don't share those two consoles. But what they've done is, so the PS4 version is what you would expect, 3D graphics and all that. And, looks like a PS4, probably a, low-grade graphics level PS4 game, but a PS4 game.
Yeah.
And then on the 3DS, it's got 2 graphic styles. The top screen has a downgraded version of the 3D game you play on PS4. And the bottom screen has a 16-bit Super NES version of the entire game. And as I understand it, at a certain point, you have to choose between one of them to play the game through. But they have built all of Dragon Quest XI as either a modern 3D game or a 16-bit game. I think I would get that game on 3DS.
Sure.
If I had to choose. Just that's awesome that they've done that. And they're even selling bundles in Japan where you just get both of them. I don't think there's ever been a bundle where you get a 3DS and PS4 game before.
No, yeah, it is an interesting combination for sure.
Yeah, but that's fascinating, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting kind of innovation that you wouldn't expect to see. But anyway, I've had fun with it. I think if you're interested in the history of JRPGs, you kind of owe it to yourself to just try these out and just be what is this series that is kind of the progenitor of everything else, and what's it up to these days,
Yeah, and I think in particular, Dragon Quest 1 is a game that holds up amazingly well for, its position in the genre and just its age of being a game that was made in, 84, 85. It is totally, you can go back and play it, and it still just feels this is a fucking this is a video game you can just play in a way that like a lot of those old games kind of aren't.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I only played about an hour of the iOS version, and I just, like, literally, it was uncomfortable to hold in my hand that way, but, like, I really liked what I played of it. You know, it's really cool, and it reminded me a lot of how I think of Final Fantasy 1 in some ways.
Yeah, it is definitely a Final Fantasy 1-esque kind of JRPG, which is always kind of like, I've always wondered, like, what if JRPGs had gone more in that direction instead of like kind of restricting that stuff and being like way more like linear narrative focused in the way that later Final Fantasies became, and I assume Dragon Quest becomes as well. If they had just said like, no what, fuck it, like let's just go in that other direction, be like D&D as fuck, because I really like that about Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah, I like that too. It's yeah. Anyway, so that's old JRPG talk. Any other stuff to go with, Sean?
I made a promise on the last podcast to talk about the demo to Prey. I have played the demo to Prey. It seems fine.
Okay, I've heard this game is really cool. Someone made a Metroid comparison. I want to play it. I'm just really busy, frankly, actually preparing topics for this podcast, and I don't want to commit myself to starting another game right now.
Yeah,
but
I think it's like a game that seemed like it would be really cool, but does not demo particularly well, just based on the kind of type of game it is. Because it's very Deus Ex, Bioshock, System Shocky, like that kind of game. And that's just like, just playing like the first hour of a game like that, it's so systems heavy that it's like, it's kind of hard to sort of like get into the meat of it. And then like the story kind of grabbed me at first, and then there's like a big twist about like 20 to 30 minutes in that like is fine as a twist, but I feel like the execution of it like didn't like grab me the way they kind of wanted it to sort of pull you into the story. But it definitely seems like a game that, you know, if you got the whole game and sat down and like got into the systems, it would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking. There's 3 games from the first half of this year I want to catch up on, and it's Prey, Nier Automata, and
Yakuza 0,
Horizon Zero Dawn,
and Yakuza 0,
and Yakuza 0. Sorry,
4.
Yes, that's 4. Yakuza 0. I've like put in a different category because it's, you know, like a localized game. But you're totally right. Those are the 4. And I'm kind of also like frozen at the moment of like, which one do I want to do first?
Yeah, I bought Nier Automata on the sale they had on PSN recently because it was for like $45.
I haven't done it yet. I might still.
And so I just haven't started it because I like just was off that string of playing like fucking 3, like between Yakuza 0, Zelda, and Persona 5, and I guess like Horizon in there as well, which is not a huge game, but it was like 30 to 40 hours for me. Like, this is just like a long stretch of like big AAA games. It's like, okay, I need to slow down. I need to play like a really old video game and just like chill out for a week or two, and then I will get into Nier.
I had the same thing. Like Persona 5 took it out of me. And I just, not like in the best way possible, but it took it out of me, and I've like been recovering with Dragon Ball and stuff like that, and like some light Dragon Quest. So I will probably pick up Nier on this sale too, and then maybe we'll start playing it at the same time at some point. And we'll talk about it. There's also, end of the month for me is the new Fire Emblem on 3DS.
Right.
I'm psyched for that. So, yeah.
Video games, they're happening.
Yes, and luckily I don't know of like anything coming out over the summer, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Such great news.
Yeah,
there's ARMS. Other than that, I don't know. Yeah. And I can catch up with things. It's great.
It's a big open field, and then till we just get executed once fall begins and a billion video games start coming out again.
And once again, they made a Call of Duty I'm marginally interested in. You fuckers. Yeah. I feel like I want to play Call of Duty again this year. I'm sick of this. Stop it. I want to be able to ignore that series.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to be able to sort of prioritize other things, and then you're like, no, we've made another Call of Duty, but this time we're like making it cool. It's like,
and there's going to be another Assassin's Creed that they'll have had time to actually work on.
Yeah,
that could be good. Damn it.
Yeah, it is weirdly rough when the yearly franchises are like actually executing well. And you're like, oh fuck, now I'm obligated to go play these.
I know.
This too much. Not enough time and not enough money.
Especially because this is like a year full of very, very much non-yearly franchises.
Yeah.
Like your Persona and Zelda and all those. Yeah. So, and even, like we've had some of these cool new IPs like Horizon and essentially Prey, even though it takes a name because...
But it takes a name and nothing else, and it's weird.
Because Bethesda owned the name.
Yeah.
And there we go.
And it's a good name for a video game, I guess.
Yeah. And Nier Automata is technically a sequel, but no one has played the first one, I think, so yeah. It's interesting.
There were like the 5 people that played the first Nier, and they're very passionate about it.
I'm sure they are. All right, let's get into some of our topics. Oh, quick, 2 pieces of news.
Okay.
2 pieces of news, quick.
What's happening in the news, Jonathan?
One, Persona 5. Did you read the director's note that Katsura Hashino, is that right?
Katsura Hashino, yeah.
Katsura Hashino posted on the PlayStation blog?
Yes.
That was cool.
Very cool.
Except, it was kind of sad. He very strongly implied, it seemed like he is not going to be directing Persona games anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of kind of known. Like, he'd never, like, it had never been, like, definitively stated, but... Like, this happened around when I was in Bermuda. I remember reading this. It was probably why it never came up on the podcast. But Atlas did make a new internal studio called Studio Zero that is headed by Hashino and then Soejima and Meguro, which are, like, the core Persona guys. And they're making some sort of fantasy RPG something. Like, there's not a lot of details out about
awesome.
it. Yeah, so, like, they're like working on a project that is not Persona related. And so it's heavily implied that another team is going to make Persona 6.
Well, and it's interesting. Let's tackle this right now.
Okay, yeah.
It's this is separate enough from Persona 5, but one of the questions I was going to ask on the Persona 5 topic later, and I'll just ask it now, was what would we want these guys to do next?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer actually very much would be not another Persona game.
Me too.
Because, frankly, it's because as phenomenal as Persona 5 is, one, I once again don't know where you grow from here, and two, Persona 5 branches out into so many other, like, mini-genres at different points. Like, I want to see them do other things. Because Persona 5 shows such depth of skill in so many other areas. Like, there were parts where I was like, in some of the palaces, I'm like, these guys should make a platformer. They'd be fantastic at it, you know? Like a Mario Galaxy-style platformer. These guys could do it. So the idea of them, as you say, like, heading up kind of their own studio to do something else fills me with a lot of excitement. And then the idea of there one day being a Persona 6 by a different team is scary on one level, but also kind of exciting because as much as we love the Persona 3, 4, 5 formula, it can't go forever.
Yeah.
And at some point, it probably does need new blood, and that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and there's a feeling to Persona 5 that, like, you know, they have the 20th anniversary logo at the top with all 5 of the emblems from the school, and there's this very clear sense of Persona 5 being a game that is both looking forward and looking back at the history of the franchise and pulling things like Tartarus from Persona 3 and finding a way to implement it in some way in this game and stuff like that, and taking like some like character design things and musical cues and stuff that feel like are a little bit borrowed from Persona 2 and Persona 1 and like some of the element stuff and the guns and stuff like that. There's just like a little hodgepodge of things that feel like it's Persona 5 feels like this culmination of an era for this like weird little franchise. And so I think it's kind of appropriate for them to sort of say, okay, this is it. This is like this is far as I feel like that team can in some ways go with like the constraints of working on a Persona game and say, you know, baton pass over to the next team because, you know, this is a franchise that already had that split once. Like we already had the Persona 1, the Persona 2s, which are games I like a lot. I think the Persona 2s are fantastic JRPGs, and then hand it off to the new team like way later. It was like 6 years later, but then, you know, you have the Persona 3 to 5 era, and that feels like very much its own thing. And I would be very interested in a new team tackling like sort of what is a Persona game and going in a, like, I hope a different direction with it, because while like I love the Persona games to death, like there is a sort of inescapable element of Persona 5 that feels like I kind of like want something like totally different. It feels like there are constraints about the formula for a traditional Persona game for this team that feels like need to be broken for the next one.
Yeah, I don't think you can push things like the social link system any further than you did in this game. There's just some feeling to that of me of like, they kind of did it perfect.
Yeah, or because like, and if you want to sort of take it further, you have to like completely gut it, you know? Like it has to be something, it has to come back in a different form if you want to do it again.
And hey, if we view like 3, 4, 5 as a trilogy, as people like to do, it's a hell of a trilogy.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's you know, and yeah, I'm just... These guys could announce they're making a fucking Donkey Kong game, and I'd be like, sign me up.
Fucking,
you know?
yeah.
Donkey Kong is going to get real. He's going to learn about death. It's
Donkey Kong takes his fucking coconut gun and puts it up against his head, pulls the trigger. That starts at the game. Yeah.
Yeah, what could Shoji Meguro do with the Donkey Kong Country music?
It would be glorious.
Yeah. Anyway, but that was an interesting... If you have not read that note, it's on the PlayStation blog. Really just beautiful little, like, you know, him saying thank you to the Western audience.
Yeah.
And expressing something that I'm sure very real that team went through of, like, how will this game read outside of Japan?
Yeah.
And you could tell, I think he's very genuine saying, we're happy you guys have liked it because this is a really Japanese game.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Yeah, no, there have been a couple of pretty good interviews with Hoshino and some of the other members of the team from some American websites. Like Lixel has a pretty good one that is worth going and checking out, because there's a lot of... It's very interesting to see that sort of like... It's something we've talked a lot about with this game, of like the cultural divide of the like really specific cultural issues in Japan that Persona 5 discusses, and how that like is being translated or has to be sort of interpreted by an American audience. I think is a really fascinating question.
Yeah. So one other piece of news. Did you see the new Blade Runner 2049 trailer that came out today?
Yeah.
That movie looks so much better than it has any right to be.
Yeah. Although I still like it visually looks fantastic, but there's still a part of me that like is weirdly tense about that movie. Of like, there's something about like when Harrison Ford is on screen and like that stuff of like, I don't know. I don't know about like the story side of this, if what these trailers are sort of like suggesting works for me. Even as like, obviously they're super vague, and I don't think it like, you know, it almost says nothing about the movie, but there's something like weirdly tense about me watching those trailers.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with that. I think, and the visual element, frankly, is enough to make me excited, and we'll talk about that in a second. There is, and you know, the trailers are playing it vague. They really don't give you much of an indication about the story, and I actually think for a Blade Runner movie that's fine, because I don't know how you cut a trailer for the first Blade Runner.
Sure,
like I'm sure I could go dig my Blu-ray set out, and like there's probably a trailer gallery. I have no idea what those look like, but anyway, you know, there's the moment in the trailer where Harrison Ford shows up, a little bit from what we saw in the first teaser, but then there's like, you know, like you don't know what you're dealing with or something, and then people start shooting and they have to get out of there, and it looked, not visually, but like it felt an awful lot in that moment like Star Wars Force Awakens.
Yeah, sure.
And I love the Harrison Ford stuff in Star Wars Force Awakens, but I do wonder if, as he does this like farewell tour of all his roles, is it just going to kind of be the same thing every time, where he's old and crotchety, and then the new person, like, he warms to them, and then he dies. He's probably going to die at the end.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and maybe it'll be different than that. Again, this is a incredibly smart team making this movie, but there was a little bit of like, is Harrison Ford just going to be doing this for like the next 5 years as he kills off all his characters?
Yeah, and there's just another part of me that just like trying to rack my brain about how the fuck do you write Deckard into another Blade Runner movie. Like, that doesn't mean that they can't do it. I just can't figure out a way that you do that and have it work. Like, it just seems so antithetical to what Blade Runner is and like its identity and like the kind of story it was, that like, who gives a shit about bringing Deckard back? Like, there's nothing about that character that feels like he needs to come back for any reason.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you cut Harrison Ford out of this trailer and we knew he wasn't in it, there's like 100% excitement for that at that point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because everything else in that trailer looks like this is Blade Runner, but done by a new team with a fresh eye in a new era, and that looks so exciting.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is directed by Denis Villeneuve, and more excitingly, shot by Roger fucking Deakins.
Yeah.
One of the gods of American cinematography, and you can tell, like, he had a field day with this thing. Like, some of the images in that trailer are out of this world, and, like, I mean, there's the kind of the big trailer, the shot I've seen, like, screenshotted a lot of, like, the hologram woman reaching out to Ryan Gosling, and that is definitely feels like a great extension of the kind of images you'd see in the first one, but just, like, the amount of kind of extra desolation you have in this movie, the way it works with those neon lights and everything, it just, like, visually looks absolutely incredible. And you're right, like, when you get to the Harrison Ford parts, it's not as it looks bad necessarily, it's just like, that's the thing I've already seen.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just, like, this, like, weird lingering question of, like, wow, what the fuck is the plot of this movie going to be? Like, because the plot of Blade Runner 1 is super simple. Like, it's not a plot movie. The plot of Blade Runner 1 is, you have Deckard, he's a Blade Runner, which is basically like a detective / hitman who has to go kill these like 4 or 5 replicants, and then that's the movie, is he goes and does that. That's like the whole thing, and it's not like, and it's like some of the things that made me slightly nervous about the trailer was, and this might be more just the way it's edited more than like the actual way that what the scenes are showing, but I feel like wrapping in Deckard and have something of that stuff of like the scientist dude at like whatever the company is, you know, that makes replicants and all that shit, feels like there's maybe like, I think the worst thing this movie could do would be like oh, we're going to go like take the company down and like solve it or whatever, and like I'm going to go team up with like I'm new hot Ryan Gosling Blade Runner. I'm going to go find cool like old school fucking gruff ass Harrison Ford Blade Runner man, and like together as old and new Blade Runners, we're going to go take down like the man or whatever. Which feels like it's I can totally see Hollywood making a script for a Blade Runner 2 that is that exact plot. And that is a terrible plot for a Blade Runner 2.
It's a terrible plot, and we have no idea if that would be it, so.
I have no idea if that's going to be the plot of the movie, but like in the back of my mind, I can't help but have those fears.
And just to be fair to the guy, because I shit on him so much for Suicide Squad, I really liked Jared Leto's scene in this trailer.
Sure, yeah.
Where he's like pulling the replicants out of like the oil bath or whatever.
Right,
that was a haunting image. Like that looked like a good use of Jared Leto. He doesn't have like, gigolo tattoos on.
Well, not yet. Yeah. I mean, it could be a gigolo tattoo. You don't know. We don't know where the future went.
Yeah. Anyway, I actually thought that was a really interesting scene and version of that idea. So yeah, we'll see with this movie. It cuts a trailer well so far.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, all things considered. So that'll be interesting. Coming out the weekend of my birthday.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yay. And I love Blade Runner.
That probably means that you're a replicant. I don't know.
And I've been wanting to do a Blade Runner podcast for years.
Sure.
We finally get to do one this year.
Yeah, I'll rewatch like all 5 different cuts of that movie that exist because I have that box set.
Yep. It's still one of the best box sets ever made for any
really
movie.
Good. I'm really excited to talk about the work print version of the movie.
I've never watched the work print version.
I think I watched like half of it, and I was like, this is very interesting. I have also watched Blade Runner like 3 times in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to finish watching the work print version of this movie.
Yeah, because really like 4 of the 5 versions or 3 of the 5 are kind of like different variations on the same cut.
Yeah.
Because the director's cut is a cleaned up work print, and the final cut is a cleaned up director's cut. So you can kind of just go to the final cut and you're okay.
Yeah, no, that is definitely the version of the movie to see at this point.
Yeah. Anyway, Blade Runner is good. But let's talk about another good movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 came out in theaters this weekend, and we both saw it, and we both liked it, and it's got more talking raccoon, more talking tree, more awesome characters. Spoilers from here on out. If you have not seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but I really enjoyed this movie, actually way more than I was expecting to, I feel like, because like on Thursday, I think I rewatched Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and I like that movie a lot, but I still have kind of the exact same problems with that movie I did when it came out, which is that it feels like it's missing an act in the middle to me, where they kind of... Like, that movie actually is, on a script level, very simple in how it's written. It's like 3 big scenes.
Right.
And they're all really good scenes. It just feels like there's a missing link in that movie where the characters kind of lock into place as a team. But everything around that, the character work is so good. The tone is generally so on point. The use of music. I love the visuals in that movie. And really, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, for me, took everything I thought the first one did well, distilled it, did it even better. I think the character work is better. I think the acting is better. The music, the use of music, the visuals, the just specific character relationship stuff. And I honestly, this is a very weirdly paced sequel, but I liked it where it went with that because I think it plays to the strengths of this series. And I think the movie ends on a really unexpectedly emotional high point. And a place where I don't think any Marvel movie has really gone in terms of the ending of a film. And I think other than the Captain America sequels, which are also kind of weird and on their own boat, this is easily my favorite Marvel sequel. If you compare it to like Iron Man 2 or even Thor 2, which I love, and some of those, I thought this was a really good build on what they had with Guardians 1.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think my main issue with the movie comes with I thought the action climax stuff just got pretty tedious to me, and I wish... Because to me, like, that is kind of how I felt about, like, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was, like, I love so much of the movie. I love the characters. I love the writing. I love the editing. I love the music. I love, like, the visuals. It's hilarious. And a lot of, like, the action beats in and of themselves are very good, particularly the action beats that are, like, not the action climax. But once, like, the villain is very uninteresting, and once it, like, comes to wrapping everything up, it just feels like a bit... like, kind of going down the checklist of all the things you have to do to beat the villain kind of action scene. And I feel like that was the thing that kind of bummed me out the most about Guardians 1, even though I love that movie. And I felt like Guardians 2 has like the exact same problem in a way that really frustrated me. It's like I left that movie like not disappointed, but like I was hoping, especially because when I had seen it, like, because I saw it on like the Sunday after it came out, so like I had already sort of had heard that it's really, really good, and I think my expectations were maybe set a little bit higher than they should have been, because I was kind of hoping that the stuff they would have done with like the Kurt Russell character and stuff like that would have been more interesting than the sort of the direction they ultimately went with.
And see, I liked the climax a lot in this movie, because I probably have a similar issue with Guardians 1 as you do, where actually most of the action scenes in that movie I check out a little bit. I thought they tied it all into character so well in this one that, like, the final action sequence here and the climax, because this movie has an Empire Strikes Back structure to it, where you have basically, it's a 3-act movie, but not in the sense of most Hollywood 3-act movies. It's where you have an initial act where the team is together and doing something that is sort of tangentially related to the main plot, and then they break up, and a really super long second act where everyone is separated and it's all character work, and then everyone comes together for kind of a big conclusion. And I just thought, like, when we came together for that conclusion, the characters had all changed and gone through so much by that point. And then it was about, like, the payoff of watching these characters bounce off one another. And I thought James Gunn did that effectively through action work in this movie, more so than I think he did in the first one. I thought I saw growth as a director in some of the staging and visual effects and things like that at the end.
Sure. I kind of agree, but then at the same time, there's also, like, it's just the dynamics of, like, it is, like, maybe the most, like, video game, like, level ass fucking, like, last fight I've seen in a movie maybe ever. Like, it was so just, like, giant stone-faced man, and, like, that stuff just felt like it was just, like, a very boring sort of action scene. Even if, like, I did think a lot of the character stuff happening was pretty good, like, I felt like it could have been condensed much tighter than the sort of big action scene they had at the end.
And I can probably agree with that. Like, I like this movie a lot. I think I would also like a 10-minute shorter cut of it, where I think probably just around the movie you could tighten it a little bit without, and not even to saying you lose any particular scene. I just mean, like, certain cuts where, like, for instance, the fight between Nebula and Gamora in the middle is great character stuff, but the action component of it probably goes on too long.
Yeah.
Like, little things like that, where you could probably get a cut in the 120-minute range that would be even tighter and better of this. But, you know, just the highs of this movie to me are so high. Like, some of the character stuff in this movie blew me away. Like, to me, the character who walks away with this movie is Yondu, played by Michael Rooker.
Yeah.
And it's designed to be that way. But I think to a level I didn't even expect, because I love Yondu in the first Guardians movie. Like, especially on a rewatch, I was like, Michael Rooker is really fucking good in this part, and I want to see more of this dude, especially what you see he can do with his whistling arrow thing.
Yeah.
And the sequel, like, I actually was worried early on when Nebula shoots him in the head. I'm like, oh, they killed Yondu. And I was like, oh, wait, it was just his headpiece. He's going to be a main character in this thing. And he is. And on some level, absolutely you can trace he's the father Peter Quill always had but never realized. And it's, like, very kind of stock.
Right.
But the way they do it, in part because they actually keep him apart from Peter Quill most of the movie, which I think is an interesting choice.
Right.
He grows as a character in such an interesting way. Michael Rooker brings so many shadings to that character. And by the end of that movie, and when he sacrifices himself and everything that happens, and the, like, space Viking funeral he gets and everything, kind of amazing how much I think they did with that character essentially in one movie.
Yeah.
And I don't think... No, definitely. There has never been a death in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that hit that hard. Just because they haven't allowed themselves to do that, I don't think.
Yeah.
You know, even, especially now, because, like, the only other one of that size really is Agent Coulson, and he came back to life on the TV show.
Right.
So, and even then, I don't think they ever did as good a job with that character as they did with this guy in one movie. And just, I think the way that kind of united all the different characters, and that, I think on a character level, this is just a beautifully written script where... even for certain characters who didn't have a specific relationship with Yondu, his death at the end of that movie, you can see, kind of solidifies every single person's arc of Nebula realizing, Gamora realizing how much she cares for her sister, and Nebula kind of being humanized by this entire experience, and Drax finally kind of softening in his relationship with the Mantis, and of course obviously what it says about Peter Quill, and then I think especially, like, the last shot of this fucking movie before we go to credits is a tear running down Rocket Raccoon's cheek. And I think if you had told anyone in the world 5 years ago that Marvel would have, I think, maybe their most powerful ending by having the CGI raccoon cry over the death of a blue man, you wouldn't believe that. But it's
the blue man with the red fish fin on his head,
yes,
please.
Yes. It's one of the best things Marvel, I think, has ever done, is the ending of this movie. And that scene, and I think it speaks to... You can have all the effects in the world. It's a good script.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, a lot of damn good character writing. You know, this On some level, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 feels like a couple collected episodes of Guardians of the Galaxy, the TV show.
Sure.
I think there actually is a Disney TV show. I don't mean that. I just mean like...
Or like Guardians of the Galaxy, the Telltale series.
If we want to go there, sure.
There's a trailer for it in front of my movie.
Yeah, but like where you have the room to just let the characters breathe and grow in the way TV does better than movies generally. Yeah. And, just some of that stuff like... I thought it was really impressive where they were able to take some of these characters. And I'm talking about dramatic stuff, but if you want to do comedic stuff, Baby Groot. Baby Groot is a comedic masterpiece.
Baby Groot's hilarious. I mean, I think across the board, that was the thing. That was kind of my favorite part of the movie was... I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was very funny. This movie I thought was hysterical. Like, there's like... But like never in a way that felt like it was undercutting the drama. It's like very similar to Guardians of the Galaxy 1 where it uses the humor to accentuate the dramatic moments in really good ways and to like sort of, a lot of the characters are funny characters by their nature, so they need to be funny in a movie. And so there's just some fucking scenes and some lines I thought were so good. Like the Mary Poppins line that Yondu has at the end is unbelievably funny. I think like maybe my favorite one, because again it like speaks so much to the character, is when Star-Lord is sort of like learns how like the extent of his powers now, and he's like, so I can make anything. It's like, basically, yeah, I'm gonna make some weird shit. And like that line like is so good because it's a really funny reaction, and but the reason why it's such a funny line is because you know the character as well as you do, and you immediately imagine all the stupid shit that this dude would make now that he has the power to make whatever he can come up with in his mind.
Yeah, and here's the thing. When I rewatch Guardians 1, I do think that movie has some tonal growing pains where I think it generally mixes the humor and drama well, but sometimes a joke will come in and I'm like, I don't know if that melded perfectly. And I thought I totally saw like artistic growth in this movie of like, there was never a moment where I thought this movie was like tonally out of whack. I laughed consistently, but you could have, the Mary Poppins joke is right next to some of the heaviest stuff in that movie.
Yeah.
And I just think their ability to go pinball all over the map with that stuff is really on point in this. Like to like a Joss Whedon degree in like Avengers 1 and 2. And this is a significantly better sequel than like Avengers 2, for instance.
Yeah.
And, just, there's, some of that stuff is great. Let's talk about the opening.
Okay, yeah.
Because we'll talk about the Kurt Russell opening in a second. But like the opening credits here, where obviously James Gunn's like, I made a really good opening credit sequence in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I got to do it better this time. And I don't think you could do it any better than having basically this super complicated one take with Baby Groot dancing to Electric Light Orchestra while the credits come up. Masterful.
Yeah, it's like maybe the most complicated action sequence in any Marvel movie, and it's like basically used as a joke for your opening credit sequence. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, because it's an action sequence that we're not seeing,
Yeah.
We're seeing it from the level of Baby Groot very self-consciously dancing for the camera.
Yeah.
I love it. And also that, that's essentially also a character introduction for us, because one of the super interesting things here is that this is not the Groot from the last movie.
Yeah, he like Baby Groot does not just mean he is small, it's like his development has reduced to like a childlike state, which I thought was not something I necessarily expected they were going to do in the sequel, because we've known for a long time that it was going to be Baby Groot. Because they sort of teased that at the end of the first movie. And I just didn't think, my mind didn't go to, he's also just, this dumb and little and goofy and weird because he's got a little tiny tree brain or whatever, central nervous system Groot has. Because in my mind it was just like, oh, it's just Groot, but he's small. And then eventually over the course of the movie he's going to get big or something. It's like, no, he's just Baby Groot for the whole movie, and he's weird and silly and cute.
And it's great. And I think it speaks to some of the things I like about this movie so much is that it's not a status quo, hit the reset button, let's do what we did last time again kind of movie. And I think Baby Groot is emblematic of that. I've read interviews with James Gunn where he said, my assumption was that I would just let Groot grow up and he'd be Groot again for this movie. And then I realized that doesn't do anything for the character or for the other characters. It does nothing if he's just the same again. And so having him be Baby Groot does not get like an emotional arc in this movie in the same way other characters do, but him being the baby of the group brings out so many other shadings of particularly Rocket, but also Yondu and Drax and everyone else he interacts with. Just the way the different members of the team will put Groot on their shoulder or something like that, and you can tell they've had to kind of rethink their team dynamic because of it. All of that, it adds so much, and it adds all these new vectors of humor, because one of the best standout comic scenes in the movie is in the middle when they ask Groot to go get the head fin for Yondu, and it's just this long montage of Groot messing that process up to the point where, like, if this was executed any less well, you would say this is interminably long.
Yeah.
But the interminable length of it is what's funny.
Yeah, no, it definitely works very well. Because it does hammer home for, like, right, okay, yes, he is a baby. Like, he's just a little baby tree. Like, it's not his fault. He's not trying to be funny. He just can't understand. He can barely understand language. Like, give him a fucking break. He's a baby.
And, I just think some of the stuff it brings out in Rocket over the course of this movie where I think Rocket has a fascinating arc in this film where it's basically him, again, kind of something wrote on paper, but realizing how much he loves and cares for this family he's built. And, being kind of a parent to Groot through all of that. And, like, Rocket, of course, obviously will never leave this little tree behind. He would give his life for this little tree. Yeah. But he does it in his own, Bradley Cooper Rocket way.
Yeah, very cantankerous, sort of grumpy raccoon.
And you get a lot of, just great stuff out of it. So, yeah, I think one of the things I thought about this movie also is that this is one of the very, very rare comic book movies that actually doesn't fall into the trap of bigger equals better. Right. For the most part, the scale of this movie is much, much smaller than Guardians 1. It's got fewer characters. The characters it does have, it gets to focus on in a lot more depth. Like, they add more characters to the main team, but that's
not that many. Like, it's basically just Mantis, like, because they put more, like, of a spotlight on some characters, like the Karen Gillan's character and Michael Rooker and stuff. They put more of a spotlight on them than were on them in the first movie. But as far as new characters getting introduced, it's like the villain, because obviously, and Mantis.
Yeah, but that's it. Like, oh, and some of the gold people, the Sovereign.
Sure, yeah, but they're not like much characters.
But like, if you look at Guardians 1, it's like overflowing with characters. That movie has Glenn Close and John C. Reilly and all these other people, and it's fun to see them all. But it's not necessarily, they're not the main attraction. And this movie very much just says, all right, who are the characters we want to focus on? They're pretty much the only speaking parts in the script. And if you have a speaking part in this movie, you are there for a reason. And I actually like the economy of this, there is not a wasted character in this movie. And that's really fascinating to me because, look, the Marvel movies are kind of built on having a shit ton of characters at this point. And most of the time that works pretty well. But you can point to, like, Avengers 2 has nothing for Thor to do. Or something like that. I don't think I can point to an equivalent for Guardians 2. I think they do really well with everything they have. Even though I think we probably think similar things about the Kurt Russell villain, that ultimately it's not the most interesting thing you could do with that character. I think even Kurt Russell gets to have a ton of fun as an actor with lots of this. So I really like that. And, the ending is, there's a big threat to the universe and everything. But again, it's not on, like, the scale that they pitch Guardians 1.
Sure. Although, it kind of is. And that's one of the things about the action sequence that really doesn't work for me is whenever they would cut away to, like, Earth and big, just, like, gelatinous glob consuming people or whatever. It feels like, this is so unnecessary. This just feels like, you don't need to show me this shit. Like, I get the idea that the giant evil planet is bad. Like, stop the giant evil planet. Like, you don't need to keep on cutting to all these other places to sort of, like, try to get the scale to get bigger. Yeah. It's like, felt like that got really tedious.
Here's the one thing I would have done with that.
Yeah.
Is I think it would have been enough if his plan was just for Earth or something. Sure. And, like, there's just this one direct connection of, like, that's Peter's home planet. He's never been there. But, like, they make it, a bunch of planets that we never really see. And I agree that it probably makes the scale of it unnecessarily large when...
And it's just distracting from what should be a very intimate sort of action climax.
And it is in most other ways,
Yeah, but it's like, but when you keep on cutting away from it, it, like, really sort of pulled me out of the character dynamic to be like, okay, I get it. Because it's sort of, I think, like, because I want to talk about the Kurt Russell character now, and then we can go back to the other stuff.
Oh, sure.
Just because I think he's, like... For me, the most problematic character in the movie in terms of, like, how he works is that it's, like... And a lot of it has to do with that sense of... he's probably going to be the villain from, like, pretty early on in the movie. I feel like they tip their hand pretty hard of, like, okay, he's going to be the bad guy at some point. Like, yes. But, like, I feel like you can have him be the villain in the movie and have all the characters fight to stop him without him being as ridiculously fucking evil as he is. And, like, that's why I think one of my biggest issues with that, like, not even just that it expands the scale of the action scene at the end of the cutting to Earth and, like, random alien planets and showing the glue, like, blob, whatever, consuming people. It's just a sense of, like, you don't need to do all of that to make this guy someone you need to stop. It's like, just having like the sort of the different time scales and the different understanding of existence of Kurt Russell, like millions of year old planet god man, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, which are all characters that like they're like kind of one of their main defining traits is like they have kind of thrown everything off and like are living entirely for the moment, and they're like these like freewheeling bandit type people. Like that disparity is enough to bring these two characters completely into conflict and like bring Star-Lord like having to sort of figure out which way he needs to fall, and then ultimately falling on the side of like the people he cares about and sort of like the living for the moment and the life that he knows and he wants. That to me is like where that conflict was, and then like bring it into like, and now I'm going to destroy all of the universe and blah 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 blah. Like, Peter, why can't he? It's like, no, like there's a much more nuanced, interesting conflict here that you could have done without like having to bog like the movie down by having to have like dig deep into Ego's like pathos or whatever. Like you could have had the similar kind of movie structure and just done that much better.
And I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think you could have done. And I think, honestly, it's not even restructuring the movie that much. It's like little things here and there, right?
Yeah.
And I think you could have done that. Like, one place where I would point that out is you have all the stuff where when they get to the planet, Kurt Russell, Ego the Living Planet, which I just love that. In the credits, I think it even says Ego the Living Planet, which is fantastic. But, you know, he explains how much he loved Peter Quill's mom and all this, and later on you find out he did this to a bunch of women and he was a player. And on one level, I actually do love that, because you can kind of, I think they tip their hand on that in the first scene, where it's a very stereotypical 80s Kurt Russell that they've de-aged, which is just apparently the parlor trick Marvel loves to play now.
I mean, they have the tech, might as well use it.
Because they do it in like every movie these days. Just take some famous actor and make them young. And I thought this was actually maybe the best of those, because it looked really seamless.
Yeah, because also like Kurt Russell Kurt Russell from the 80s is an actor I am very intimately familiar with. Like I rewatched Big Trouble in Little China for like the third time like 2 months ago. So it's like it looked very convincing.
And maybe it's just because the sheer tonnage of footage we have of him, then they could do more with it. But yeah, I mean, he's even like in bright lighting and everything. It was pretty impressive. But like, you know, I can kind of see like he's a space player or something like that. But what it undercuts is that like then like when they come back and Peter Quill figures out what's happened and all that, and he's like confronting Ego about that, they kind of try to walk this weird line where like, do they want him to be 100% evil, or do they want him to be a complex figure? And they kind of don't pick either side.
Yeah.
And I would be happier if they picked one or the other, because there's like this line about like, I did actually love your mother, and that's why I never went back, but because I wanted to be evil. It's like, well, which is it? Like, did you actually have this tie to humanity? And how does that play into your overall plan? Or is it was just all a trick all along? And if that's the case, actually, that's okay as long as you're consistent about it.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. It is the sort of the waffling back and forth that is the most frustrating about it. Because if he was just evil, you wouldn't have to sort of focus on that side of the plot that much, and it would like bring the focus completely onto the team, which is sort of what the villain Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is he's so nothing that like he just doesn't take any of your sort of mind space, and you can completely focus on the team, which is like, you know, maybe it could have been a better movie if he was a slightly more interesting villain, but there's a utility to having a like kind of completely empty villain for a movie like that. Whereas here it's like there's enough of a hint at something really interesting of like him, like, because there's a really interesting character beat in like moment to explore of him saying like, I really did love your mother, but I had to kill her to continue to be what I am, and like to continue to be immortal, I had to cut off those emotional connections. There's a really interesting space to explore there that they don't explore at all. They completely 100% just play that moment as, and I had to kill your mother because I am evil, muhaha, not like because of like whatever sort of character drama you could get out of that.
You could argue Kurt Russell is too good for the part that's written.
Sure,
because those moments, there are pockets of depth in other scenes too, like the great scene where he teaches Peter how to make the blue ball of energy, and then they wind up playing catch with it. Kurt Russell is so good in that scene, and in the later scene where he starts talk singing the song that is on the Walkman, he's so good in those scenes, and he like effectively makes you think like, okay, something's probably up with this guy, but he also seems like he could be a cool dad. Like, he's so good in those moments that I do think it undercuts kind of how generic villain he is in the end. And I don't know if that was James Gunn's intent all along or whatever. You know, what was it on the paper? What was the intent? You know, that... Because so much of this script feels kind of hyper-polished to me in how good it is with the characters. That part, you're right. I mean, it does feel less polished. And part of this to me is that I would like to see what they could do with this in a future movie where they don't have to be as centric on this, but as much as I like Chris Pratt, and I think he's so likable in these movies, and he's a great center for this, I do think Star-Lord is the least interesting character in these movies to me.
Sure.
And I don't mean that necessarily even as a criticism. He is, as weird as he is also kind of the straight man because he's the most normal from our white human perceptions.
Yeah, like he's a relatable, like he's a dude who like is obsessed with 80s pop culture. Like, everybody knows that guy.
And I do think there's maybe a limit. And again, it's only been 2 movies. If they do it a third time, it might annoy me. There might be a limit to how many times you can center the arc kind of squarely on him with that thing, because I don't think he goes as deep as some of the other characters.
Yeah.
And it's okay for this one, but I do wonder if, like, there were just some moments where I'm like, this is interesting, but I also find the most compelling parts of this movie kind of elsewhere. And then you add on that Ego kind of, as you say, waffles back and forth on what kind of, how villainous is he.
Yeah, because I think there could have also been, like, interesting space to explore by having Peter, like, buy into the God side of it, like, harder earlier, of, like, because there's something where, like, you feel like all you get for him of like trying to sort of like understand the perspective of what Ego is talking about, which again is like, you know, we're a Doctor Who centric podcast, so we're very familiar with talking about like 1,000 million year old alien entities and stuff like that. There's something about trying to like bridging that gap perspective that is very interesting in these kinds of sci-fi stories, and all you get for Peter in this movie for that is like that one moment where Ego touches him and he's like, I see eternity or whatever, and it feels like there's maybe like something more of like, what if he like had already like gone like far enough that like, yeah, he sees eternity and he's like, but he has been seeing eternity for like a day or something like that. He is like on that side of existence, and then you have to pull him back. Or it's just like more of a character arc and more of like a dynamic you could have pulled out of that relationship that they just didn't.
From like a screenwriting perspective, I guess what I would say is you want to give him a motivation there of like, what could he do with this power that he couldn't do otherwise, and just living a long time isn't enough.
Right.
It has to be specific. Like, I'm not saying do this, but like, you could do the thing in like The Flash where Barry Allen could go back and save his mom because he can travel in time.
Right.
And he has to realize why that, and in the TV show he has to realize it like 7 times, why that isn't a good thing to do with his powers. For instance, that could be like Peter Quill's motivation or something.
Right.
That's probably like too rote for that, but like something of like, what could he get out of this that he wouldn't get otherwise, and then the choice has to be, ultimately I get more out of living with my friends in the moment.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that, you know, there's, again, and some of the staging with that is really fun and good, where, you know, he kind of like gets his god powers unlocked at the end, and there's a great Pac-Man joke and things like that. But other than that, yeah, it's a little too rote, especially when you have, as I said, Kurt Russell, I think, is not phoning it in this movie.
No, he's great.
He's great. And I've seen Kurt Russell, you know, used in some of these kind of throwback kind of roles sometimes where I don't think he's fully engaged, and I don't blame him for that. But, like, this is Kurt Russell engaged.
Yeah.
This reminds me of, like, him in Death Proof or something. Not quite that good, but, like, you know, more on the Tarantino side of things than, like, a more generic use of Kurt Russell or something. So,
yeah, no, very good.
He was in Hateful Eight too, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, he's fucking great in that movie.
Yeah, he should just do more Tarantino stuff. Is the lesson there?
I just feel like we have entered this new era with Kurt Russell, where I feel like you can just rate them like his role in the movie by the quality of his beard, and it's like he's got a gray beard.
Yeah. You know, he does. And he's got great hair in the flashback.
Yeah.
I feel like the CGI artist really focused on, like, the waviness of, like, his 80s hair.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's very good.
And I love, and I actually did not realize this until I went to a Dairy Queen with my brother the other day, and we had some ice cream, that they have all this Guardians of the Galaxy promotion going on.
Sure.
But, like, the Dairy Queen tie-in, and I guess it must have been paid because there's that tie-in promotion thing.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's a phenomenal joke that all of this happens behind a Dairy Queen. There's just something about, like, that being the romance spot in 1980, and then that's where the blue stuff emerges from, that is a great sight gag.
Yeah, it's a really small part of the movie, but I thought, like, it's a really effective use of product placement, because it actually serves both as, like, a kind of a funny joke of, like, in, like, sort of centering the kind of pop culture-y part of the movie, but also just like as this visual reference for, like, it's literally it is the best or maybe the only good thing about the big goo consuming part of, like, cutting back to Earth, is you cut back to Earth in, like, modern day, and you see, like, oh right, like how different the Dairy Queen, like, building and, like, logo is now, really effectively and, like, simplistically conveys the passage of time and, like, the different eras. It's like, yeah, that's like, because you need an actual sort of recognizable sort of symbol to do that. You can't just use a fake fast food restaurant because nobody would really give a shit. It's like having an actual like recognizable. I remember old Dairy Queen. Okay, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I mean, it's, anything, frankly, to do with, like, iconography and pop culture, James Gunn does a phenomenal job with in these movies. So, yeah, good stuff. But, yeah, so there are ups and downs there. Let's talk about some other things. The use of music in this movie.
Yeah.
I thought even better than in Guardians 1. Because I love the needle drops in Guardians 1, but they are also not the deepest of cuts.
Right.
And I'm not saying these are the deepest of cuts in Guardians 2, but there are a lot more unexpected cuts.
Yeah, and I just feel like generally like they're so perfectly integrated into the scenes that they're in, and like I like that like there's a fun dynamic with like the music. Like it's not just playing a song, like the volume of the song, or like whether or not it sounds like it's diegetic or it sounds like it's non-diegetic will change throughout a scene and stuff like that. Yeah. They play with the music a lot.
They do, and the ELO song at the beginning is probably the biggest showstopper because those credits are great. But I mean, there's so many good ones throughout it, and even smaller moments like I love the new music for this movie at the end as he gets a Zune and learns it's got 300 songs.
That might be the best joke in the whole movie. That really sort of took the wind out of me in a weird way of like. Right, Zune.
See, that's
literally nobody has thought about this in about 10 years because the only time anyone ever thought about a Zune was about the 5 minutes after the Zunes came out.
Yeah, Zune was my first MP3 player.
My condolences.
And I haven't thought about Zunes in 10 years,
I don't know if I've ever actually seen a Zune, and like actually seen a Zune.
You would have because I had it at debate tournaments and stuff.
Okay, so I must have just like blocked out those memories.
I had
for the sake of my relationship with you, I must have blocked out those memories.
It's fine. I had the model he gets at the end of this movie. I mean, I got a kick out of it, but that's the thing. Zune jokes actually weren't that funny back when Zunes were a thing. We're so far past it now that you can do a good Zune joke.
It's basically the equivalent of like making a Laserdisc joke in the 90s or something.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh right, those were a thing. I like knew the one person who had. Apparently, I did know the one person who had a Zune. I knew.
Yeah. So, because my parents were cheapskates. Anyway, but like, that was a great joke. But what he starts playing is it's like a Cat Stevens song, Father and Son, and. It starts out, very soft. It's kind of a joke at first, and then the way that plays and crescendos over those beautiful final images of all the Ravagers coming and giving Yondu that big funeral. It's a great scene, great use of music, and sends you into the credits on this, really powerful emotional wavelength. And there's, I think, a lot of moments in the movie, whether the songs are used for a joke or to underline emotions or any other use, just to get you pumped. Like, there's a lot of scenes that are up, like, remind me of, like, the scene in Star Trek Beyond where they use sabotage.
Right, yeah.
Of just in effectiveness of, like, getting you pumped for an action scene. There's a lot of that in here. It works fantastically.
Yeah.
And, if I'm excited for Guardians 3 for no other reason, it's because I want Awesome Mix Volume 3.
Sure, yeah.
And
it'll be 300 songs now. They'll sell it exclusively on Zunes.
They'll sell you a Zune, kind of like the NES Mini. It'll be a Zune with just those 300 songs hard loaded on.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be great. No, so much good stuff there. We've talked about some of the characters here. We talked about Rocket. Bradley Cooper is so good as Rocket.
Yeah.
And there are, you got to recognize there are other people who go into making Rocket so great. The animators do a phenomenal job with him. He looks such a part of the scene, even though I still love he's not a cartoon raccoon. He looks like a raccoon.
Yeah, he's like properly proportioned in everything.
Yeah, and Sean Gunn, who is James Gunn's brother and actually has a much bigger role in this film as Yondu's like number 2.
Yeah.
That guy, he plays Rocket on set. And he's even credited as that. So he obviously, great job giving the actors something to play off of. But Bradley Cooper, just in the booth, that voice is so great. And I don't say this to insult Bradley Cooper because I actually like him as an actor a lot.
Right, yeah.
I think it's his best performance. I think there's something about that. I think he is so freaking good as Rocket. I mean, you can't really even tell it's him doing the voice.
Yeah, he melts into the performance in a way that's like really amazing.
Yeah. And so I love all of Rocket's stuff in this movie. Talking about other characters, like the new character, Mantis, as you said, is kind of the other significant new character outside of Kurt Russell.
Yeah, like Mantis feels like she's very directly set up as like in Guardians Volume 3, like she's going to be a Guardian.
Yeah, totally. And she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love Mantis. And, I mean, you can't talk about her without talking about Drax, who also kind of steals the show. Everyone steals the show in this movie. But, like, Mantis is great, and her relationship with Drax, who I think got the biggest laughs out of me in this.
Yeah, he's got some really great jokes. But then he also has, like, maybe one of the most affecting dramatic scenes in the movie with, like, him and Mantis, like, sitting on the planet and just sort of talking, and he's, you know, telling her how ugly she is, and then she just, like, touches him and, like, starts feeling his emotions. Because it's something that, because I had not rewatched Guardians in front of Volume 2. I had kept on intending to and just didn't find the time to. And so, like, for a bit of the beginning of the movie, I had kind of forgotten about what Drax's backstory was.
It's easy to forget.
Yeah, and so when you get to that moment, it's like, oh, right, yeah, like, this dude has been through shit. Like, like he's... Like, there's more to him than he ever really shows, and there's something that's fun about that with Drax. I think his character dynamic of he's so loud and boisterous and says everything that's on the top of his head all the time, but, like, you know... like deep down, like there is something more there that there's something so deep in him that even he's not ever going to really talk about it much, which I think that's very powerful.
Well, and just talking about how on point some of the character writing in this movie is, like, pretty much every one of Drax's big jokes has a layer to it of what Drax is thinking in that moment. Like, all of his stuff with Mantis saying, "You're really ugly, you're abhorrent to me," but that means, like he says, but there's a benefit to that because blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, it also tells you something about his character and what he values, and that he doesn't say any of this to hurt Mantis. Like, Drax is actually a super nice person. He never wants to be mean to people.
Yeah.
Even though he winds up involuntarily being really mean to people. Like, you know, his whole, like, heart-to-heart with Peter early in the movie, where he's like, his whole scene about, like, my wife was a horrible dancer. She never wanted to dance. That was it. You could be the best, most melodic song in the universe, and she wouldn't even tap a toe. And it's super funny, and then it gets awkward where he says, you know, it made my nether regions erect, or something like that.
It made my nether regions engorged.
Engorged, yes. And all of that. And it's so funny, but it's also a great character moment, because Drax is explaining something that was very important to him.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, when he says to Peter, you know, you need to find someone like you. Pathetic. And it's like you also, and you know, Peter just kind of smiles at him. You get more of their relationship. Like, the amount of, I think, economy in a lot of the writing in this movie where you can get a laugh but also something else with it, it's really impressive to me.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, Drax and Mantis embody that, I think. Nebula and Gamora, I liked all the stuff with them. I mean, Nebula definitely gets the most increase in screen time.
Yeah.
Because I just watched it, you kind of forget how barely she is in that movie.
Yeah, because she's just sort of like henchman number 2 or something kind of in that movie.
Yeah, and Karen Gillan, who we approve of on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Very good in this movie. You know, get to know more about her. I still contend Thanos is much more interesting when he's not on screen, and that follows in this movie, where, you know, just the effects of these two daughters of Thanos and how they kind of bond over the course of this film is interesting. And I still really love Zoe Saldana as Gamora, and I want to see more of her. Like, she's not like the central character in either of the first two movies, but she's really great. I'd like to see a little more with her, because I think Zoe Saldana is really good in that role.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that's another area where they could have done a bit more with Star-Lord as a character. Is like, you know, they do have like a little arc with their sort of romance, but I feel like there's more material you could have mined in there that would have made better use of Gamora in some ways, because I agree, she feels like kind of the most underused of the Guardians, like excluding Groot because of like he has like weird sort of circumstances, but of like the Guardians that kind of have like big character arcs, she feels like is the one that is like sort of the smallest.
Definitely in this one, but that said, it's not a case where like you kind of can forget Thor is in Avengers 2.
Right, yeah.
It's where when she's on screen, she's really good, and I think her moments are great, and like, you know, yelling at Star-Lord, I don't even know what cheers is, and things like that. And then I think, you know, the ending where she says there's something unspoken, and that's actually, I think, one of the best romantic moments in the Marvel movies, because it's not a, you know, there's fireworks going off and we kiss. It's just like this little recognition of like, we are important to each other, whatever kind of happens next.
Yeah.
I really like that moment and things like that. But you're right. I mean, she has less of an identifiable arc. And part of that is just that this movie has to kind of rehabilitate the Nebula character.
Yeah.
And that kind of means she's going to take more air out of the movie from Gamora.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention before I forget with this movie, I still love this franchise's commitment to practical makeup.
Yeah.
It is one of the reasons these movies work. Obviously, the Guardians films are full of CGI. There's no way they couldn't be. I think they use CGI very well and judiciously, you know.
Yeah, like, obviously you're not going to, like, have an actual raccoon on set and, like, put peanut butter in its mouth or something to get it to talk. You know?
Yeah.
Like, that would be cruel and also would not work very well.
Or you would have a Muppet, and I don't know if you could really make that emote the way you need Rocket.
Maybe the Muppet version, like, there's some area to explore there. I don't know. Maybe if they want to sort of cut the budget down a bit in Volume 3.
It would be interesting, and have Bradley Cooper just under the set shouting the lines. No. But yeah, other than that, though, most of the characters who in other movies would be CGI are people in makeup. And Drax is in makeup, and Nebula, and Gamora, and just so many of the... Mantis is in physical makeup. I think there might be some CGI enhancements on Mantis.
There's probably like a little bit on her antennas, but I assume she already had practical antennas on set anyways.
Right. So, and I think it does a world of wonder because... I'm sorry, even with the best CGI and motion capture in the world, I don't think Yondu works as a character if he's CGI. I don't think Michael Rooker could emote that way. I don't think he could have that presence on the sets in that way. I think him being a dude in blue makeup makes an absolute world of difference, and I think this franchise could teach other franchises a lot about the value of doing physical makeup. And like even... This was something the reason I really don't like the Thanos scenes in Guardians 1 is he's the only... that could just be a dude in makeup, but he's CGI and he just doesn't fit in.
Right, yeah.
Like, because he's on... Like, because the villain is kind of boring in Guardians 1, but I love his design and the makeup and stuff. And when he's, like, opposite Thanos, you just feel it of, like, that's Josh Brolin talking over a cartoon, and that's a dude in makeup, and one works and the other doesn't. And it's something I hope they can kind of overcome for Avengers Infinity War. But there is something about just the practical makeup and how much that allows the actors to be a presence in the movie that I love. Because, I mean, you look at it, the only, like, person who is not in some kind of makeup or special effects is Star-Lord. Right, and Kurt Russell for parts of the movie. And other than that, they're either in heavy amounts of makeup or they're CGI. And it's amazing how much the movie does with that.
Yes, it is nice to have like a very Star Trek-esque commitment to, aliens are just green people or blue people, and it's fine because it looks good.
It looks good, and the makeup's good. Like, Nebula is one that's super impressive of, like, the different layers of her makeup and the coloring, and that Karen Gillan is willing to sit through that. And I know she had to shave her head for the first one. I don't know if she had to for this. But, like, I mean, it looks cool. It's like one of the reasons to see these in the theater is the makeup just looks awesome. Yeah. Up on the big screen. Yeah. So, I love all of that. And then the one other character we haven't kind of talked about is the Sean Gunn character, who becomes kind of big in this, where he's... Who
also, like, Sean Gunn looks enough like Rory from Doctor Who, and then, I had a weird moment, because it's like, you have Karen Gillan, obviously, like, you know, she's in super heavy makeup, so it's like, she doesn't necessarily look like Karen Gillan all the time, but I know it's Karen Gillan. I have seen more than enough footage of Karen Gillan acting that's like, okay, that's Karen Gillan. And then you cut dude that's like, he doesn't exactly look like Rory, but he looks enough like Rory that's like, right, no, I'm not watching Doctor Who. Because also because I didn't watch it on Sunday, I definitely watched it on Saturday because I watched Doctor Who like as soon as I got home from Guardians of the Galaxy, so I was in a very good Doctor Who mindset.
See, when you said that, it confused me because where I know Sean Gunn from is he's a series regular on Gilmore Girls. He's in like every episode of that show. I've never seen that show. So. And one of the main characters' names is Rory, but it's not Sean Gunn. So it's like, But I mean, he is, if you watch him on Gilmore Girls, he is a very gifted comic actor. And I love that, and he's in a couple moments in Guardians 1. You kind of blink and miss him, but he is Yondu's like number 2 in that also. And I love that his brother James gave him a bigger part in this because he's really funny. And he has some great moments. And like his whole little emotional arc where he accidentally started a mutiny against Yondu and then feels really bad about it. It just works. It's another thing. He gets a moment at the end of the movie where Star-Lord gives him the arrow. Yeah. And it leads to a great post-credits scene where he accidentally stabs Drax. Which is probably, I think, the best of maybe the 5 or 6, however many they had. But like,
I liked Teenage Groot a lot.
Teenage Groot was great.
That was a very good scene.
Yeah, those were pretty good. But it's kind of amazing that they can pluck that character kind of out of obscurity of the first movie and be like, you know what, this guy deserves to be part of the team as well. And I do love how much by the end of this movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy have grown. You know, they now have the Sean Gunn character, and they have Nebula, and she's off, but she'll fight with them again, of course. And you have Mantis, and you have Yondu in spirit, and they're all part of this family now, and that almost doubles the size of who the team technically was in the first movie. Yeah. And beyond that, every character feels like they're in a different place. You know, I think the Empire Strikes Back comparison is good beyond just structurally. This feels like a second chapter where the characters are not the same people by the end as they were at the beginning. And I value that a lot.
Yeah, and it definitely made me very excited at the end of the movie to see like what Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is going to be like, because it does have that sense of like the status quo for these characters has changed. Like they are in a different spot. There's like you have some new people on board, and like enough hanging threads with like Nebula still out there and stuff to like really be excited about where a sequel could go.
And, they've already confirmed they're going to do Volume 3. James Gunn's going to write and direct again. That will be the only Marvel trilogy that was written and directed by the same guy all the way through.
Yeah.
And I think that's so exciting to me because,
it's kind of hard to envision a Guardians movie without him in a way.
Exactly, and I think having that consistent voice through and I think that voice evolved and improved in this movie, and I assume it can again. That's really exciting. Yeah. And the other Marvel series, have kind of gone in fits and starts with that, and some of them have found their groove later, like getting the Russo brothers to do Cap, and that worked perfectly, and they're going to take over Avengers, and I assume that'll be a smooth transition. But there is a really exciting thing to be said for, we're going to have like this Guardians trilogy at least, all done by James Gunn, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and it does, I think, help that this movie, like with the first one, is able to, for the most part, just completely exist in its own weird corner of the Marvel Universe, and it's like, it gets to very much just be like, we are doing our thing. They say like the word Infinity Stone, I think, once in the whole movie, and it's like,
but it's in the context of the plot for this movie.
Yeah, it's in the appropriate context, and it's like it's not used as any way to set up other stuff, which I'm generally fine with in the other Marvel movies, and sometimes like when it's done well, I'm really excited by it. And I like, though, that Guardians is just allowed to be its own thing and be weird, because that's just going to make it all like the crazier when these characters do cross over with the normal Marvel characters and the Avengers, the Infinity War stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It is kind of striking just how much this movie doesn't try to pay lip service to the other Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
Because, like, I do think that's an issue with Guardians 1 in some parts of, like, the collector scene. There's, like, no other way to read that scene other than this will come up later.
Right.
It just doesn't quite work for me as its own thing. The Thanos scenes are the same way, and so you do have these distractions, kind of like you do in an Iron Man 2 or something like that. And it no way ruins the movie for me, but they're just these little distractions. And Guardians 2 is just much more, it gets to be much more on point for that reason. And I like that. I like that it gets to be its own thing. And I'm also super excited to see what the heck they're going to do, because pretty much everyone who was in this movie is in Avengers Infinity War. If you look at the cast list, down to Mantis. They're bringing everyone into that movie.
Great.
And the thing I'm most excited to see in Infinity War, weirdly, might be how the fuck they do the credits. Because that movie will have so many actors. Like, Chris Pratt gets to be top billed in Guardians of the Galaxy. Right. He could conceivably be billed, like, 27th in Infinity War.
Yeah, because you know how a lot of these movies like to do, like, the sort of two-staged credit scenes where it's like you have, like, the first credits that it's, like, all the big names from the movie, like, with, like, this really elaborate credit sequence. Yeah, for Infinity Wars, it's going to be like that, but it's going to be 5 minutes long and, like, every single actor in the movie.
It's like when, if you watch the, like, CW superhero show crossovers, the credits when they have to do those episodes are hilarious because they have to list the entire main cast for the show and then a special guest star list, which is the main casts of pretty much every other show, and it goes on through like an entire act of the episode of every actor on all the
It's just like white text flashing at the bottom of the screen constantly.
We know Robert Downey Jr. will be top billed, and other than that, I'm actually kind of interested in like what will the poster for that movie look like?
Jesus, yeah.
You get like all 4 Chris's in that movie, I think. You know,
it's just an endless stream of. It's actually something that I was talking about my family with because we saw this movie together. You know, Kurt Russell is in this movie. With something we haven't talked about, Sylvester Stallone has a small cameo that is very good.
He's very good, and again, like a character who emotionally brings weight to it through his relationship with Yondu.
Yeah, but. So, what actors have not been in a Marvel movie yet? Was sort of the where can they go? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's an easy one. Like he hasn't been in one yet.
Yeah,
but even like David Hasselhoff has a really funny little tiny cameo in this movie. So it's like it'd be you'd have to do a little bit of justification to use him again. I feel like the Marvel movies have used every fucking working actor in like Hollywood at this point.
Well, and honestly, this is going to sound silly, but it's true. The people who haven't been in them are the people in the DC movies.
Right.
And that's like a specific, you probably can't... That's like the one Chris you can't use is Chris Pine because he's in Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And so you probably won't get him. Like, there are smaller actors, like Josh Brolin is, I guess, going to be in Deadpool 2, although that's still a Marvel-esque movie. It's just not part of this main MCU. But yeah, they kind of, as you say, there's the characters, there's the people like Patrick Stewart who are in non-Marvel Marvel movies, like the X-Men.
Yeah.
But especially if you include those, I don't know. I don't know.
It's everybody. Like,
It's everybody.
Everybody has been in one of these movies at some point in some way, or is going to be and hasn't yet.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and especially when you consider like the names of the day, they're getting a lot of those with like Benedict Cumberbatch and Brie Larson and people like that. So
yeah, or like people who feel like their careers are sort of launched a bit by this like Chris Hemsworth and stuff like that. Or two of the Chris's really.
The other Hemsworth,
three of the Chris's.
Yeah,
yes, and the other Hemsworth.
Liam has not been in one of these, I don't think yet, so you could get him. I feel like you could get, you could go for like certain like female actors. We haven't gotten Meryl Streep or Helen Mirren in one of these yet.
Not yet. Like,
but
there's got to be some villain roles lined up.
Yeah,
for them.
and you laugh, but Glenn Close was in Guardians 1.
Exactly.
And, I know Glenn Close isn't quite on the level of Helen Mirren and Meryl Streep, but you could do that. I want Judi Dench in one of these at some point. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here's the real question. How much of the Harry Potter cast can we get into Marvel? Because that's like, they're like the Marvel of that side of things.
Right,
It's
yeah.
Like they have
on
every
the other
British
side of the pond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could do that. We haven't had...
You could just find some way to just sort of like have Disney buy Harry Potter, and then it's like, there you go. It is a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe now.
Harry shows up in Infinity War.
Fuck it. That would be the most amazing cliffhanger at the end of part 1. The doors open up and
But here's what it has to be. It has to be Daniel Radcliffe with his rockin' beard.
Yes,
and
it's
they
like
open like a cell in like a dungeon, and it's fucking Harry Potter with a beard.
Like here's how they set it up. It's like Doctor Strange. Like they're talking about like they've had one big conflict with Thanos at the end of the first one, but they're like asses stomped. And it was like. We need to sort of regroup. We need to try again, and then like sort of everyone's picking their spirits back up. It's like, but who can we get to fight with us? And then Benedict Cumberbatch, I know one person, and it's like and then it's like cut to like a jail cell. Fucking, he's in Azkaban or whatever. Oh my god, it's so good. I don't even like those movies that much. That would be so good.
Now we have to imagine what's the scenario where Warner Brothers sells Harry Potter to Disney.
Man. I also like the idea of that Thanos somehow corrupts Ron, and so Harry has to fight Ron at the end as well. That's sort of like his big character arc. That's how they get him back in. It's like, you have to save your best friend.
All right, we've gone off track. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is really good, and a fine start to Marvel's big year, because we also have Spider-Man and Thor to look forward to.
I'm so excited for Spider-Man.
Saw the trailer for that before Guardians.
Yeah, me too.
Good trailer.
It's a very good trailer.
Man.
That Star Wars trailer also plays really well in a theater. That was something that I appreciated a lot about it, because I'd only seen it on my computer before.
Yeah, that trailer, because in the theater I was in also, I didn't realize the Last Jedi trailer uses its base very well. Yeah. And some of those images are great. All right, well, cool. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about Doctor Who.
Doctor Who?
All right. This episode, we have episode 4, Knock Knock, written by Mike Bartlett, who has not written for Doctor Who before.
Yeah.
Our first, I believe, new writer for the season.
Yes.
Because everyone else had written at least once. So new writer, and we've got it's kind of a horror movie setting, and spoilers from this point out. But as I said, this is probably my favorite of the season so far. It is a weird episode.
Yeah.
It's very different even from other Doctor Who horror episodes. It starts with this rock music montage where Bill and one friend and then 4 people she doesn't know, which feels very true to life, are going around looking for an apartment, and they wind up at this haunted house, and you're like, we know where this is going. But even then, I thought some of the things the episode did, specifically with the Doctor early on, went in directions I didn't quite expect.
Yeah.
Where, you can tell, I feel like the way Peter Capaldi plays it, he's there partially because he's, interested in this house, but it's also he's bored and Bill doesn't need him at the moment, and he just kind of wants to hang out with her.
Yeah.
And he'll kind of I feel like even if the house hadn't been haunted, he would have stuck around and shoved himself in there. So even before the episode gets quote unquote scary, I think you get a lot of interesting character beats.
Yeah, I think this is another this is the 4th episode in the row where it feels like they have just done such a fantastic job of really sort of digging into Bill as a character and exploring her in ways that feel like you kind of feel like the other companions have had an episode like this, but when you really think about it, they haven't. And it again feels like this is sort of Stephen Moffat doing an RTD style companion, but better than RTD ever did it. Of getting into her having like her life outside of the TARDIS and her having friends where like, you know, RTD had like, you know, the mom characters for a lot of his companions and stuff like that. But there's something like very real and relatable about this whole scenario that you spend like a good like first third or fourth of the episode just entirely with Bill, like trying to, with her friends, trying to get a house and just with her. And there's like nothing more like extraordinary about it. It's this very relatable real life sort of scenario. And there's something really sort of fun about that, and it allows you to just have this time with that character in a way that Doctor Who just, by the very nature of the show, tends to not allow you to sit with the main characters in a very normal, everyday circumstance, because of course it's going to have to get interrupted by some sort of like weird alien invasion or something. And this episode has a really long stretch of just sort of like letting you sit with the characters and slowly building the tension of the haunted house stuff, because even when things do start getting scary, they start getting scary in like a way that is kind of like relatable and like is still sort of real world. And it's not until you get pretty deep into it that totally like sort of paranormal like alien shit starts going down that like gets more into the sort of the traditional Doctor Who fare. But by the time you've gotten there, you spent so much time with the characters and so much time with the sort of more traditional horror movie haunted house sort of setup that it has a very different flavor to it.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's no better symbol for how the episode does that than the moment when Bill is in her like old apartment and she's got all her stuff and she's like, okay, perfect. And then the TARDIS comes in and you realize the Doctor is helping her move by using the TARDIS.
Yeah.
And I love just the way Peter Capaldi plays like a specific kind of bemusion with that of like, she's like, why don't you just like rent this out? This would be a great way to make money. And he's just very confused by that whole idea.
Yeah.
But he, you know, Bill's his friend and he wants to help out. And he also, you can tell, the Doctor gets lonely really easily.
Yeah.
That's why he always travels with people. And this Doctor, you can tell, is just kind of stir-crazy for a variety of reasons, as we see more of at the end of the episode. And I just love that, you know, he wants to help Bill move, and then he wants to just kind of go hang out with her and her friends. And there's something... It's actually a mode I don't think Peter Capaldi's gotten to play yet, which is childlike, in some sense, of him in the early part of the episode. Is just like, again, he is proven right, and he has good reason for being suspicious of the house, but he's also being kind of petulant about it. And it's a great mode for him to play.
Yeah, and it's something else like with the Doctor that I love this part of the episode is how all the other students know him because he's a professor from the university, and there's something about like, again, that's another thing you just never really see in Doctor Who is other people, like even if they don't know him well or anything, obviously they don't know anything about him like being an alien and shit, but just knowing kind of who he is and being like, oh, hey, Doctor, what's up? Like, that's a really interesting thing to happen for, like, the show just, like, never fucking does that. It was this weird sort of moment when that happened for the first time in the episode where I'm like, oh, right, like, these characters kind of know who he is. And that's really fun of him already having this sort of, like small unspoken relationship with all these other people that allow him to sort of, like, bounce off of that already and not have to do the, like, 1 millionth Doctor Who, I'm the Doctor, blah, 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 blah scenes, you know? Yeah, it's just like they already know who he is.
Even though you do get the hilarious flailing of Bill trying to come up with like a second layer excuse of like, he's my grandfather.
Yeah.
And all the jokes that come from that, including just the unspoken, nobody believes it for super obvious reasons.
Yeah.
That Peter Capaldi and Pearl Mackie do not look like they're related, you know?
Yeah, but I love that it has managed to sort of maintain this running joke through, like, somehow through all of the Peter Capaldi era that he can't tell what age people are just by looking at them and, like, thinks that he looks young. Like, yeah. I love that, like, that has managed to maintain to be a character point even, like, after sort of, like, the Clara era and stuff. It's, like, a small detail about him. And I like a lot because it does make sense when you think about, from his perspective, like, he, you know, he's, like, never looks old or always looks old. What does it mean when he's on his 12th body, you know? So it's like, it's a fun little character point.
It just, 12 is that kind of guy.
Yeah.
He just doesn't, it's one of the many ways in which he misunderstands humans on a very superficial level, you know? Like, he tends to have a deeper understanding, but on those superficial things, he's really shitty at it. And
it comes up later in the episode when he doesn't sort of recognize how old the one dude is, and then sort of, it's a smart little sort of point they make.
Gives Bill more agency, which they've been really good at.
Yeah.
No. And one other exchange we forgot about in this earlier part of the episode is when they're doing the moving in the TARDIS, we get another, scene on the TARDIS with them talking, and not nearly enough of the TARDIS set in this episode.
No, unfortunately.
I'm kidding. But
I mean, you have to sort of lean off of it a little bit so that when you use it in a heavy way in the next episode or whatever, it has more impact.
When we get our TARDIS bottle episode, which could be a phenomenal episode with this set.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, anyway. But you get the whole conversation where he finally says the words Time Lord in front of Bill, and then they have to have that conversation, and it's very funny. They're like, do you wear, like, the hats? And he's like, no, it's really, like, big...
Yeah, no more big collars. Yeah.
That's really funny, and, like, he mentions casually regeneration, which is kind of turned into a joke here because he kind of lays off on it. You can tell he maybe wants to tell her something, but doesn't. And then, of course, you can kind of read into that what you want of. Is that foreshadowing? Is it not? There have been enough of those little moments so far that it's kind of interesting. I want to see where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also in that scene I just love, because it's something that the show just sort of lets the Time Lord thing go, I think, a little bit too much. Because for, like, something that you would think that the show would have, like, constantly made, like, jokes about it, it's very rarely done. It's, like... such an insanely stupid name for a species. Like, I love Doctor Who to death. Time Lord, like, it just doesn't even make sense as a name for a species. And to the point where, like, it is generally sort of, like, retroactively regarded as being like, it's not the species, it's, like, the class, and, like, they're really Gallifreyans, but they just like calling themselves Time Lords. It's, like, that tends to be how most Doctor Who fans go for it, but I just like that this show gets to take a moment to be like, yes, that's what they're called. No, it doesn't make sense. It is pretty stupid. I like that, like, again, it's something that you feel like the show should have had this scene a billion times in its history. It almost never happens in a way that it feels sort of miraculous.
Yeah, and it's also funny because the way they point it out, they put, like, Peter Capaldi in the position of a lot of, I think, Doctor Who fans, where at first Bill questions him, and he's like, well, that's just our name.
Yeah.
And they're like, right, it's really stupid. Yeah, and then we all get to laugh at it.
Because you just hear the word Time Lord if you've seen all of Doctor Who, and you're like, yeah, what is this Time Lord? Yeah, like, it doesn't even register as a word anymore for me. So it is when you have that moment where it's like, oh, right, she's never heard that before. Because that's another thing that, like, when companions tend to, like, never make a point of that, or sometimes, like, you never see when they find that out. Like, it's just... at some point in between episodes or something, they learn that, and it's never sort of made a point of. And I do like with Bill, they like make a deliberate effort, like kind of every time a little tiny piece of lore or something drops, to sort of highlight that this is the first time she sees it or understands it, and keep the show kind of as much from her perspective as it is from the Doctor's.
It does feel like Stephen Moffat and company have had kind of a rule of thumb with Bill of questioning their assumptions at every turn of, like, how would a normal Doctor Who companion react? And what can we do beyond that? Like, and it does feel like that's been a conscious choice with that character of every time of, like, and she's, you know, more than just a normal Doctor Who character. She's a very well-drawn character. But, you know, you have all these moments that are kind of the traditional Doctor Who moments where she has to see the TARDIS or she has to learn he's a Time Lord or any of those moments. And how can we do this in a way that the show in its 50-year history hasn't done yet?
Yeah.
And I think they've been very good and actually disciplined about that.
Yeah.
In a way that makes it fresh and exciting.
Yeah, because it feels like the main methodology they've taken with that is just sort of ask, what is the kind of thing a sort of normal-ish person would react in this situation? Obviously, like, you know, a normalish person would, like, their mind would completely explode at, like, everything that is happening. But, like, taking that aside and being like, well, how would someone react to seeing someone die in front of them for the first time? Yeah. Like, how would someone react when you find out that this alien is called a Time Lord? Like, you would remark to it in certain ways that most Doctor Who companions just don't. In a way that it's fine for those stories, but it's really fascinating, particularly as a fan of the show, to see all those things approached from this very sort of, like, different lens.
And maybe a more substantive question for this episode, to get, like, back into the main plot. How does a companion, you know, react when they take a day off from traveling with the Doctor?
Yeah.
And most companions, you get into this thing of, like, they just want to get back in the TARDIS. I like that Bill, in this episode, she's really happy to just be at the house and, like, I'm doing something else today.
Yeah.
And it's not because she dislikes the Doctor or any of that. It's just that frankly, she's a well-adjusted human being. And she just kind of needs a day not fighting aliens. And I like that. Like, she's in there's that little moment where she's in her new room and she's showing the picture of her mom around.
Yeah.
I assume her mom is dead. Have we known that before?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because she's an orphan because she's adopted by that one woman from the first episode.
Okay, yeah. That first episode goes through so many character details so fast, I've forgotten some of them.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, anyway, she shows the picture around and she kind of lists off her adventures with the Doctor so far. And again, that's a beat, I don't think I've seen a companion play of, like, the relief of, like, today I just get to hang out here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice, and it's interesting in that the Doctor kind of, in the way he kind of forcefully tries to insert himself into the episode, part of Bill's annoyance with that is just like, we're not having a Doctor Who adventure. You know, let's I'll have an adventure with you later, Doctor, you know, and that's just an interesting beat. And Pearl Mackie plays, I mean, whatever is thrown at her really well, but that I thought was particularly good, where she just kind of gets to be a normal human in this episode for a couple minutes, and she's really good at that.
Yeah, no, it's fun because it's something that I feel like Moffat has kind of been doing since Clara was introduced into the last half of season 7, is sort of saying, like, why is it that when the Doctor has companions that they have to just live with him all the time? Like, how is that the relationship? Like, how is that assumed? Because it's like how it's basically always been done. And I think I do ultimately prefer the way that it's kind of come out. It's like, yeah, it makes more sense for it to be like a thing you do sometimes, and you don't just pick up everything and just live on the TARDIS for like 5 years or something. That's kind of like a weird expectation for all these characters to have. And I like, Bill sort of like trying to build this distinction in her life between like, I'm just trying to go find a place. Like, I have this whole thing going on. Like I said, I will go on a Doctor Who adventure. Some other time, I'll go see like kids drown in fucking icy lakes with you on Tuesday, Doctor. Like, this is me time.
Yeah, for a season that so far has been 4 very standalone adventures, it's been spectacularly well paced through those 4 of like feeling varied, and like we get more from the characters every time, and that one kind of naturally progresses into the next, even though they've all been very different episodes and adventures. I really, again, kind of like it's an RTD season done just kind of spectacularly well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the house and the horror, because the joke we kept making last season, in season 9, was that it felt like Stephen Moffat and company were writing specifically to challenge Peter Capaldi, that every episode was like, what haven't we made this guy done yet?
Yeah.
Culminating in a one-hander where he has to do 50 minutes of TV on his own.
Yeah.
And this season, I feel like the specific challenge hasn't been to Peter Capaldi or to Pearl Mackie, although they're doing great work. It's been to the production design team.
Yeah.
Where every episode is like, can you do this semi-impossible thing on TV for us? Yes? Awesome. Let's write that. Yeah. And it's just like, this one might be the most impressive yet, of like a haunted house, but like, an old, like, English haunted house. And how can you make kind of mundane things in it scary? And I think in this one, just the production design, and the other one in particular in this episode, the sound design, it's just fantastic.
Well, it's one of those instances of that can get a little bit tedious in New Who, but when it's done well, it's just done well. Of the take something that is sort of everyday and say like, well, what if there's something evil and mysterious and alien behind it? And I love with this one, because I think one of the reasons why it works is they don't like try to hammer home that that's what it's doing. It just very sort of quietly is doing that, of like, why are old creaky houses scary? Like, and what is making the creaking? And like, that's like a really interesting thing, because I mean, most times if a horror thing or whatever is asking that question, the thing making the creaking is fucking Michael Myers upstairs or something like that. And this is like, it's the house is making the creaking. Like, the house is the monster, basically.
To your point, if this was a Matt Smith episode, he would have a 5-minute monologue about it.
Exactly.
Of like, why do the houses creak?
Yeah.
And things like that. And I'm not making fun of Matt Smith. That's just how those episodes worked.
Yeah.
He was very good at it.
But here, like, they even, because they have a couple of like scenes where they make a little knock kind of joke or whatever, but it's like, it's one of those things that's like so perfect about Peter Capaldi's performance that they've done so well in this era of doing the thing. It's like, it is kind of joke, but nobody's playing it as a joke, and he's just sort of like says it, and it's just so flies under the radar that like it doesn't even register as like, oh, that's like the title of the episode, or like that's like this whole thing. Like, there's this whole like linguistic construct in the English language behind the phrase knock knock. You don't even really think about it that much, and the way they just sort of like very subtly use that throughout the episode is so natural.
It's actually, I think, a testament to the episode that I keep forgetting the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Because it's got that cliched, like, knock-knock title. And I keep forgetting that because the episode goes so far beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But no, I love, like... Because the episode ramps up its horror really subtly. Like, it doesn't just start out and like, ooh, scary. It's the time you spend with it, and the more you hear those creaks and the wind in the house and everything moving around, until you start to realize, oh, I'm actually kind of scared by this. And I think the moment that sealed it for me is the scene where the landlord comes back, but it's specifically the doctor munching on the potato chip.
Yeah.
And the sound design in that scene, and the way the doctor is being a shit and just exponentially heightening the horror for everybody, and probably consciously doing it. I realized, like, oh, we're in the grips of something here, and this is Doctor Who operating on, like, I think in a lane of horror I haven't quite seen it inhabit before.
For me, I think the key moment in the episode for like building the suspense is so good. It's so smart. Is like the moment where it like where the episode fully tips its hand of like there's something more going on here is actually like earlier than the episode than it maybe would seem, where they have all moved into the house and it's like the first night they're there and the one kid goes into his room and like the door closes and you hear like enough noise to be like, okay, that kid's probably dead or something happened in this room. And then it's like, but then the next day, it's like in the morning, and all you know is like the violin sounds are coming out of that room, and like the one guy says, "Oh yeah, he does that all the time," like whatever. And it's like 5 to 10 minutes go by with like that's just happening, and every once in a while when they're in that area of the house, you just hear violin music coming out, but you know something happened in that room. Right. That kid's dead, something like you just don't know what happened, and that like small mystery that is there for so long that they don't sort of pull the curtain back on that one for so long. That to me is like the sort of the master stroke of like what is building the suspense throughout the whole thing is because it's just such an eerie thing also of like the violin music coming out of this room where the door is locked and you're just like, just open the door and see what's in there, you idiots. Like, just don't just assume the dude's safe. Like, he's been in there for like a whole day. And then when eventually Peter Capaldi like makes that point, it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure he's totally fine. He's been locked in his room making violin music for over 24 hours. He must be perfectly safe.
And yet, you know, from like a storytelling standpoint, we can make fun of the people for that. But it's not the same as like Friday the 13th, like kids being dumb.
No.
It's mostly just like, if you have a house with 5 other people and someone goes to their room and just plays music, you don't really think about it.
No,
and that's what makes the whole villainous plot here so insidious, is that if the doctor weren't there asking questions, all of them would die and no one would ever know.
Yeah.
And like, they would just kind of sink into the wood. And all of that is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's just, the way they build the tension up through the first half or 2/3 of the episode is so well done. And it's so, like you said, while Doctor Who uses horror as a sort of motif or aesthetic a lot, is like a long tradition of the show. I mean, even dating back to like the Daleks in episode 2. Like, it's something that they've never really gone this hard in terms of just making a horror story. And it is all about, for the vast majority of the episode, it's just about ratcheting up that tension in the way a horror movie, or like if like it was a, like, I don't know, like a horror X-Files episode or something like that. That's like, this is just like a horror story. And there's something very fascinating about that.
I very much got an X-Files vibe. I also got a Buffy vibe out of this one because of the teenagers and kind of that, you know, language that is being spoken in this. Yeah.
That teenage language.
And I like the teenage characters in this. They're not, I don't need to see them again, but like, they popped as characters enough to make you, you know, care when they died by cockroach and stuff like that. And like, you know, this is actually notable. This is the first episode with Bill where she and the Doctor split up, and we have that kind of typical Doctor Who story structure. And, you know, we have Bill with her friend, and we have the Doctor with that one kind of nerdy kid. And just, I thought the rapport both of those teams had was a lot of fun, and where that went with that. So, like, they built a good supporting cast for this episode.
Yeah. And like, another point of, like, I think what makes a lot of the teenage characters work, because they, like, you know, they very much exist in their sort of like archetype for a kind of slasher movie or whatever, sort of like the fodder characters. But I love that they didn't cast a bunch of like 20-year-old supermodels to play all the teenagers the way that like a lot of shows would. All of the, like, you know, there's like the one Scottish kid who's like really pale and he's just like a bit too tall. Like, there's like, it's like, no, like, there's a way to be tall, and it's like, oh, like, you know, he looks sort of like has a commanding presence because of how much taller he is than everyone else. And then you're like that little extra taller, just like, you just look kind of funny and like awkward. Like, he like stands, he just holds himself in a really weird way. And like, all the characters are like that. They're just like, they just look like normal sort of teenage college students, you know, and they don't read as actors or anything, and it makes them very relatable.
There's also in the acting just a lot of good general awkwardness between them, like Bill and the guy who's flirting with her, and, you know, neither of them, like, he's not really good at flirting, and she doesn't quite know what to react in this situation for a couple of reasons, and like, just all of those little moments of, because most people don't actually know each other, it just felt, you know, very natural and organic, and led to good scenes later on too. So I will say, though, this is the second episode in a row where the accents have been so thick, I have had to turn closed captioning on.
Oh, yeah. That's when you know it's a good episode.
That's when you know. Because, like, you already have Peter Capaldi and Pearl Mackie, who both have really thick accents, and even after several years of watching Peter Capaldi in this role, once in a while I do miss a line. And this episode had both of them plus kids of various, like, accent origins.
Yeah.
I did, like, for the last 20 minutes, I had closed captions on.
Yeah, I think that this was, like, a specific choice. I think Peter Capaldi, in, like, some of the scenes, played up his Scottish accent even more, because there was the two Scottish kids in the cast. It was, like, him, like, being influenced by all the other Scottishness around him. Was like, he hit it up a bit.
His initial explanation of the, like, cockroach aliens,
yeah,
I still don't, I think, know what word he was using.
Dryads, I think.
Dryads,
yeah.
That's what I thought, but I couldn't quite tell. So, yeah, and I love that kind of thing when it's like, this is English, but I don't know what they're saying. I love that. So,
that's how you know it's a good Doctor Who.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, good stuff. And one of the things that I think also makes this episode special to me is that when the tension, quote unquote, breaks and you start to figure out what's going on, it didn't get less scary to me. Like their specific choice of monster, and I think the way they played some of the effects, and the way they have the wooden woman at the end, and just kind of the general tone and pace, and especially Murray Gold, great music as always. That apparently this dude can do anything after 10 fucking seasons of this show. I still felt the tension. I felt the fear. This didn't feel like some Doctor Who horror or tense, like thriller episodes where when you get to a certain point, that kind of breaks and then it's just time to explain things.
Right.
I thought they kept the atmosphere up effectively, and I found that really impressive.
Yeah, me too. And I think it sort of, if we could sort of transition to talking about this part of the episode, I thought, like, the way that they sort of handed it off of, like, it being the sort of, like, haunted house to being, like, the more traditional Doctor Who thing of, like, you have the monster, and then you have, like, the guy who owns the house, and then his mother, like, who's this wooden woman. Like, that sort of transition felt very natural to me in a way that's, like, especially the episode ultimately being, like, very Psycho-esque in terms of the sort of Oedipal complex nature behind everything. I thought, like, I like that when they transitioned into that part of the episode, they kept a certain amount of, like, the horror movie storytelling tradition alive with the nature of what the threat really was.
And on some level, they trade one kind of horror for another, because there's kind of a body horror aspect to the bugs. And what you get with that. And so it was like, it's effectively creepy. Like, if you're gonna go from the unseen force to the seen force, you have to make the seen thing scary. You know? I think they did a good job with that here.
Yeah, and then especially when they introduced the mom and used, turned into this sort of, like, wooden puppet kind of woman. Like, talking about with Guardians of the Galaxy and how good the practical effects there. I thought that, like, what they did in this episode with that was unbelievable. Like, it looked so good, and it was really just unsettling.
It did, and if you had the CG or even a more lifelike version of that, it wouldn't have been scary.
Yeah, no, it's like there's something about, like, the stiffness of it that so sold her being, like, this tree,
Yeah.
It's
and
very good.
There's no absolution to that story. Like, there isn't a happy ending with them. There's not the Doctor waves the Sonic and turns her into a real woman and all of that. There's none of that. It's she embraces the sun and they get eaten by they die. I mean, that's... It's Psycho is actually a very good comparison to that of, like, there's no happy, easy ending to that story, even though they do bring all the kids back to life at the end, which we could debate about that, but yeah.
Yeah, like with the kid thing, it feels like it would have been a very heavy sort of thing hanging over Bill for a long time. It would have been a bit too brutal to have all those kids die.
You at least had to bring the best friend back.
Yeah.
Because other than that, I think Bill, why would she ever want to travel with the Doctor again?
Yeah, but I think just I love this episode so much. All that stuff at the end, and the going back to the age thing of the Doctor sort of going through the explanation, sort of working through how everything worked, but it hits this weird roadblock that then Bill has to sort of fix for him, because she has the human perspective. It's like, no, like, this dude is, like, 70 years old. There's no way that he could be her father and, like, still be alive. I thought that's a very, like, natural way to have Bill be a part of the sort of problem-solving part of the episode in a way that companions oftentimes are not, and just sort of get left behind or, like, get, like, relegated to doing, like, a little action thing or being, like, in a comforting kind of role. She's, like, actually actively engaged with sort of solving the mystery.
And great performance by the guy who played the caretaker.
Yeah, he's a pretty well-known British actor. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he plays Detective Poirot in all these Poirot adaptations that my parents like a lot, so that's kind of why I've seen a bunch of them.
I've definitely seen him. Like, he's recognizable as a character actor.
Yeah.
But great work here, and that, he has to modulate that performance a lot near the end and pulls it off with aplomb. He's great.
Yeah, I like the sort of realization as you get like deeper and deeper into the episode, and it's sort of like the full curtain is pulled back, that you just kind of take him as being like this weird sort of cliche horror movie old man who's like, he's just sort of talks in a weird way and he's just awkward, and then you realize, oh, like he's just never grown up, like he's been trapped in this weird sort of like static relationship with his mother, which is again like the way that she's turned into wood makes that like really, and the nature of the house sort of like consuming everything and then returning to like its natural state, where it's like you just like consume these people and they turn into the house. It lends this element of sort of symbolism to just him being frozen in this relationship with his mother, never being able to grow up, and it being petrified into wood. That makes the character sort of, you don't think that he ever did anything justifiable, but it makes him sympathetic to a degree where it's like, yeah, like you've just like been stuck here and you've never been able to sort of leave this place. In particular, I thought like, it's not necessarily tips its hand as to him being a sort of child in a man's body or whatever, but I thought the moment where Peter Capaldi earlier in the episode says like, who's the prime minister? And the guy can't name it. Like, that's a really good scene of just sort of like being like, okay, who the fuck is this dude really? Like, what does the fact that he doesn't know who the prime minister is, what does that say about his real sort of like identity?
Nice little callback to the RTD years there too,
Yeah.
where one of the ones he lists off is Harriet Jones.
Yeah.
Which when they can do little things like that and just feel like, right, we have had continuity going for a while on this show now.
Yeah.
That works. So yeah.
But his whole character I thought was really well done.
This whole episode just extremely well done, and we had another Nardole light episode, and I hope that's corrected soon.
Well,
So far, it
the
hasn't bothered
preview
me.
for the next episode very much
Yes.
indicates that he will be a bigger part of it.
Yes, so that's great. Again, it has not bothered me. We're only 4 in. It's fine.
And you really also want to focus on Bill a lot and have
Yes.
her be established and developed more.
More Nardole in these last 3 episodes would have been a mistake. So, and he's in the opening credits for a reason. We will see more Nardole. But great last scene again, where Matt Lucas is, guarding the vault, and the Doctor comes down, and you can tell he's visibly shaken by, I think, we don't know what all the things are shaking the Doctor these days, but there's a couple of things on his mind, and this one is he's not hanging out with Bill because now she's with her friends. He wants to hang out with someone. Nardole is like his butler, so he can't really do that. And so whoever is in that vault is someone the Doctor feels some kind of kinship to.
Yeah.
And I feel like I know who's in there.
Yeah, I feel like this episode definitely tipped its hand enough that it's like, and
I
know.
It's
the master.
Yeah, it's the master,
It's
yeah.
definitely the master. But
shit, I was going to say River Song. No, just kidding.
It was River Song,
No.
or no, it's definitely Susan. It's so absolutely Susan.
No, it's the master,
Yeah.
and the piano thing, and that the Doctor. It's that relationship they've often had in New Who, where he wants to be the master's friend, and the master's a dick.
Yeah.
But
I think there's something that they tip their hand enough here that it feels like that's the thing that is going, because the episode after the next one is the next Stephen Moffat only episode. I'm like,
we're not waiting to the end of the season.
yeah,
for
no,
this.
I'm like 90% certain that that episode the vault is going to open and the season is going to transition to like a new sort of phase for the second half, which sounds cool.
But and honestly, what they're setting up here sounds like it could be a really good story with the master and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's something that I feel like they have gotten better each time the master has come up, to the point where then in season 9 in the premiere episodes, I thought Missy was really good in those, and I thought Stephen Moffat finally found like a good balance for that character and found like the right sort of in of the relationship between the Master and the Doctor, of them being friends from childhood that like have this weird sort of from her perspective, or like coming from her, this kind of psychotic competition and relationship with one another, but is a relationship that is difficult for humans to sort of compartmentalize and contextualize, because we don't have the framework of like eternity to sort of back it up, and there's something about the idea of playing off of that more. I think there's a lot of room that they can go with those two characters. I'm really excited to see.
And the Master has been much more of a presence for 12th Doctor.
Yes.
Than he has
she's been in all 3 seasons now,
Yeah.
assuming that, of course, this is going to be her in this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, Missy Gomez or whatever her name
Michelle Gomez. Yeah, she's
confirmed.
Yeah.
Well, and have you seen in the trailers what else?
Yeah.
So John Sim is coming back too
with a beard,
which is interesting. And actually, I would be worried about that if the show weren't on such an incredible hot streak. I just kind of implicitly trust them.
Yeah.
And also, I liked John Sim a lot in his appearances, even if I didn't like what they had him do.
Yeah,
in all
it was
his
the
appearances.
writing for those episodes was not all there.
Like, there are moments, particularly in David Tennant's last episode, there's that scene where David Tennant, like, the doctor's, like, strapped down, and he's talking to the master in that scene, and it's the whole, like, what you could have been scene.
Yeah.
John Sim is really good in that scene.
Yeah.
And a couple other scenes of that episode, like the end where he, like, faces off against Timothy Dalton and all that, that I would like to see that actor, like, get a chance to do that character with better writing, and I think that's potentially an interesting direction. So, yeah.
And I just am looking forward to seeing like how that's going to play out between the master and the doctor. And I do just love the dynamic at the end of this episode of, you know, the doctor just feels like he has been cooped up for so long that he just like needs something. So it's like, oh, I'm just going to go like hang out and chat with my old friend, even if she is a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. It's almost like, you know, Batman going to Arkham Asylum to talk to the Joker, even though he doesn't need to, or something.
Sure, yeah.
Like the beginning of The Killing Joke, you know. Yeah, it's interesting. He's got Mexican food, and he's telling the story of the episode to the person inside playing the piano. And Nardola's like, "You got them a piano," and all that. So, yeah, I expect this is all going to blow up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that's an appealing sort of thought to me of like, yeah, like that's a good sort of pace to move that mystery ahead or whatever, because if they kept on doing the thing they've done for the past couple of episodes of at the end just kind of show the vault and do those scenes, like those scenes were good for those episodes. If they had those scenes for 10 episodes instead of like 3, that would have been excruciating. It's just like, you know, it would have been like season 6 kind of fucking stop, you know.
Yeah. Or, you know, and a good comparison is season 5, where they have the cracks like at the end of every episode, but then like midway through, it's in the Angels episode actually, like episode 5.
Yeah.
You find out what the cracks are, and so it's not just the same dynamic every single time.
Yeah, it's like now it's about, well, how do we sort of like fix the problem with the cracks? It's not just about revealing what the mystery is.
Yeah, but I like this mystery a lot because it is so character driven.
Yeah,
like Peter Capaldi is so good in that last scene, even though we have very little context for why he acts the way he acts. He's good enough to sell that and let us, I think, be interested in the mystery rather than turned off by it, which I think on paper you very easily could be.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, the execution is great. This season has been great.
Yeah.
Doctor Who is good. Persona is so many good things in the world right now. In the world of media, not so much in the world of the world.
Sure,
but,
yeah,
you know.
and I mean, and with Doctor Who, the next episode is the Jamie Matheson episode, so
and he is kind of the ringer in the Capaldi era.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he comes around with. This will be his 4th episode, so
yeah, because he did 2 in the 8th season and then 1 last year. And last season, not last year. There was only 1 Doctor Who last year, but it was really good. So, all right, that's Doctor Who. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Persona 5.
Yes, it is, motherfucker.
That's a weird ass joke.
There we go.
Knock knock. Doctor Who. Persona 5. I don't know.
That's the only joke our podcast knows for the past 4 weeks. So let's just roll with it.
All right. So Sean, Persona 5.
Who's there?
All right. We've talked about the game in spoiler depth. Again, if somehow you don't know not to listen to the spoiler part, if you haven't played it, you don't want this game spoiled for you. It's really good. If you still haven't been convinced to get it, I don't know what to say to you anymore. It's great.
Yeah.
You know, Persona 4 The Golden is on sale right now on the PlayStation Store for $9. You could start there if you want. If you don't want to pay $60, play that. Listen to our Persona 4 podcasts.
Yeah.
And then play Persona 5. Persona 5 is great. We've talked about the story throughout. If you have not listened to those episodes, we have done 4 spoiler casts. Each one is 2 palaces, 2 story arcs, and we cover the whole game. And I think we're really happy we got to do that and talk about the whole story. But now we get to talk about the game in general. Again, spoilers from here on out.
I thought it was crazy when Harry Potter showed up at the end of the game. It was like, why do you, main character of Persona 5, look weirdly kind of like me?
That's true. I had not made that comparison.
That's the Japanese fan base for Persona 5 took to calling the character Potter-kun, which is pretty good. It's pretty good. There's some good Twitter images you can find if you're so inclined.
I love you, Japan.
Yeah,
I do.
It's pretty good.
All right. I can't wait for the crossover game where that's going to be the big Persona 5 crossover. Is a Persona / Harry Potter game.
Yes, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy coming at the end. It's a whole thing.
Running jokes. Anyway, so Persona 5, there are so many things we could talk about this game now that we've done the whole thing. Where do you want to start?
Oh, geez.
Or do you want me to pick a topic? Because I have.
You could pick a topic if you have them prepared.
Okay. I want to do, and we've promised this, so I thought this was a good general topic to start with, is to talk about the confidants.
Yeah.
And the social links. And, we touched on some of them throughout, but that's a hard thing to do in a spoiler cast where people complete those at different rates. So we didn't want to spoil the end of, the teacher social link when people might still be on, Ryuji's or something like that. So let's talk about the social links.
Yeah, and just to recap, we both finished the game with all social links completed. Yep. Most people are not going to do that because that's not a totally reasonable way to play the game. So
Although, let me say one thing about that in general. Persona 5, more than 3 or 4, way more than 3 or 4, feels like at the end it wanted you to do that. And just in terms of...
It has way more payoff for it than the other games do.
Yeah, maybe saying wanted is the wrong term, but you're right. There's so much more payoff of it does feel like a lot of how you see certain characters in the final stretch of the game is informed by you having seen their whole confidant, their whole social link. And I think you could still love and enjoy the game if you missed a couple, but... this is not a game where you could play through Persona 3 and 4 and miss whole social links. I don't know if you even could do that in Persona 5, but if you did, that would be bad. But not finishing them is a different thing. But so there might be minor spoilers if you haven't finished all of them.
Yeah, but that also means that we can talk about all of them, which is fun, because that would have been a little bit annoying if you hadn't finished a couple of them and be like, well, shit, now I can't talk about Charisma Gamer or whatever.
There's so many good ones.
Yeah.
And, I guess we could just start with the simple question. What's your favorite social link?
A simple question.
It's easy for me.
I guess I would probably say Sojiro, would be mine.
I would say Futaba with, Sojiro at 1A.
Sure.
Those two.
I mean, they're very sort of intertwined in a lot of ways.
They are, and I made the comparison in a previous episode to the Dojima and Nanako social link in Persona 4, where those very much feel like you're supposed to kind of play them back and forth, and I think they ping pong a little bit thematically. I think that's true here too. The Futaba one, just in particular, I think is insanely well written and just is so good at the art of making all 10 social link events feel meaty. And they move that character forward, and that by the end you really feel like you've gone on a journey with that character, even though the journey for Futaba is going to a video store,
right?
And I think that just speaks to how great that character is too. But I just thought that was a particular standout. And then Sojiro was one of the last ones I finished, which the game is also kind of built to make you do that.
Yeah.
And I think you see kind of the flip side of that story, and where the Sojiro one goes in terms of how far a social link takes a character. I think it's unparalleled in this game, at least, because Sojiro just over the course of the game changes a lot, but over the course of the social link where that family unit is forged, there's a lot of tearjerkers.
Yeah,
I also think Sojiro has the best social link event in the game.
Yeah,
and it's Hierophant 7, and I know that because I wrote it down because it was so good. But that's the event where shit goes down, and he almost implies that he's going to give Futaba away, and she gets mad, and you go talk to her, and then he comes up and reaffirms that they're a family, and reaffirms his love for you, the main character, and all this stuff. Between those two social links, there is a world of greatness.
Yeah, and then also with Sojiro, I think it might be the 9th, or maybe it's the last scene where you go to church, and
that's his last scene.
Yeah, so where you sort of visit Wakaba's grave, basically, and there's something about that scene I love so much of. There's something I really like Wakaba's character, Futaba's mom, that's obviously she's dead before the story starts, and so you never see her personally, but you get sort of images of her and stuff, and you get the sort of monstrous version of her in Futaba's palace. And I just kind of peeling back the layers of who this person was to these people that you, the main character, and you, the player, care about, but who's gone, and sort of what she has left in her wake, and I just love so much the relationship that Sojiro had with her, and how sort of complicated and mature it feels of it's this weird sort of what could have been, and maybe what should have been, and what maybe the position Sojiro probably should have sort of been with her, but couldn't at the time, and then kind of trying to make up for that in some ways by taking care of Futaba. There's something about that dynamic that I just found so powerful.
Because so much of this game is about characters learning to live with and making peace with circumstances that are not ideal, you know? And it's Sojiro not having the family he thought he was going to have. And it's, Futaba not having the parents she thought she was going to have. And it's Makoto, not having the loving sister she thought she was going to have. And all these scenarios, you apparently not having the parents who care enough about you to go send you away to the cafe dude and things like that. And you're right. I mean, that scene in the church is this beautiful affirmation of we're at peace with the family we've made, things worked out. Yeah. And I think it speaks to something I think Persona 5 identifies in the human spirit, where it's an idea I think people often reduce to the everything happens for a reason, which I find kind of an infantile way of looking at the world.
Because it's like, no fucking shit. Everything happens for a reason in the same way that, like, you know, that's how fucking physics works.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah.
But I think what the truth in that is that humans are adaptable. Yeah. And bad things happen and unforeseen things happen, but we are good at making meaning out of those things and getting to a point where we are who we are because of those things. And I think that's where a lot of the social links in this game wind up, is that place of affirming those things within themselves and within their lives. And I think that scene in the church is great, in part because it doesn't take itself too seriously. And of course, how Futaba often expresses those things is by being silly and goofing off and things like that. And that's how Sojiro knows she's happy and is content in life.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of great moments with that in both of their social links near the end.
Yeah, another thing I really love about it's kind of confusing because of how intertwined it is, but because it's in Sojiro's social link, right, where you get because for most of the social links you hit a point in them where you have to fulfill a mementos request, and for Sojiro's to do that you have to talk to Futaba and go to the palace alone, or is that for Futaba's palace?
No, you're right. It's Sojiro's, and if you hadn't completed Futaba's by then, it also halts Futaba's,
right.
And I had already completed it, so that didn't happen.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, because you try to talk to her and you can't you can't do anything with her other than go into the dungeon when you talk to her once you're at that point in Sojiro's. And it's like, that's one of the things that I love about the Persona 5 social links in particular that Persona 3 and Persona 4 didn't do, is there's like this, it feels like they exist in tandem, like very directly with the rest of the game, and they will interact with different sort of elements of the game in ways that it tended to be in Persona 3 and Persona 4. A social link like existed in its own bubble, and maybe like, you know, you had like Dojima and Nanako's kind of like intersected, but generally it was like, you know, I'm going to the daycare and hanging out with young mother, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going to tutoring. I'm going to like hang out with like the sexy weird doctor lady at night. I'm going to talk to this old lady, and it's never going to really like sort of directly intersect with the other characters I know, and it's never going to directly intersect with like the whole dungeon part of the game and the sort of supernatural part of the story setting. And in Persona 5, it's a constant thing of, oh, like I need to go in and take care of this person in Mementos, or like with Yusuke, you have some like his first and last ones. For his social link stuff, you actually are in Mementos for them, and like those scenes take place in Mementos. And for Yusuke's first one, you actually have a battle scene like in the social link. And then for a lot of them, you have different characters from different social links, or like for the main party members, will intersect and like show up in some of the scenes with other characters. So like Futaba has that happen all the time. Like in Sojiro and Futaba's obviously like there's a lot of push and pull there. And then for some of the other ones, like you'll just have like Mishima will be a part of like, maybe he doesn't pop up all the time in like Oya's social link, but he's a character that is a part of the social link events with her in a couple of places. And like that's something I really love about this game, is how your sort of team of confidants and everything feel like they exist in a web kind of together, even if they don't always interact with each other directly, and they sort of exist in a sphere that incorporates the rest of the game as well, instead of being off on their own.
Yeah, there's very few degrees of separation, right? Like some confidants have never met each other, obviously, in this game, but they all know someone who knows someone else in the web. Whereas, like, if you go to like Persona 3, nobody on Seas ever meets the monk, you know?
Right, yeah.
And I actually think that's completely thematically appropriate for that game and stuff like that. But for the story Persona 5 is telling, it's so important that that web is as close as it is. And you're absolutely right. A lot of those moments are just they make the game feel populated and alive in a way that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's something that once you get to the end of the game and you get, you know, this whole string of scenes in the last like 10 hours or so of the game that incorporate different confidants, like, you know, being at like, you know, Oya being at Shido's palace, not at his palace, but at the diet building and stuff like that, or at the very end, you know, you have all these different characters sort of interacting, but like, oh, hey, you're the Phantom Thieves person too, yeah, like go do it. There's something about that feels very natural and like exists. I like that exists diegetically in the universe in a way that in Persona 4 it really didn't, of the social link people supporting you. And it's just something that adds to the sense of these being like real people that exist in a city together. And you sort of creating these relationships is like breaking down these walls between all these different people. Because at the beginning of the game, you are sort of presented to this city of millions of people, but everyone is completely alone. And you have to sort of realize that you break down these walls and make it so that people aren't alone through effort and like by creating friendships and creating families. And it's not just something that's handed to you because everyone's in close proximity to one another. And there's something about that just feels very real and sort of is motivated very directly by your actions in the game.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's going off what you said about, in Sojourner Social Link, you have to go into Mementos. That's a common thing they do in these. And I just wanted to mention, you were talking about that, and I started thinking through that and why I like that, and then, that ties into this thing and all that. I realized, in other Persona games, we've been able to have the conversations where we're like, let's just talk about the Social Link events, and that's easy. With this, that's going to be so hard, because anything you talk about in here, you wind up thinking about an ability I got, or a Mementos thing I had to do, and then how that ties into this system, which ties into this system, where nothing is on an island in this game, and there is this interaction. So it's actually something I love about the Social Link system we haven't talked about a lot yet, is that most of them have a block that is not arbitrary, go hang out with them 5 times. It's go to Mementos.
Yeah.
And you kind of build, and it can be actually a challenge of how many of these can I build up before I can have to go into Mementos, and can I maximize the number of social links I can hit off at once and that sort of thing, and then can I go home and get a massage and then go finish a social link that I did the day of, and you can, and it's awesome. But I actually really like just focusing on you have to go into Mementos. It does feel like you get more agency in the helping of your friend. Of if you use Sojiro as an example, it's this evil uncle. It's part of the story.
Yeah.
Well, not evil, but he's not a good dude.
No.
And it's this guy who has obviously very distorted desires and his plans for this family. And you keep hearing about that, and finally you keep reaching these points in the story where the main character just says, "Hey, what's this guy's name?" Feels very mafia-esque, where you're like, "Hey, what's this dude's name? Let's."
I love that. Basically, every single Confidant or Social Link has that moment where he's very directly. And I always have 2 options. That's hey, what's his full name? It's hey, what's his name? It's they're basically the exact same option, but they have to just give you 2 of them, because it'd be kind of weird if they only gave you 1 and had the prompt just pop up. But I love that they all have that moment where he's like, okay, what's his full name? And they're like, oh yeah, he's and why did you ask that? Like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Yeah,
it does feel like it's really good.
It does feel like I'm going to go out to my car and get a baseball bat and break their legs.
Yeah.
Right? And extort them for money and then take a cut. Yeah, but ultimately you're doing something much more altruistic. And the whole thing of going into Mementos and stealing these people's hearts and all that, and then riding the ship, just, again, makes you feel like you have a little more agency and connection to these events, and adds, I think, some real emotional weight to those final scenes. And again, helps broaden that definition of the Phantom Thief, where it's not just what you do in the big 8 palaces.
Yeah.
It's all these things day to day that ultimately you change dozens of people's hearts over the course of the game. And that makes it feel a lot more organic when the Phantom Thieves are becoming a bigger and bigger deal.
Yeah, and there's also just a small thing that for some of those characters that don't ever directly interact with the other Phantom Thieves members in any of the Social Link stuff, it's something that's okay, all of my team knows that these people exist and I'm hanging out with them in some way, which is one of those things that in Persona 3 it kind of makes sense because the main character just sort of seems so antisocial that he's not just going to tell everybody about everything he's doing all the time. But it always felt weird in Persona 4 that you never mentions to his best friends and these people he's so close to that's oh yeah, no, I'm working at the hospital and there's this weird sexy nurse lady that keeps on hitting on me and I'm helping her with all of her deep intense personal issues. It's they're he's off having all these relationships with all these different people on his own, and it feels kind of weird that it's as cloistered as it is when that guy seems like he should be really sort of forthcoming with everything that he's doing with his friends, particularly in regards with all the stuff they're doing with the investigation team. And I like that with Persona 5, there's at least this sort of direct acknowledgement, both with eventually the Velvet Room stuff comes in, which is another thing that I've always felt was so bizarre that it's just completely off on its own. It's never really addressed. And I love that that comes in and that is addressed in the other team members are aware of that part of the game, but they're also aware that I'm hanging out with the sexy doctor, I'm hanging out with the weird reporter lady, I'm doing all this other stuff, and you guys are aware of it and a part of it, and you're going to help me sort of solve these issues with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's those moments when you're going to Mementos and Morgana will like get up on the table and like give you the rundown.
Yes.
And especially for the ones related to confidants, those are great because it's exactly what you said. It's those moments of recognition of like, oh right, that dude at the gun store, we know that guy. That's horrible that guy's doing to it. And like there's this moment of like team unity around, let's help this dude. You know, we don't know him as well as you do, but he's our friend and we're going to help him out. And that's just, those moments are like really nice when it all comes together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun. So, okay, we talked about Futaba and Sojiro. Just going, you know, we don't have to go down a specific list, but what's another social link that you caught your eye and you'd like to talk about?
Like, I have always found Mishima's really interesting in this game. Like, it's one where he's not a character that, like, stands out as being, like, he's not very flashy, and he's not likable, and he's not supposed to be likable. Like, he's this... I feel like everybody knows a kid like this in high school where it's like, you're not a bad guy, you're just annoying. Like, there's just fucking annoying, and I know you don't mean it. I know it's just like, you're just a little bit awkward in a way that's like, you just annoy me, and it's like, I like you, you're fine, like, we can hang out, but it's like, oh my god, you get on my nerves sometime.
This is how Sean and I became friends.
Exactly.
No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
But, no,
and you just wouldn't fucking stop talking to me. It's like, okay, fine, I'll go into Mementos and fucking kill your shadow, whatever, man.
No, it's great. And the game is so aware of it, because there's that Hawaii section
Yeah.
where you just, every answer is some form of making fun of Mishima whenever he's around.
Yeah.
Because, like, he wants to share your room and all this stuff, and you're just like, not Mishima. And that was the moment where I knew, like, okay, they know it.
Yeah.
Because I went through some of that social link being like, aware of how, like, kind of off-putting Mishima is in some ways, and then the game, like, in the normal game parts makes it very clear, and it all kind of clicked for me.
But it's also something that, because of like how he's introduced into the story as being like one of the sort of like most severe victims of Kamoshida's abuse, like it always made me feel really bad for having that reaction to him, because it's like, this is the exact reason why Kamoshida could abuse him, is because this kid is just sort of awkward and weird and off-putting enough to people that like he just sort of like blends into the background and nobody cares when he shows up to school with a bunch of bruises. And it's like it's a really sort of like weird, tense relationship you have with him because of that. And I just love the way his social link progresses in a very non-standard way, which there's a couple more of that in Persona 5 than there tends to be in these games. And his is tied completely to completing the Mementos request that he gives you. And I just like that, like, it gives his social link a very different sense of pacing, that you can't just like focus on his all the time. Like, you have to wait until you get to a certain part of the story for more Mementos requests to come up to sort of go through that. But I also just like, again, sort of like the way that the social links blend in different elements of the game setting and narrative story stuff. There's that, I think, is about halfway through his social link is where he starts kind of like going way too far, and he's letting the Phantom Thief thing get to his head, and like he's clearly under a lot of pressure, and he's just like, he has almost kind of like a Ryuji kind of like thing going on with him. And so you go into Mementos to see if he has a shadow, and you confront his shadow, but you decide not to destroy his shadow and come back out and like kind of confront him about it. And that I found was like really interesting. It's something that just makes really great use of the sort of larger paranormal mechanics of the setting to tell a different kind of story than they're telling in the main story, and a different way to use that, because it also just feels like it's this acknowledgement on the part of the game and the characters, like the player characters, the Phantom Thieves, that the thing they're doing when they're going into Mementos is like not totally okay. Like it's a little bit fucked up. Because if it wasn't a little bit fucked up, they would be totally fine with just killing Mishima's shadow and changing his heart that way. But because they know him and he's like, he helps them, they like have enough of a debt to him that they're like, that's just not right. And I really like that element of his social link.
I think Mishima's social link, the whole second half of it, is really good. I think parts of it can feel a little rote here and there, but then you get to, I think that's the turning point, and the final scenes where he is both humbled and also comes out of his shell to the degree where he can kind of, as is often the case in Persona, own what it is he wants out of the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's easy to make fun of Mishima as that awkward guy who no one really likes. But by the end, it's like, he's a good dude. He's going to have a good life. He's going to be a successful person. Like, there's some really nice moments like that near the end of his social link. I particularly just think, because it ultimately becomes less about, oh, I owe this big debt to the Phantom Thieves, as, hey, I found something I'm good at, and those sorts of things, and found a place in the world. And I like that there is a significant high school character in this game, Mishima, who's not part of the team.
Yeah.
And you generally don't get that kind of thing, I think, in the Personas. Sometimes with other social links, but in terms of someone who's that central to the story, I feel like in Persona 4, he would have gotten a Persona somewhere.
Right,
You know?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Like, and he doesn't, and that's important to this game, that he's just a character.
Yeah, and I think another reason why I like Mishima's social link is I think the aspect of you having a social link with a character that's like deliberately and actively unlikable feels very much like Persona 3, like the way that Persona 3 handled it a lot of the time of like, I see a bit of Kenji, you know, from Persona 3 in Mishima.
I see a bit of Kenji, and Mishima is one of the several social links in this game that go back to the Persona 3 thing of what you have to tell them to get the notes isn't always the right thing. It's like the thing they want to hear.
Yeah.
Mishima has a lot of those.
Yeah.
And that's very Kenji-esque, where if you were really being a best friend to Kenji, you would be like, stop trying to fuck your teacher. But to get the social link up, you have to say, cool, dude.
Yeah. But the nice thing about Mishima in that regard is that you don't need notes to progress his social link.
Right.
It's just entirely through the memento stuff. So if you want to sort of like stroke his ego, that's kind of totally on you. And you will get your nice little like, and like the notes pop out, but it doesn't really do anything for you.
No, totally, yeah.
And so. I do like that I can be, it helps you be like, I'm just going to, in this moment, I'm going to be straight with Mishima and just be like, hey man, you're walking a weird path. You maybe don't want to do this.
Question I haven't asked, and maybe you know the answer to this. Can social links reverse in this game?
No.
Okay, they took that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was just a weird, like, it's an interesting idea, but I feel like Persona 3, it was just so, like, so much of, like, the way that a character is going to respond to a piece of dialogue is, like, up to, like, a weird amount of interpretation. There's just, like, I didn't in any way expect that character to take this way. It doesn't kind of make sense, and it's really harsh for that to, like, cause me to actively lose social link progress.
Yes.
So I like that they didn't bring that back, because it just felt needlessly complicated.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although there's the hilarious moment in the Kenji social link where you can laugh at him after he fails with the teacher, and that will reverse his social link, and it's like the cruelest thing you can do in a video game.
Yeah, fuck Kenji.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, so I like that social link. One I wanted to talk about that I really like. I think we're saving some of the best for last, but another good one is the politician one. I really like that
Tora.
one. It snuck up on me. I think at the beginning it's one of those ones that can feel a little Persona 101 of like, Mad Libs, I found a official of some form around town, and he is sad because X, and he is lonely, and all of that feels a little Persona 101, but as it gets going, I think it's just very well executed. I like a lot of the rewards he gives you as a confidant. And also just, I don't know, I think the vocal performance in English is really good on him, but I think just generally the writing of this guy who is a politician who is very aware of the trappings of politics. It's like he's a reformed politician. Yeah. It's very key to the main themes of the game of a guy who abused his power or had something happen and is aware of that and is trying to atone. And ultimately you find out he wasn't as bad as he's selling himself to be, and there were other factors going on. But it's this guy who has really a snowball's chance in hell of getting elected to anything, keeps getting offers to be an important person in this administration or with this guy or whatever, and just kind of keeps straight to his course of getting on his little crate and talking in front of the train at Shibuya Square or Station Square, and you're just there helping him. And I think it's a really nice story, and I found it pretty affecting by the end.
Yeah, I agree, and it's just something that I think it's important because it's one of the earliest social links you have access to. In fact, it's like the one that before you can go out at night, like that's like the kind of the one that's triggering you, like, oh, you could go out and like probably do this thing and then like attend this guy's meeting at night, but we can't go out at night because Sojido won't let us. So it's like sort of like setting up, like at some point in this game, you're going to be able to go out at night, and that's where a lot of the social link stuff will happen. But I also think it's important for that early on the game to start showing the broader sort of political themes that eventually, obviously, by the time you get to the end, and Shido is the main villain, that it's so important to this game. And I just like how, like, in some places in the weeds that Social Link is with, like, Japanese politics and the Japanese political system in a way that, like, I know more about it, obviously, than, like, the average American, but I am in no way an expert. Like, I've never, like, directly researched it. It's mostly just, like, stuff I picked up through, like, the textbooks I read for Japanese classes and stuff like that. And just, like, the weird details in shows, like, watching, like, Shin Godzilla or something like that. And then, so it's, like, there's something fun about being, like, yeah, I understand the gist of what it is because obviously Japan is a democracy, but every democracy has like very specific, like intricate systems by which it, like on the micro level it operates. And I love that, like, how willing the game is to just be like, yeah, no, like this is just totally about like the bureaucracies and like the inner circles of political like machinations in Japan that like is, again, it's recognizable, but it definitely has its own flavor than like that kind of story would have been told from an American perspective, like involved with the American government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things that's notable about Toranosuke is that depending on when you start actively playing that social link, he's kind of the first adult you get to know in that game who is fully cognizant of the problems adults have in this world and will own up to that to you.
Yeah.
And that part of why I think he sees something in this kid and you see something in him and they start hanging out is it's like the debt he feels he owes is more to young people than anyone else because he knows as an adult the world's kind of fucked up and that's no one's fault but, his and his generations and adults and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And him being able to own up to that early on, we don't see the arc by which he went through that. He's already been through that, gauntlet. The way we see, Sai Nijima go through that gauntlet. But he's already there on the other end of it. And so it's got this interesting kind of mournful atmosphere that also, I think, helps introduce you to the, as you say, the larger themes of the game. And so, I find the character very useful for that for a number of different reasons. And he's interesting because his social link advances automatically no matter what. But it does take a couple steps to get to his social link. And I like that. You have to go work at the beef bowl shop.
Yes.
A couple of times and he'll notice you. And then you go talk to him and then you talk to him again. So, but it's actually a fun kind of startup because of course he's not just going to meet you once and be like, hey, you want to hold the sign? It takes a couple of times of getting to know this kid and I like that.
Yeah. I also, it's something that is true of most of the non-main character social links in the game, but because Torres is kind of the first one you get, I always kind of attaches to him is how much social stat progress you make by hanging out with some people, and when you hang out with Tora, and for most of his social link advancements, you get 3 points in charm, and it's
so great.
It feels so good. It's this just endorphin rush of yes, it's so good. I got you've just, even if you know that obviously the game is designed to be sort of paced in such a way that they're taking into account you're getting points that way, it still feels like you're getting free points.
It does.
It's I'm advancing my social link thing and I'm getting my charm up. And it's just one of those things that sort of, it's an extra little incentive to, even if you're maybe at rank 3 or 4 or something with a social link and not super into it yet, to still motivate you to be okay, I get a little extra something. I get both the stat boost and then I will work towards getting whatever next sort of core ability these social links give you. It's a nice bit of motivation.
Like pretty much every confidant in this game, there is a great story to be told by hanging out with them, and there is an immense amount of strategy in deciding what to do with anyone in this game. So there's that one. What's one you would want to talk about?
Let's talk about some of the ones that unlock over the summer because I like those a lot. So let's talk about Chihaya, the fortune teller lady.
I would
probably the best abilities of any of the social link people.
It's a battle between her and Kawakami, but I would go with Chihaya because if you go far enough with the fortune social link, you get the one where you can just straight up get extra points and advance your social link without having to waste time. And if I had known that earlier, I would not have finished on the very last day because it is unbelievably useful.
I would have warned you about it, but I wanted you to have the real experience.
No, you have to have the real experience. And man, I gave Chihaya so much money. I don't know if you should ever have a girlfriend you pay that much. No. Even if it's for professional reasons. No. I gave her pretty much 100,000 yen every day, right? Because not 10,000, because it's 5,000 twice a day you can do because there's so many useful things she does. She's great.
And it's something where it would be great if, depending on how much money you gave her, and you got, you dated her or whatever, and she invited you back to her place, and, they actually modeled, a set for her, in her apartment, and depending on how much money you paid, it's, eventually, near the end of the game, you go there, and it's, the walls are fucking, made out of gold bricks. It's man, Chihaya, your fortune-telling business is very successful on the back of me. I mean, you're making money by fighting demons, so, I don't know where this money really comes from, and probably the government is going to crack down on you at some point, because, these expenditures, there's no way to justify them on, the income you make.
At a certain point, your actions in the palaces and mementos and the money you bring back in would affect the inflation of the yen.
Yeah.
Right? You are bringing in so much from nowhere.
It's a tremendous amount of money. But,
and I mean, there comes a point in the game where most of my expenditures were Chihaya.
Yeah.
Because pretty much every day I was going to her for something. Because that's the big one at the end is the social link stuff. But you can ask her for the luck readings, which is the next thing you do in terms of any of your attributes. You'll get an extra note on it, depending on the thing, and that's super useful. And I would do all these. A lot of my reloads were okay, what can I do with a mixture of Chihaya and the things available to me to get a 3-point boost in this? And so that's great. You also have the things where you can get extra money if you go into Mementos or the palaces.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
Those can be like, sometimes I would turn that on and then go into Mementos and just be like, I'm turning on a podcast and I'm going to kill some monsters and do some all-out attacks, and I would get a gross amount of money.
Yes. And so that's all the ability stuff you get from Chihaya. But I think it's also, like, it's one of the things, again, that before we talk about the story with her, it's something I really like about how they handle a lot of the confidants in this game, is that it's not just you're advancing the social link with Chihaya, and it's also not just that you're getting, like, unlocking the more of those abilities. It's that you're going back to her all the time, and there's something about that makes her memorable. That it's like, okay, yeah, like, I love that you have social links with, like, the shopkeepers, basically, of the game, because it makes it so... I talked about this on the last podcast we did with Persona 5, that at the end of the game, you don't have the phenomenon where a social link character pops up that you haven't seen for literally 50 hours of playing the game, and you're like, who the fuck is that person? And it's like, oh, right, I tutored that kid. There's like 3 or 4 of those in Persona 4. Even if, as you're doing those social links, they're very good. By the time you get to the end of the game, they're just so far in the past you've completely forgotten them. And I love that with a lot of these characters, either they are like in a place like with Oya at the bar that you're going to go back to if you want to like work at the bar, or there's someone you directly interact with periodically over the course of the game that you're constantly sort of reminded that these people exist, or you're directly interacting with them. That makes it so that you feel like you have a relationship that exists with them outside of just very sort of like callously advancing their social link and getting to like rank 10 and then dropping them by the wayside and never seeing them again because they exist in like some menu option you had to pick at the end of the day at your house or something in Persona 4.
Yeah, and another thing I would say with this and some of the other people you go to and talk to a lot because they have different abilities, and you do it the most with her, but like you use Kawakami, and obviously you see the gun dude all the time, and you will go talk to the doctor, hot doctor lady,
Takemi.
all the time and stuff like that. It's so much better than if it was just a menu option.
Yeah.
And, this is something we talked about earlier on the show with Dragon Quest, that there's something kind of fun and charming about there's a person you have to go talk to save. And I totally understand that can be like kind of a burden and things like that. But there's also a charm to it. And Persona has gone way beyond that. And it really does matter that you have to go talk to these people. Because if it was just, I could hit triangle and call Chihaya and like activate her power.
Yeah.
The character wouldn't mean anything. Those powers wouldn't feel like hard earned. You would just get you would go bad with power. You wouldn't really feel the impact of it because it's like, okay, I have to spend my 240 yen and go up to where she is in the red light district, and I walk over there and I talk to her and I activate this, and then I get ready to go.
And you get like the little tiny voice of like, or like whatever weird noise she makes. I don't know what her English voice actor does, but Japanese,
she does that exactly.
It's like, why do you always make that noise, Chihaya? Like, what, you're thinking so hard about something, I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, she must have like taken that exactly because you get that exactly. So, but yeah, they feel like characters. You feel like the world is more lived and living and breathing, and also feels like you get a sense of the protagonist's day, even though some of the time of like how much time you spend on the subway makes no goddamn sense. Yeah. That's totally fine.
Sure, yeah.
But it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah. So anyways, let's talk a little bit more about her character.
Because it's also a good character in Social Link.
One of the things I love about her Social Link is how it starts. Like, there's a lot of like both of like. You have to pay her, like, for, like, the point of where you meet her in the game. It's a large amount of money, and I knew it was coming, so I had saved up my second time through. But the first time through, I hit that, I was like, oh, motherfucker,
yeah,
I don't have anywhere near enough money to pay.
I was like, I'll have to go into Mementos or something.
Yeah, so it's like you have to pay her, like, 100,000 yen or something like that to get the magic stone that's a scam. And
rock salt.
Yeah, it's basically rock salt. And I also love, like, that the first time you sort of encounter her before you have to pay money, it's like you go back home and Sojiro like says like, oh, I won the lottery or something. It's like here's a couple of bucks, and that was off of like the fortune she had told you earlier that day when you were talking to her, and Morgana's like, oh man, she must be the real deal. And there was something that's like, okay, yeah, like this is interesting, and then but like, oh, she's actually a fraud. But no, her fortunes are weirdly accurate, so she's real. And I also love how combative your relationship with her is at the start, of where she's so defiant. This like, no, the magic stones, they help people. Like I'm doing like a service, and you can't defy fate. Like that's just ridiculous. And you're like, listen, lady, I can't tell you how I'm doing this shit, but trust me, I can fucking defy some serious fate over here. I got some stuff going on.
It is kind of amazing from like the moment when you meet Chihaya, which is not the same as when you start her social link, to when you like max her social link. So much happens in that relationship of, you know, that combative stage to when she starts thinking you're useful, to she just wants to like observe you, so you're going to come do a fortune reading with her, to when you start learning about some of her problems and her past life, and then like, you know, you realize she was in a cult basically and all this stuff. Like, she goes on a journey.
Yeah. And another like really fun detail about her character is that she's basically a country bumpkin. You know, she's basically from the same kind of town as like Inaba from Persona 4, and that adds a fun dynamic to her relationship to Tokyo, because she's an outsider the way that you're an outsider, the way that, like, a bunch of the characters, like An is an outsider to the city, and that's fun. And then also, you know, I think it works maybe a little bit better in Japanese, although I'm sure the English performance does it well. But like her, you know, she's trying to speak in this like very formal standard, like Tokyo-esque Japanese, and ends, but like you can tell it's a put on in the Japanese performance, because she ends every sentence with like really over exaggerating like des and stuff like that in a way that you wouldn't normally, because in her normal sort of like village dialect or whatever, you know, it's a very sort of like Goku-esque, like bumpkin-y sort of, you know, not appropriate for business Japanese kind of language. And there's something really fun about, because you have to get so far into her social link before like you get that little peek behind the curtain and she slips up, even though like, you know, she's got to have some like really weird shit rocking down behind that, like the whatever she's saying, because you know it's such a put on. I love that aspect of her character when she like finally lets it slip, but then has to put it back on again.
Yeah, I thought the English actress in the localization did a really good job with that. Like, as well as you probably can in English. Like, I think they really put in the effort to when that switch happens and you hear her accent. They basically do like a southern accent kind of thing. Like, kind of what I always wish they did in English with Goku, of let him like drop a G here and there on words and stuff like that.
Oh, man, I'm dropping a G.
Just like, I just mean at the end of... It's not what I meant. But yeah, like, you know, saying in instead of ing and things like that. So like it's kind of like our, you know, same kind of archetypal country kind of accent. They did a good job. And the actress just has fun with it. And, you know, obviously you get more of it in Japanese because it's specifically tied to language and grammar and things like that. But I think, you know, those things are hard to adapt. That was one area where this localization did very well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so...
Like, if you haven't listened, it's actually very cute how she does it. It's like, I hate using that word, but it kind of is that, you know?
Yeah, it's adorable. Like, it's just like a weird... It's a really good little character detail that, again, helps, because it's both just like fun and silly, but it does reinforce her status as an outsider in a way that feels like real. You know, it feels very real that she has to put on a different voice to be able to like conduct business in Tokyo and not feel embarrassed.
I also love that Chihaya is, you know, specifically a tarot card reader.
Yeah.
So you get your tarot cards in the real world in the game.
Yes.
And, you know, Persona 3 did that with, like, the crazy teacher who liked to talk about the tarot. And it's just one thing missing from Persona 4 is not enough, like, tarot out there in the world. Because it's such a part of the games.
Yeah, and I just like all the scenes early on with your social link with her, where like she's like, "Oh, yeah, there's no way you can fix this," and you go fix it, and she like does the second reading. She's like, "What the fuck?
Yeah,
what the hell? What's going on? Like, this doesn't make any sense." And it is like ultimately, I like the message that they have there, because I think it is an important thing because of the supernatural elements of the story to address in Persona 5. Of like, is there fate? Like, is that an overriding sort of like thing that dominates people's destiny, or do you have agency? And like, of course, like Persona like is very much on the side of, yes, like what you do matters, what you do is important and has a real impact. And it's something that when you mix it with the political stuff that happens later, like feels important, like sort of combating that like disenfranchised feeling that a lot of people can have in modern democracy, of that like, oh, your vote doesn't matter, that it's like whoever becomes president is up to fate. And it's like, no, like you have to try, like you have to do what you can, and like if you do, like you can fix things, like you can make a difference.
And if you don't, we get Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Just so we keep those references up.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about Takumi, because we mentioned her earlier, and I love
super hot goth doctor.
Oh my god, she is this game's Yukiko in glasses. She is so great. And not just because she's hot and like that's to a T my type, but like that character design is fantastic, and there are many great character designs in this game. this is Soejima's masterpiece in terms of character design.
Sure, yeah.
But she is actually, I think, because she's one of the earliest you get.
Yeah.
I think that was the character portrait that made me realize just how good the character design in this game is.
Yeah.
And she's just a great character beyond that. That social link is fantastic. It's one that gates you relatively early in that you can go through that one really fast until you hit like, oh shit, I need to be really... I think charismatic is the one on that one. Yeah, and so like there's actually a long period where you can't meet with her because you can get through the early ones really fast. But overall, that whole social link and like it's very funny early on in that she's doing these tests on you and you are her lab rat and you constantly faint and then wake up hours later and you get a courage boost, which is great, or a guts boost in this game. But then, as with most of these, it turns into something sweeter and more emotional by the end where Takumi thought she lost a patient and she is trying to find the right medicine for her, and then you ultimately find out the patient is alive, and there's also a mementos trip in this one. I think it's just one of the best all-around social links in the game.
Yeah, I agree. Like, she's a very fun character. I like that she calls you guinea pig, basically.
Yeah. Guinea pig is the word.
Yeah. It's like her, and I think there's something fun about her being one of the earliest ones of, like, setting up kind of a lot of the basic dynamics of how the other social links are going to operate with, like, you know, you find out kind of who she is, basic details about her, and as it like advances, you hit like that point where it's like, okay, now I need to get this stat boost up, then talk to her more, get to the point where it's like, okay, now like that asshole hospital director is someone I need to like really deal with directly. Go into mementos is like a very sort of like feels like it sets up the structure that all those other kind of normal day like other people social links go.
Early on, she was definitely the one I was most excited to go do when I had the option.
Yeah, and it's just like it's something that you know we haven't really talked about that much with the other ones, but I think here it's good with Takumi that all of the social links have this element of, because like the whole game does, of people being trapped in whatever sort of like spot they are, like whatever kind of like social caste or whatever role they are in society through circumstances not of their own, and they want to break out of it in some way, and like. You know, there's always that kind of authority figure in most of them, like the uncle in Sojiro's that has like sort of blood kind of rights over Futaba and stuff like that. And in Chihaya's, it's the dude who runs the cult. And in this one, you have like that hospital director. And there's something that's really fun about all the not all, but most of the social links having this kind of like authority villain figure. That's like a little tiny version of like the palace figures. That's another element of going into Mementos, is kind of setting up this guy that's like, you know, has distorted desires, not on quite the scale that most of the main villains do, but is still like set up as the small villain and target that you have to like go after and sort of figure out what the whole issue is with this.
Yeah, absolutely. That there's always kind of someone above holding you down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is this also the moment where we want to talk about statutory romances?
Okay, sure, yeah.
I mean, because Chihaya, it's less obvious with her, but she's older.
Yeah.
Takumi is obviously, she's a fucking doctor. You know, we haven't talked about Kawakami and Oya yet, but we will.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if there's even much to say about the Oya social link. It's fun. You're at a bar.
She's
Oya
drunk.
is constantly drunk.
It's good.
It's a good one.
She's very Lois Lane, and I like that a lot.
Yep. In English, she is voiced by Yukiko. Okay. And I love imagining that Yukiko grew up and left Inaba and went to the city.
Cut her hair.
Yeah, cut her hair and became a drunk journalist. A very good journalist. She's good at her job. She's just also like an alcoholic, basically. So, you know, yeah. But anyway, Oya also you can date, and we'll talk about Kawakami in a minute. But yes, there are many romances outside of pretty much every romance outside of your main group. You can get in a very clearly sexual relationship with an older woman, and I think there's a lot of ways to tackle this.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you said just now is about, you know, the theme of breaking out of social roles and social castes. And I do think that's kind of one of the key themes at play here when they offer that, is that the social script does not say a 16-year-old kid should date like a 25-year-old woman for somewhat defensible reasons, we could argue.
Yeah.
And that is one way the protagonists in these characters are breaking out of those roles, and you can kind of determine whether that is healthy or not. And, you know, I think that is an interesting theme in the game. I think there are ways you could argue this, like, if they had a female protagonist and there were, like, older dudes and they did that, one, they probably wouldn't, and if they did, it would read significantly creepier.
Sure, yeah.
And they basically, you know, tackle things like that with Kamoshida early in the game. And, you know, that sometimes it gets into, you know, if you're just dating the hot doctor across the street, that is a different power relationship than your homeroom teacher at school.
Right.
So there's a lot of things you can parse, and frankly, we could do the interpreting statutory romance in Persona 5 podcast.
Right, yeah.
We're not going to, but we could. So, I mean, I've kind of laid out some of the main arguments. Where do you think about a lot of these?
Yeah, like, I think it's something that it's a really interesting, weird part of the game. Because it's not something, like, there is definitely, like, a cultural difference there in Japan. Like, you know, the age differences are definitely, like, in terms of like the legal qualifications for that kind of stuff are different in Japan, but not like super different. And this is in no way seen as like a normal thing or anything like that. Right. Like, and obviously it's like, it is a very intentional choice for them to be a part of this game in a way that they were not in Persona 3 and Persona 4. Like this is not, there's not, and has never really read to me in my 2 times of playing this game as being the Persona team trying to like to create this like weird sort of sexual fantasy for the player or something like that. It feels like this very deliberate choice to like make it so that most of the relationships you have in the game are like weird. Like they're not totally right. Like it's not like dating Yukari in Persona 3. It's not like dating Yukiko or Chie in Persona 4. It's like these relationships are not standard in kind of any way. Even with some of your main team members that you can romance that are also part of like high school and stuff, it's just like your relationship is just kind of strange. And there's something about that like I think in some ways there can be. I feel like there can be some bit of like a weird like cognitive dissonance with the Kamoshida stuff and like the Kawakami stuff. But at the same time, I think there is like a weird realm of nuance to say like there is something like here, like there's a like taboo here, like a social taboo here that is very like often not really explored in any sort of serious fashion, that is not really considered in any serious fashion, and is completely ignored as a part of something that like, you know, while most or like the vast majority of people never have any sort of those like physical relationships like actualized in any way, like everyone's had that sort of like element of like being attracted to someone much younger than you or much older than you, depending on which stage of life you're at. And I think it's an interesting territory that in some ways I wish the game like went deeper into that in some places.
I very much wish it went deeper with that. Like,
it's something that's hard to do because there's obviously the very intentional choice to make it so that every single romance is optional, which makes it difficult to sort of like make that a huge story fixation.
Well, and here's what I was going to say is that this is one area of the game, and most of this, I did not feel this with Persona 5. This is one area where I felt the general Persona structure of how they structure social links and romances needed to change. Like, the way romance happens in this game is too beholden to what they did 10 years ago in Persona 6, 11 now. You know, or Persona 6, Persona 3. Yeah, sorry, you know what I mean. It was in 2006. But yeah, like, in Persona 3, you know, you have it set up and you get to rank max and you can, you know, romance with people and blah, blah, blah. And that it works totally fine in that.
Yeah.
Works fine in Persona 4 and it becomes very much a joke with the Narukami character. Here, it's pretty much the same thing, but I do feel like with a lot of the romances, they want to take them a step beyond, and the structure is not built to allow that. Like, you really can't say what happens with that relationship later or explore it in the depth it needs to, because I think you're totally right. That idea of the statutory romances with this character and the taboo that is being broken, I think is 100% thematically belonging in this game. It doesn't need to be there, but it is part of the thematic spectrum that this game exists on in terms of, you're totally right. Like, and this is something that, you know, the game made me think of, is that I'm almost constantly attracted to not the people who are my same age, but like not a generation, but, you know, like older than me. Like not the girl in my class, but, you know, maybe the teacher's assistant or something like that. And I think that's something that is worth questioning and thinking about, especially in a game that is asking about social norms and social mores and taboos. And I do think like that is an element of it feels right, but I do think because of, I think, the general structure and that they're all optional, but you still can have all the girlfriends you want in the world, that once it's kind of over and you've gotten through that scene, there just can't be any more weight attached to it, you know? And I frankly, I would be interested if another team does a Persona 6. What can they do with like the dating sim aspect of this? Because it probably is the most undercooked thing in Persona 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where I come down on it.
Yeah, like I basically agree.
Yeah. And it is important to remember they are optional. Right?
Yeah. Like, in particular, I feel like you are not supposed to get in a relationship with Kawakami. It feels like the game is very, like, directly saying, like, if, like, you're going down this path, like, that's, like, the quote-unquote, like, non-canonical route or something like that. It's, like, it very much signposts, like, you're fucking dude, like, you do what you want. Like, we're not going to totally block this off because there's stuff like interesting material to sort of explore with that relationship, but that's not like the one you're like, quote unquote, supposed to do.
Because it totally feels like the right ending to her confidant is her recognizing, oh, we have had this flirtation and this abstraction, but I'm trying to be the best version of myself and I can't do that.
Yeah.
But then you can talk her into, like, come give me a massage and then we'll fuck. Yeah. Yeah, wear that maid costume.
Sure. Yeah. Sure, I wasn't going to go as sort of grotesque with it, but
she makes some pretty audible moans when she's massaging you, is all I'm saying.
Okay, well, maybe the English version, maybe the Japanese version is slightly more wholesome. I don't know what game you've been playing.
Kawakami voiced by Yukari, so that just adds a whole layer of romance to
there
it, which
you
is
go.
weird. Yeah, Yukari grew up and became a teacher who went on to wear a maid outfit and fuck her students.
There you go.
Which does not quite seem like the right arc for Yukari, but
yeah. You never know where life leads you. It's a weird, long, winding road, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't played the Persona Arena games. Maybe that's what they tell us about Yukari.
That's totally what it was.
Yeah.
They're very weird games that they're M-rated in very interesting ways.
Yeah. But, I mean, while we're on that, any more thing else to say on that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kawakami.
Oh, right,
link.
yeah.
Jesus, that's a great social link.
Yeah.
As weird as it can get, and as much as I think it is the center point of all discussions around the statutory romance and stuff, I have already just talked about how much I love the way that social link starts, where out of the blue, Ryuji comes to you with the maid advertisement, and you and him and Mishima go and do this, and then it turns out to be Kawakami, but they've gone and hidden because they're, kind of wusses about it, and then you start calling her over, and then you start realizing, oh my god, Miss Kawakami has the best confidant abilities so far in this game.
Yeah. No, it's something where, like, her social link, like where it goes and like what it is just so nuts, and something that is present in this whole game is something we haven't talked about a lot that I love about this game. And it's one of the reasons why I think from certain sections of the Persona fan base, like Persona 5 has gotten a slightly more cold reception than I would have expected, is that like this game is not interested in actually like glorifying otaku culture and like those elements of otaku culture in a way that like most pieces of otaku culture do. Like one of the things that is, like I think anybody who watches a lot of anime or like is like certainly like learned the language and stuff like realizes is there's this really weird relationship between a lot of the American fan base for stuff like anime and manga and Japanese video games and Japan. And there's like this really weird perspective on Japan as like a nation and a culture and like a political entity that's like that stuff. Like a lot of anime that paints this like really idealistic picture of Japan. Like it paints this picture of like, even if like you have a character in an anime that's like a hikikomori, so they're like a shut-in who's completely cut themselves off from like all of society, and it's like this really like tragic victim of a lot of like really severe endemic issues to Japanese culture. Those characters are oftentimes played as jokes, and like it's fun, like laugh it up as like, oh, they're socially awkward, blah 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 blah,
or glorified,
in some ways, and like, and that can be fine in a lot of instances. Like that's not an issue. The issue is when like that is all that people consume, and that's like your entire perspective on Japan is like, Japan is a culture that is like in a lot of ways really fucked up in the way that like every culture in a lot of ways is really fucked up.
Yeah,
and as a country is really fucked up.
Persona 5 has very little patience for your fantasies about Japan.
Yeah, like the stuff that like it's not. Persona 5 is not interested in looking at like the maid thing in like the maid culture in Akihabara and like saying like, oh, this is so amazing and great and like funny and like blah blah blah. It's like interesting. It's also in a lot of ways like really fucked up, and it's like it sort of shines light on like what this is doing and what this is like asking of women and like putting like women in this like role in otaku culture. It's like really weird and is like not healthy.
Yeah, I mean it's we've so far we're gushing about the Kawakami social link because it is so out there.
Yeah.
But what makes it that's the opening of it. What makes it great as a sustained thing throughout the game is where it starts to poke holes in all of that.
Yeah.
And that you are attracted to her, and I don't mean physically or sexually, I mean you are attracted to her as another person in terms of you want to know more about her because of the sadness endemic in that she's wearing this maid costume and doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Because who the fuck would?
Exactly.
And more power to someone who would, I guess, but like, there are bigger issues going on, and you see a kindred kind of spirit there where, hey, I've been fucked over by the world. You're wearing a maid outfit. We probably have things to offer each other.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where that story goes, and just the whole what you realize about this woman and the deepening of that character is that she's not just some like kind of layabout teacher who goes and is a maid. She is someone who wants to be a great teacher, is a great teacher deep down, and who the system, society, because of this issue with this one kid, has basically told over and over again, don't try that hard.
Yeah.
And if you do, you're just going to have to go be a maid at night, because that's what women actually are to this culture. I mean, there is actually very much a dichotomy they're presenting here between the learned woman at school who is the best version of herself and the woman she has to be at night when she's a maid.
Yeah, where she's completely subservient.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, man, it's something where I love, like, that it has a sort of similar arc to Sojido's character, of that you get introduced to her at the beginning of the game, and she just seems like the worst teacher. And it's like every character at the beginning of the game is like, all these people suck, and like she seems like she wants nothing to do with you. She's constantly complaining about why are you in her class? Like, why does she have to do all of this? And you just think it's like, oh man, like what the fuck? Like, come on, you're my teacher. Like, you should be better than this. You should stand up for something better than this. Like, you should be my ally or whatever. And you feel like kind of like really betrayed and like really off put by how cold she is. And then I love that when you get into that social link and you find out what's going on, you realize, like, she's just so tired. Like, she's works so hard because she's working as a teacher, and then she's working as a maid at night, and, like, scraping in every bit of money she scrapes together, she gives to these people that are basically threatening her with legal action, and out of this sense of guilt for what happened to their kid. That's not her fault at all. And it's like, how brutal that slow realization is of, like the extent to which that goes, and like how desperately you want to be like, you need to fight this. Like, you're like working too hard to like, and getting nothing and being subservient to people that don't deserve it. Like, let's like fight this,
Yeah, and it ties in other social critiques of like Japan's whole education system, and that this was actually a kid who was like overworked to death, which is not an unrealistic thing to that culture.
Yeah, again, like if you are someone who hasn't heard a lot about Japan's education system, doesn't know a lot about it, look up the like phrase "cram school," and if you think that school was hard for you, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, Japanese education is vastly superior to American education in a whole host of ways, but you could argue they go too far in a whole host of ways.
I mean, you can look at the data and say they absolutely go too far.
Yes,
in the same way that, I mean, there are people that literally like work themselves to death, and there's a whole word for that you put on a fucking death certificate for a cause of death is overworking, and it's like, it's a really big issue with Japan's culture.
Yeah, and Persona 5 is not turning a blind eye to any of these things.
No, like, that's the whole point of the game. Because one of the things I really love about it is that it's, even going back to like Futaba, who said like, that example earlier about anime will use the hikikomori character as a joke. Like, that is so often the case. It like sometimes drives me crazy, because one of my favorite anime is a show called Welcome to the NHK that is, the main character is a hikikomori, and it's like this whole 25 episode show that is like completely dedicated to exploring that social phenomena and other similar sort of like issues of sort of college age youths in Japan, and like the weird issues they go through, and like, suicide in Japan, and like those kinds of issues. And then like, you turn around and you like, most shows that come out today, if it has a character like that at all, and again, it's like mostly played as a joke. And then you play Persona 5 and it has Futaba, and like, that's one of like the best representations of a character like that I've seen, and like really exploring that. And part of something that's endemic to that is saying that, just stealing her heart and her going outside does not fix the problem. Like, she has like deep social anxiety issues, some that she was sort of born with, but some that were put on her from other elements of society that have like, pressured that even more and more, and like causes to be exacerbated. And you have her whole social link is working with her through that. And even by the end of the game, she's not like, she's not going out to parties and hanging out with everyone. Like, she still has social anxiety issues. She just knows how to deal with them, and live with them.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something you just said that I think is worth talking, just while we're on this thought of talking about that Persona 5 has had pockets of colder reception, because I've seen that too.
Yeah.
And I've, not if you look at like mainstream critics, but you're right about fan base. And it's always been something that interests me, that, because I think going forward we're still going to see some of this, that for a lot of Western fans, I can't speak to the Japanese fan base, Persona 4 is the one everyone gravitates to.
Absolutely.
Even though I think you and I would both say by a pretty wide margin, Persona 4 is the weakest of the three.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And we love that game.
Yeah, no,
but
it's one of the best games, but like it is definitely
I think it's a notch below Persona 3 and 5. And I think some of that, I look at that and it's hard not to see the phenomena of Persona 4 gives people the easy answers in a lot of circumstances. And I don't think that's even the heart of Persona 4. I think it's a way you can read Persona 4. I think it ignores a lot of the heavier stuff in that game. But it is something there, whereas Persona 3 and Persona 5, not just because they are darker in some ways, but because of the way they handle themes, they're not about comforting your easy view of the world or of Japan, or of culture, or of death, or of any of these big things. They are games that ask you to engage with them on an intellectual and emotional level that is heavier than most video games and most works of mass media. And I think Persona 4, happens to slot in the easiest with a lot of the mass media people consume, especially in online culture. And I just do think it's easy, because I definitely thought that when I was playing through Persona 5, was like, yeah, some people are going to hate this game because it asks more of you than a lot of games do.
And it's also just something where I feel like a lot of people's relationship with Persona 4 is, again, there's like that sort of fantasy version of Japan that like Japan courts about itself, about like the countryside and like that connection to nature and stuff like that. So it's like, it's not like it's just some weird total misinterpretation by Westerners or something. But there is something about Persona 4 that, you play that game and you're like, oh, I would love to just move here. Like, I'd love to take a vacation in Inaba and like hike in the mountain and go into like be at the traditional Japanese inn and eat their steak skewers, and like, it's like this quaint, beautiful country life in Japan. It seems so idyllic. And like you play fucking that's like the first 5 hours of Persona 4. That's the reaction you have. Like, there's like some murder stuff, but that doesn't take away from how beautiful everything is.
Right.
The first 5 hours of Persona 5, if you play the first 5 hours of Persona 5 and say, I would like to go to a vacation in Tokyo, you sound like a fucking maniac.
Yes.
It's like, I would love to go to this place where everyone's an asshole, nobody talks to you, everyone hates everyone pushes everyone away from each other, and it's like full of like weird perverts and like sexual assaulters and like people being racist to white people, and it's like, what the fuck? This seems like a hell on earth. I would never want to step foot in this fucking godforsaken city. That's the kind of Tokyo that Persona 5 shows you at the start, and then I think it complicates that image significantly over the course of the game. But like even at the end of the game, I think this game is very sort of cynical in some ways about like living in cities and what that kind of like urban life can do to people and how it can push people away from each other and isolate them in very interesting ways.
And I think it's worth talking about the tapestry of Persona 3, 4, 5, and how these games do exist in conversation with one another, and the idyllic landscape of Persona 4 is not at odds with the thematic argument being made in Persona 5.
Yeah.
And you can talk about these as a larger piece, but I just want to make that point. So
Yeah, but it's something that like I can totally get that like a lot of people have had a reaction to Persona 5 of like being really put off by it, particularly at the opening. And I totally get that. But like that's something I love about it so much, because it's something I so rarely see in this kind of media from Japan, is that kind of like really intense self-reflection and like this condemnation of these issues that plague it. Because again, like, I watch a lot of anime. Like, it's something that I do pretty regularly whenever like an anime season ends, is look at like whatever has been going on and be like, okay, this show has been getting a lot of buzz. Like, I'll watch through it and stuff. It's like both is just like out of curiosity and because I like to practice the language. And so much anime is like, they will have like a character, like I've recently watched through this show called Kobayashi's Dragon Maid Dragon. Like, don't worry about it. It's a crazy show, but it's really good. It was like really popular from the last season, and it's a really good show. It's very funny and it has a good heart, but also like a main part of like the main character Kobayashi in that show is that she works at a company and like is basically tasked with working so hard, works overtime all the time, doesn't really make enough money, and like is constantly pushed that far. And the show never asks, like, is that okay? Like, it never really engages with that. Like, there's one little story arc about like a manager that's kind of a dick, but other than that, like, there's a whole arc where she's like can't go to her sort of adoptive daughter's sports fair because of how much work she has, and her solution to that problem is, I'm going to work overtime extra hard for like a month to open up one afternoon to go to the sports fair for my daughter. And it's like, this is so fucked up. Like, that's not the fucking thing you should be interrogating, And there's something about like, but like, it's so rare for otaku sort of media to really interrogate some of those issues inside it, because like, it's rare for any piece of media to really interrogate sort of like the flaws of the society that creates it. And any piece of media that does is going to fail in a lot, if not most respects. And that's like something about making art. And there's something so great about Persona 5, like, all three of the Persona games do that. But I think Persona 5 does it like really intensely.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, to be fair, you could say that about like 99% of American sitcoms, for instance.
Yeah,
of like,
exactly.
Are they critically asking about the more disturbing underlying societal things that create the scenario of the show?
Yeah.
Yeah. And generally the answer would be no.
Yes.
So yes. Anyway, yeah, we got off track. Talking about the last confidant, I think we were focusing on all the non-teammate confidants.
Yeah.
I know we still have the gun guy.
Charisma Gamer, which is, they changed
Oh,
that
I meant the gun
game.
seller. But okay, sorry.
But yeah, you have Shinya, who's...
Yeah, talk about Shinya, yeah.
I mean, there's not, like, he's one of the less interesting social links in the game, I think, although he gives you... I love the fucking abilities he gives you with the gun is really cool. But he's, fun. He's a little kid who plays Gun About... Really weird name for a game at an arcade, and, not a huge amount to go into with his story. The one thing I really love about Shinya, though, in the Japanese version, when you like go into your co-op or your confidant sort of menu option, they have kind of like nicknames for all the characters, or when like the social link pops up, it'll say like politician man or like whatever it says about them. In Japanese, he's called Charisma Gamer, and it's like so good. And like the word charisma means something like the English word charisma in Japanese means something slightly different than it does just in English. And they changed it to skilled gamer, which is like a fine translation of that. I wish they just left it as Charisma Gamer because it's so good. It's such a great phrase. It's one of those instances where, another country using English uses English better than English countries use English. Charisma Gamer sounds so good.
Yeah, my only comment about Shinya that I would make beyond all that is that they got his voice actress from the same pool of people who did like Ken in Persona 3 or English Naruto of like it just sounds like an old woman doing the voice. And it's like, I know that's how Japan does it a lot of the time, but they're good at it. You're not doing it right.
Yeah, his voice in Japanese is very good.
Yeah, like, you're not Nancy Cartwright on The Simpsons doing Bart. You're not that good at this. Like, maybe just get a little kid's voice or something. It didn't work. But yeah, anyway. Shinya, and then I also wanted to talk about the guy at the gun store. EY.
Yunehisa.
Good character. Like former Yakuza. Shit gets real over the course of that.
Yeah, his social link is very dramatic in a way that feels very appropriate.
It's fantastic. I mean, at some point you got like a gun pulled on you and all this stuff.
Yeah.
You have to get your guts to rank 5 to do this one thing with him. But also, like, the whole story is actually a pretty sweet story about his adopted son who, in this great, like, I can imagine a Yakuza movie ending with EY adopting this kid, because it's basically from this like Yakuza turf war. He gets this kid, and then he's trying to raise him outside of the family, and it all comes back to him. It's actually a really good story, and I love the way it ends. But.
Yeah, I really like his son. Like you have like this weird relationship with his kid. That's fun.
It's like another little family you have in the game.
Yeah.
So I think that covers all the confidants that are non-teammates.
Yes, I think so.
And then in terms
no, we forgot about Hifumi, the shogi girl.
Oh, right. There might be a reason.
I like Hifumi.
She is fine. She's, she and Shinya both feel very Persona 101 to me.
I like Hifumi.
But yeah. No,
one of the reasons I like Hifumi, her name in kanji is just the kanji for 1, the kanji for 2, and the kanji for 3, and that is very easy to read. And I look at that immediately like, I know what that name is.
That's awesome.
That's really good.
No, it's fine. I like it. I like some of the stuff near the end where... you realize that she never really was all that good at shogi, and like her mother was propping her up, and
because in some ways I feel like hers is actually like very similar to Shinya's, but just done better.
Yeah,
like they have like the same sort of like controlling mother thing going on.
Yeah. No, but it's all good. She also gives you some good abilities.
Yes. No, she has some like really sort of central abilities about being able to like swap team members in and out of combat.
Oh, right. That's like, her. Oh, my God.
When you start the game and you do not have that ability after having been used to having that ability for like 40 hours, it is really hard to adjust to that.
Yes. All right. So that's all the non-teammates. Yeah. In terms of the teammates, we've talked about most of them over the course of the spoiler casts. So I guess I would just ask, are there any you'd like to highlight?
There's one moment from the On social link I want to highlight that there's a really great line that I think it doesn't play quite as well in English as it did in Japanese, though it's still a really good scene. And it's from this first scene where you're with her at the park, and you're sort of going through all that stuff with her, and she's like trying to like, you know, practice not being affected by things. But you have this like small conversation where she talks about moving to Tokyo, and she has this like really great line where she said like, she's basically like, Tokyo is such a strange place that it has all these people, it has all these shops, it has all these things, it even has ponds with ducks and stuff in it, and yet everything in the city seems like it's out of your reach. And it's like, and you can't hold any of it. Like, that's literally what she says in Japanese. And it's like this really great, small, reflective moment that happens like in the first 15, 20 hours of the game that I think like, for me, really kind of started setting up and nailing how important the city was and how important Tokyo is to this game. Because Tokyo is like, even having never been there, like having seen a lot of movies and researched it, it's a very different kind of big city. Like, I think people don't quite understand how huge Tokyo is and how like varied it is. That it's like, it's not just like Manhattan. It's like New York City and like all the boroughs and like New Jersey kind of like all put together in terms of like the scale and variety of what the city is.
When Godzilla tramples through it, he's destroying a lot of shit.
It takes a long time. Like, it's a significant distance. It's a massive city. And there's just something about that scene with her in that park of like, because there's also like, when I played this game for the first time, it was in October, so it was like a couple of months, like 3 or 4, maybe 5 months after I had gone to New York City for the first time. And there's something about that, even though New York City and Tokyo are pretty different in terms of like the ratio of building to nature, and like there's a way more natural park stuff in Tokyo than there's in New York City, because, you know, Tokyo is on a relatively small island. New York City is on an even smaller island. Yeah. So there's like a really sort of density of real estate, but there is a very similar feeling of like when you go to a park in New York City, or like what they call a park, and you're like, this is like 5 square feet of grass and 2 trees that are kind of half dead and a bench. And it's like, this is nature, you know? Or you go to like Central Park and it's like, this doesn't even feel like, this never feels like being outside because there's all these buildings everywhere. And it's like, it's this weird mishmash of all these elements that feels, as someone like from Colorado, and like with An says in that, like, she was like, she's, you know, not from there. Like, this is not where she grew up. There's something really alienating about that sensation of like being in nature, but not being in nature at the same time, that I love about that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked about how much I love the Haru social link.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good one. It's like the character, I think it sneaks up on you and how effective it is. And that, as I've said before, I think Haru is like a combination of Fuka and Mitsuru from Persona 3, where the Mitsuru side of like being the heiress of a big company, but the Fuka side of being very timid about things.
Yeah.
But I like that, like, what you realize about Haru is she's quiet, but I don't think she's timid. Like, that's something that you think about her early on, but she really is a very strong-willed person, and I love, it's one of the best social links about just someone following their dream, and her dream is fairly modest, and I like that about her. And it's obviously a specific contrast they're drawing between her and her family and this giant business she is, you know, inextricably a part of. But she wants to be on the roof doing the gardening, and she wants to learn about how to make coffee, and she wants to open a little coffee shop. And I actually found all of that so interesting and attractive about that character. I really like, and we can have our arguments about this, to me, like, for my interpretation of how I played my main character, Haru is my canonical girlfriend in that game. And I thought it was Makoto for the longest time.
Because it is Makoto. Like,
and I love Makoto's social link, and we can talk about that too, because it's fantastic. But like, there's something about that where I do feel like that attraction, and I think the main character would feel it too, about Haru has this very real ambition, but it's not to go like rule the world. It's to find happiness and own a little coffee shop and just kind of live your life peacefully. And I feel like that would be very attractive to the main character after everything that happened. And I also like, there's some kind of familial connection with that, of like, Sojiro would really approve of that.
Sure.
That lifestyle with that.
Keep it in the business.
Keep it in the business, yeah. And I love that, of how she interacts with, you know, Sojiro too, of like, she goes to, almost like he's her sensei of like learning about coffee. In fact, I would not be surprised if in the Japanese she says that to him at some point.
No,
but,
not quite.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's that kind of relationship. So, great social link. And then, the Makoto one also, where she, basically the Makoto social link is just about her branching out and making a friend.
Yeah, you know? It's about being like, hey, like, I know what the Japanese education system is. You have to talk to people. Like, you cannot just be like honor student council president, and like, you know, attend like the 5 fucking cramped schools and only prepare for entrance exams. And like, is the thing I love about her, especially like, it's just the thing I love about her character is how practical she's about everything. Yeah. Like, she's just so sort of like, I've made this choice about like what I'm going to do. You're going to help me do it, and we're going to go to like Shinjuku, and we're going to do research. This is like bring a notebook, basically.
Yep.
And there's like, and that's the element of like for her that I feel like if I had to write like the Persona 5 novel adaptation and had to pick a like love interest in it, that is the character I would pick, because I can just so see the main character in her like having this like, again, like just this super practical relationship. It's like they're physically attracted, they enjoy each other's company, but also, you know, if they didn't see each other for 2 years, they'd be kind of fine with it. If that's just how the way that like dice rolled, you know, like they could have like, it's the like the kind of people that like they can totally make a long distance relationship work, because it's like they're just so like business minded, you know.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Great social link. And I just love that it also becomes something of a detective story later on, where you're trying to figure out what's happening with her friend. And yeah,
and that douchebag host guy,
he's great.
Sucks.
So
and yeah, the scene where like he and Makoto sort of have to like confront and have a little fight is fun.
Yeah, so
like you have to save him from her because you know that she's just going to fucking rip his head off if that fight got real.
Yep. All right, so those are all the social links.
Yeah,
they're great. We talked about our favorites, but most of them are really good.
Yes,
it's fantastic. So yes, what other kinds of things I am trying? I have been compiling, and I've been thinking about different things I want to ask about, just rapid fire questions about comparing Persona games and things like that. But any more we want to say about kind of wrap up thoughts about Persona 5 as a general, like, I don't know, thematic conversation?
I like the game a lot. It's very
I love this game.
It's, man, and it is just the... Here's a thing I wanted to talk about that I forgot to mention. It wraps up into a couple of things. I'll try to make it quick. But it's something that wraps up in a little bit into the localization conversation that we didn't talk about with that. Is one of the criticisms that the game has is about the overuse of sort of stock phrase translation, which is a sort of referring to in Japanese a sort of phenomena of the Japanese language and how it's structured, and like relative to the English language, how less vocabulary it has. Is there are a lot of phrases in Japanese that you kind of say all the time, particularly in like a piece of fiction that just comes up all the time. And oftentimes in translating that stuff, you want to sort of find a lot of different ways to translate some of those phrases to make it so that it doesn't feel as sort of rote. Because if you say that literally the exact same phrase over and over in English, it sounds very repetitive. But one thing against that translation method and sort of for translating those things nearly identical every single time it comes up, which is not, Persona 5 does not fucking do that. Like, it uses a stock phrase sort of translation for some of those things, but it is not nearly 100% of the time. It's probably like 40% of the time. But when you translate it very, very similarly, what you are ultimately doing is sort of trying to sort of translate the literal phrase into English and trust the audience to be able to understand this is not natural English. Like, what you're trying to convey in English is something that's a term that doesn't sort of normally exist in this language, and you're really just sort of like swapping out the Japanese meaning of the word for an English sort of like set of words, and hoping that like the audience can catch on. And effectively what they will end up doing, hopefully, is learning what that Japanese word meaning is, even if they don't know how to say it. So anyways, that's sort of like a setup for the phrase sasuga in Japanese, which I think is a really important phrase to this game. Is one of the things that I like. I tend to like the stock translation of it when it is used in Persona 5, because I think it conveys something specific about the Japanese language and Japanese culture. And so the word sasuga in Japanese basically means, it can be used in a lot of different contexts, but it basically means as I would expect of this person. So you can use it in regards to Makoto's character, like sasuga Makoto, like as I would expect of you, like student council president, of course you got really good grades on this test. And so it'd be used in response to her like saying, I got 100% on this test, or it could be used in like any sort of like small instance of her sort of accomplishing something to say, as I would expect of you, you did this thing. And normally Sasuga is just sort of like a normal little thing you throw around as a bit of a compliment, or it can be used as a sarcastic joke and stuff like that. But it also has a like, and in those instances, when you're translating to English, of it just being like a sarcastic joke or whatever, you don't need to necessarily keep the expectation part of it in. You can find other ways to say like, this is just saying like, you did a really good job on this thing, and you could just translate it that way. But it is literally saying, this is what I have expected of you to do. And it's generally just used in a context where it means you have done this thing well. But even if it's used in a complimentary fashion, what it is saying is, you have done this thing that I expected you to do, and you have and that is what you are supposed to do. And it's like the phrase sasaga in Japanese, what it does linguistically is it puts people into slots and it pigeonholes them. And so it's used to say, as I would expect of a delinquent, of course you failed this thing. Ha ha ha, Ryuji, you are delinquent. It's like, as I would expect of the student council president, as I would expect of the heiress to this company, as I would expect of a foreigner, as I would expect of a criminal, as I would expect of blah, 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 blah. Like, the phrase sasaga is used all the time in the game in Japanese. This is in most things in Japanese. But here it feels like that phrase is really important. And it's like, it's really important to sort of, in translating that, I think, to sort of get across the sensation of all these people, all these kids are all the time being told that like what you have done is you are living up to my expectations of you. And that is also saying that if you are not doing this thing, you are not doing as you are supposed to be doing, as you are expected to do by the standards of society. And that's like, it's something that is all over the place in the game. It's another area where I feel like the game is pretty self-reflective about elements of Japanese culture, is that Japanese tends not to reflect, because it is like, you know, again, it is often not used in any, and it almost never is used in a deliberate way to sort of like really force someone to be that way. And it's meant more casually, but it can carry that weight of saying, like, as I would expect of my subordinate to do this good of a job, to like be like a wink and a nudge to say, that means that you're supposed to do this well every single time. And if you don't, you are failing your role in society. And so it's like, it's a thing that,
I feel that.
Yeah, Japanese culture and society, like every culture and society has these issues, but Japanese culture and society in particular has an issue with stratification of roles and of you being like a subordinate and like a senior and like how you're supposed to talk. Everything you do, all like everything you think is supposed to sort of fit into that caste structure. And it's something that's really important to understanding Persona 5 is that it comes from that place and it's very critical of that place.
And I think I know exactly what you're talking about in the localization, because that phrase, like, just as I'd, I mean, Morgana says it a million times. Yeah. Just as I'd expect of you, choker, or something like that in English. But you hear that a lot. Sojiro says it a lot. And I think
the principal says it a lot to Makoto. He says it like 5 times in one scene, I think.
Yeah, but I think what you're getting at is it's probably good that you get that. Because I didn't know the word sasaga the way you were explaining it. Yeah. But as soon as you kind of started saying what it meant, I'm like, yeah, I know where that is in the game. And that means the localization did its job because I understood the repetition of that idea, even if linguistically I didn't play it in Japanese. To me, that's good localization.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an interesting part of the game. And it's one of those things of where localization is really complicated and there's no like right or wrong answer in how to translate something. And like there are a lot of layers to sort of what you can gain out of different methods of localizing a piece of media.
Yeah. So yeah, one last thing I want to say about the game is, and this is something I kind of tweeted about, but I want to expand on it, which is that, you know, when we talked about Persona 3 back in the day, this is years ago now, we did our Persona 3 podcast, and of course that's the podcast where I famously got weepy and, you know, was talking about what that game very specifically meant to me in the moment, and I think I've been pretty open about that in our multiple conversations about Persona 3, that game was one of the first games I played after my dad died, and it was a very cathartic experience, but also, I mean, life-changing. I don't say that to be dramatic, but like in terms of my outlook on the world and in my own grief process, Persona 3 was life-changing. And Persona 5, it is too early to say what effect it will have on me in that way. But because of other things that are going on in my life, and more complex and things I'm not even going to necessarily go into and open up about right now, but when I think I hit the end of this game, and we talked about it a little bit last week about, you know, the themes of this game and how beautifully it gives you all that at the end with the final cutscenes and everything, this sense of freedom that this game is about fighting tooth and nail, for the basic freedom to choose what kind of path you want to walk. Yeah. That message has resonated with me so incredibly strongly, and Persona 5 has helped put into perspective things I've been grappling with, I would say, since I graduated college, and maybe even earlier, of like looking beyond that, of like, it's really easy in, you know, we are not as stratified a society as Japan is in these ways, but there is the social script. There's you go to high school, and then you go to college or trade school or whatever, and then you pick a job, and then you go do that, and then you have kids and fucking die and whatever, you know, and that's it. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that and not quite knowing what I want my next step in life to be. And, you know, having certain constants that I like this podcast. Yeah. I like doing this. I don't want this to go anywhere, right? And
I like Doctor Who.
I like don't want that to go anywhere.
No.
But
I like Doctor Who, and I like talking about Doctor Who. That's my life.
But figuring out where I think I want to go in the world and realize, and that's hard. And I think what Persona 5 has lit a fire in me and like is constantly reminding me of whenever I like listen to the soundtrack or think about this game is it's like the game is like looking at me and reminding me like don't sit on those decisions. If you have the freedom to make those decisions, that is a gift and that is precious, and that is something that we all have to constantly fight for, of whatever version of the social script you want to break from or walk or whatever. That is a struggle. And it's something very real, and I can already feel Persona 5 having a pretty significant impact in my life just in terms of how I'm looking at the world, and not a lot of pieces of mass media can offer that.
Yeah, like, for me, in sort of like in that regard, and that element of sort of the game, obviously this is the second time I've played it, and I've talked about it before, like we talked about it on like our like political episode or whatever we want to call it after the election. I talked a lot about like, the first time I played the game was in October. And, like, for me, so much about Persona 5, even be playing it the second time, is about that first playthrough and where I was, where the world was. And then also, like, a big part of it is inextricably tied to that being, like, one of, like, the big first things, like, projects I sort of undertook of, like, I'm going to take the skill I've gained in reading and understanding the Japanese language and apply that to sort of consuming a piece of art, which is, where my training is from school and stuff with books. And so like so much of this game is sort of like there's two sides of it of how I feel like it has changed my life in not like a huge way, but like feel like this game has like it gets under your skin and like just sort of like starts working on you in a way that feels a lot less sort of direct as a lot of what Persona 3 felt to me, which is like had like a huge impact on me as well. And this game, like, it has both been a really big step for me in sort of like this exploration of something I've been very interested in and just getting deeper into of different cultures and the way different cultures are different and the ways are the same, and how these sorts of social issues come from very similar roots but manifest in different ways, both like in the sense of like those specific like overworking or educational system problems and stuff like that, and then also in the broader sort of like global geopolitical context of fascism and of the late capitalism or modern democracy, however you sort of like want to look at those facets of the game. And it's something that the game has sort of helped me explore those elements of Japanese culture and like the differences between Japanese culture and American culture in a very real way that I very much feel like, kind of like with Persona 3, there's like my life and who I was pre-playing this game and my life and who I am after playing it, and like the sort of reference points I have for so many things that I deal with through like what I'm going through in my like personal life feels like it is filtered through something of what Persona 5 is doing. And a big part of that is living under the Trump administration and living in this like world where it feels like, and it really felt like after election day, democracy failed, and like that sort of moment of crisis in Persona 5 has this like really small but really powerful message of like, it's like, you can do what you can do and you can fight with everyone and you should, but also like that big thing, that huge scale, you don't live on that scale. Like you can't move that vector, but you can move the vectors of the people around you, and you can have an impact there, and that will have an effect. And it is something that like has been so sort of ennobling that, I think America is way, way worse off having Trump, obviously, as president than Clinton, but it also feels like democracy has not just totally fallen apart because he was elected. Like there's so much you can do, and it sort of highlights, by having a tyrant in the office, it highlights the kinds of actions you can take and the sorts of things you can do. And I feel like that is what Persona 5 is about, and it is a sort of like comforting thing of the thing about like, yes, like, just sort of like helping someone's sort of everyday issues is important, and it's something you should take the effort to do and not like close yourself off.
The Persona games, by this team at least, I can't speak to 1 and 2 because I have not gone too deep into those. They do have a fundamental worldview that gauntlets, going through difficult situations puts people out on the other side in a better place.
Yeah.
Or that they can, at least. I really do think that is a fundamental worldview of these games, that, struggle and crisis can produce the best in people over the long term. And I think that's especially apparent in Persona 5, which, just visually and everything ends a lot lighter than it starts.
Yeah.
Which is not the usual arc for storytelling.
No.
Yeah. So, all right. I want to do some rapid fire.
Okay.
Some fun things. All right. We could do a whole other episode on the music.
We probably will at some point.
At some point we will. I mean, do you want to list a couple of favorite tracks? Anything like that? Do you want to...
I mean, we'll just put all, the big main lyrical tracks aside, because obviously all of those are great.
Yeah. I mean, we've already talked about how we love Behind the Mask and Rivers in the Desert and things like that.
I want a big shout out to Layer Cake. Layer Cake is a great song. Layer Cake is a song that plays when you're in EY's shop, the gun shop.
Yeah.
And it is the best shop music that Persona has had. It's up there with... Okay, wait. It is tied with the Persona 1/Persona 2 pharmacy theme, which is fucking amazing. I'm not going to go into why it's amazing. Look up the Satoshi Tadashi pharmacy themes from those two games. They're fucking great. But in terms of this team's Persona team's shop music, Persona 5 has the best one. Really great. It is a perfect music to buy and sell shit to, because it matches up so perfectly with the rhythm of the sound effects in the shop. I love Layer Cake. And I love Alley Cat, which is the sad song we talked about that plays with a lot of Sojiro scenes. And you can talk about some.
Butterfly Kiss. I love Butterfly Kiss. That is the theme that plays in Takemi's Clinic. It is my favorite shop theme in this game. I don't know if you really consider that a shop, but that is one of I just love that theme to death. And because you go to her a lot less than you do to other places, I kind of... It's always fresh to me when I hear it. I have 3 weeks in a row put that on as our theme song, and then realized there was probably a more relevant one to pick, but I cannot wait until I just throw Butterfly Kiss on the timeline. And we'll do Layer Cake at one point too, but I love Butterfly Kiss. That's one I keep coming back to. And in terms of other songs that play maybe a bigger role in the game, I think the best instrumental track in the game is called Swear to My Bones. Versions of that theme kind of play in various situations throughout the game, but that specifically comes up in the Velvet Room near the end, when you go and basically give a pep talk to every person, and then that melody is one of the main melodies of the final song, Hoshito Bokuroto, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, The Stars in Us.
Stars in Us, yeah. I love both of those.
Yes. Also, I really love the song Sunset Bridge. It's one of the main sort of more emotional social link ones, and it's very tied to your main party members. There's a very sort of different version of it is the encounter song from the beginning when you first meet An and sort of Ryuji. It plays at that cutscene, and it's a different sort of instrumentalized version of that. But yeah, Sunset Bridge is also very good.
Yeah. Best dungeon music.
Oh, one, it just has the best dungeon music of any Persona, so you can just say best dungeon music. But then the specific track that is the best, I'm going to go with... I guess Freedom and Safety is what I would call it. The last dungeon song is so fucking good. The guitar solo in that song is so good. And it's just that song conveys so much just musically about the sort of environment and tone of that last dungeon, and the sort of the song is called basically Freedom and Safety. And it so much conveys that sense of people just being in cages and being mollified by it, by the sort of slow, very soft kind of almost music in despair. But then underneath it, there's this kind of drum march that feels we're this is a tragic sort of desperate situation where people have given up, but we're marching towards the end. It's a really good track.
It's a great track. My favorite of the Palace themes would be The Days When My Mother Was There, which is the one that plays in Futaba's Palace, the desert one. Both versions of that, just love them. That is definitely my favorite. The one I just couldn't get enough of. But I will throw a special shout out to Arc, which is the one on Shido's boat, which that just is good get pumped music.
I will then also just give another shout out to Price, which is the Kamashita, they're not Kanashiro's Palace one, which is just so catchy. It's just a really fun song.
There's no wrong answer. They're all great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's enough for the music. We'll talk more about that, and you'll hear more about it. Anyway.
It will be coming up a lot.
All right, so I want to go with some superlatives. And I'm going to try to start small and grow.
Okay.
And if you have ones, just jump in.
Okay.
I have some on a list. What's your favorite Velvet Room design?
Persona 5's, just in terms of, it feels like they just decided to go fucking nuts with it in a way that I really love. And we talked about this on the last podcast, but it's so cool the moment when you can just walk around the Velvet Room actively as a character. Just It is the 12th Doctor's TARDIS of Velvet Rooms.
I think I can go with that. I love the prison an awful. I mean, they're all great. The elevator, I really have a soft spot in my heart for the limousine because I think it's ludicrous in a totally different way. But you're right. I mean, the prison and just that every part of it changes because like the limousine and the elevator, the actual functions of them are identical, you know. But the prison, like, no, you're not fusing personas. You're cutting their fucking heads off. Yeah, it's pretty good. Related to that,
Okay.
rank the Velvet Room attendants.
Elizabeth. Like I will just put them like the Persona 5 ones as a pair. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah, so them as pair, then Margaret, then Theodore, who's the P3P female one.
Yeah, I would
I'm not going to count like the weird people in Persona 1 because there are weird people in Persona 1 and Persona 2s, but we're not counting them.
Yeah, we're not counting them. I would go mostly the same. Elizabeth is number 1. Caroline and Justine are number 2.
Yeah.
I just to be different, I'll put Theodore at number 3 because his stuff in Persona Q is fantastic. Yeah. And then Margaret's at the bottom. No disrespect to Margaret, she's just not the most exciting.
I mean, she's not supposed to be a very sort of out there character.
Right. Yeah. But Elizabeth is the best. But Caroline and Justine, close number 2.
I was looking at some threads about Persona 5 and people talking about the game, and someone posted one of those gifs from Persona 3 of Elizabeth dancing, and it's like,
Elizabeth's the best.
She's very good.
She's the best.
She's very good.
All right. Boy, now I'm jumping into harder ones. Trying to think if there's any other like smaller ones I can do. Persona. This one just goes to Persona 5 again, but Persona Living Quarters.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Because you live in a fucking attic and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, like it is really cool.
Yeah,
I love opening up the game and like you have to go up there and you have to like clean everything. It's a very good scene.
Yeah, I love all that.
And you get to decorate it. Put your newt statue in the corner.
Where do you get that from?
I think if you go with Yusuke to the art exhibit, I think he gives it to you.
Oh, I guess I must not have done that. Yeah, that's funny. Of course he would. Of course he would. All right. Best Persona protagonist.
What the fuck? Maya from Persona 2 Eternal Punishment / Persona 2 Innocent Sin because she has like weird heart things on her boobs over her jacket and it's like the most absurd fucking character clothing choice I think I've ever seen in a game.
So you're dodging the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Boy with an earring from Persona 1.
I was thinking of between 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
And it's virtually an impossible question.
Yes. Igus from Persona 3 episode Igus. She's technically a protagonist.
Okay. Unnamed protagonists.
Damn it.
When I look into my heart of hearts and like, where do I go to just like thinking of it like automatic? It's still Yu Narukami to me.
Sure.
He is a cool motherfucker. Just how much character they get out of him throughout Persona 4, I think is sort of marvelous. And as good as Persona 5 does on that with its character, and it does a great job, it still doesn't quite touch Yu Narukami to me. But I could also make the argument for P3.
I think I might be ultimately leaning for the Persona 5 protagonist. I'm going to lay down my argument here, is that neither the Persona 3 protagonist nor the Persona 4 protagonist, neither of them ever look straight into the camera and just go, and smirk. It's a pretty good trick the Persona 5 protagonist has in doing that. It's pretty fucking cool.
It's pretty cool.
He's got a really good outfit. He's got an insanely cool outfit.
He has an insanely cool outfit. One other thing for Narukami is the dialogue choices you can make as Narukami kind of blow either P3 or P5 out of the water in terms of dialogue choices.
But that's the thing with like the Persona 5 protagonist. It's not about the things you say. It's about the things you don't say.
Yeah,
it's about the things you go, to you.
Yeah. No wrong answer here.
No, they're all great.
They're all great.
But it is absolutely Maya from Persona 2.
In terms of a character design, I would go with P3 because the fucking headphones and the blue hair and everything, it's great.
Sure.
But anyway, they're all great. Persona mascot characters.
It's Morgana.
Okay, Morgana, Teddy, Igus. Do we consider Igus a mascot?
No. Like, that's not, like...
I wanted you to fight...
It's sort of split between Igus and Koromaru,
That's
really,
true.
from Persona 3.
I really just wanted to set up a scenario where you have to fight Morgana and Igus. But I'm not going to make you do that.
No. Because they wouldn't fight, they would team up.
That's true. And I guess we're
because
not...
Igus could understand what Morgana is saying even without having gone to like the subconscious world, because Aigis can talk to fucking animals.
It's very true, very true.
So they would have an instant connection.
I think they would. Also, Aigis just has I think a love for living creatures. And,
yes.
No, they'd be good friends. And no one's fighting for Teddy, even though Teddy is a phenomenal character.
I love Teddy, but he's just not quite on that level.
He's a little too horny.
More than a little too horny.
More than a little.
Because here's the thing, like, Morgana has a deep, deep love for Lady An, but it's not a horny one. It's a very respectful one. It's the kind of love that a samurai has for their master.
He would court her. If he ever got romantic, he would like go ask her father her hand before anything happened. He'd be very respectful. He's also a cat, so there's some issues with that.
He's a human.
All right. Do you have any of these fun little ones?
Best combat system.
Well, Persona 5. That's so easy.
There you go.
Here's a superlative.
Yeah.
I think Persona 5 has the best combat system in any JRPG ever, especially with how it interacts with everything else.
Sure.
Can you argue against that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Because we can go outside of Persona if you want. I just thought these were fun ways to compare the different games.
Well, the best soundtrack.
That was one of the ones I was going to go to as a big one. It's Persona 5, but with the asterisk that I love the fucking shit out of the Persona 3 soundtrack. But the Persona 5 soundtrack, I mean, the bigger question is it the best soundtrack ever? Not just for Persona. I mean, it's up there.
It is obscenely good.
It's obscenely good.
It's obscenely good.
The bass just, pushes it over the edge, right?
Okay, the best character designs then.
Persona 5. It's got a lot of these superlatives. I mean, I just think as an overall thing, you look at the character designs, they are just so phenomenal, and I think bold, but with this like kind of grounded realism to them too. Like the Persona 3 character designs, I fucking love, and I think they're super striking. They're very anime, they're very people have red hair and blue hair and stuff like that, and that's not a character thing. It's not like they went out and dyed it. That's just how they're drawn, and that's totally fine. I think it's amazing what Persona 5 kind of gets away with, given how grounded everything feels in those character designs.
It's something that it very much feels like is a bit of an influence from the Persona 2 games. There's a more like people living in the city kind of, like you say, grounded element to it. That even like, some of the more people that look slightly outlandish, like Takemi, is because of like there are people that look like that choose to have like that many piercings and stuff like that, or to dye their hair. Yeah.
All right. One of the other ones I had on my list as a big one is best social links. Which game has the best overall social links?
Overall social links, I would go with Persona 5. I think like the as a whole, like I just feel like there's again, like I feel like there's, even if there's Shinya's or Hifumi's are not like the most exciting, there's no social link I ran into in Persona 5 that's like, oh fuck, I don't want to hang out with this person. Whereas like there's a couple of them like already, I hate making fun of him, but like the tutor one in Persona 4 always sort of struck me as being like, it's fine, but like
I will pick Persona 4 here.
Okay.
Partially to be contrarian, but partially because I do think Persona 4 strikes a really nice balance for me between the kind of crazy anarchy of Persona 3 and its social links, and that they'll do anything with a social link.
They really will.
They will. And Persona 5, which I think I love the social links and the overall system of it, but I do think just how focused and on point everything is robs a slight bit of the charm I get out of Persona 3 and 4 and its social links of some of that just discuss. Like, I like that some of the social links are on the side, and I think you're absolutely right, Sean, when you say, sometimes you can kind of forget a social link happened and it doesn't have the same emotional impact at the end as Persona 5. But there's also kind of a greater scope, it feels like, to it in Persona 3 and 4, because Persona 5 has, I feel like, more automatic social links. Everyone on your team, and the team is bigger, gets a social link. So the actual slice of the game that is like people out in the city you go hang out with feels smaller, and I love most of them. There is like Shinya and Hifumi that I don't kind of feel the same attachment to. I do think like the moment-to-moment writing in the Persona 4 social links, and this is a very direct comparison to me because I played it earlier this year again. Sure. I think in general, Persona 4 and 5 are pretty much on par with those, but there are some that just, I don't know, so blow me away in Persona 4, and I think because Persona 4 was the first one I played, and I think that is the element of the game that probably drew me in the most, and I think still is like the key, the secret sauce that unlocks everything in Persona is the social links. But like, Yeah, I think I could make the argument for Persona 4 in that, especially if, you consider the Golden and then you have Marina Dachi and holy crap. But, like, I just think, I look at the general scope of the social links of Persona 4, and there are so many fantastic ones there. And some of this is recency bias. I guess I don't want to pin Persona 5 on this one that fast. The Persona 5 social links are fantastic. But, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I might pick Persona 4 on that one.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the main things I really love about the Persona 5 ones is that we already talked about this, but how they wrap into everything and feel like they exist within the whole game. And it's when you get to the ending sections of the game where the game can expect that you have played through most of the social links, or at least been introduced now to all of them, that the characters come up in the main story in a way that in Persona 4, it's their relationship with the protagonist is it becomes so ethereal. That's there's a charm to it, but then at the same time with Persona 5, you seeing all these people that you have touched their lives really actively working together at the end of the game at multiple different points, and it's not just the two instances of we're all everyone give me your energy, Spirit Bomb style Goku of and we're gonna cast the final attack, and then on the last day going up and talking to everyone, which is what Persona 3 did and what Persona 4 did. And I would with Persona 5, it feels more no, all these people are a part of the story. So it's we're gonna cut to Oya when you're in jail out in your old neighborhood and interviewing people to find out what happened with that crime, because she's as big a part of the story as anyone is, and there's something about that I love so much.
I would argue the system works better in Persona 5, absolutely. But if I'm just no question, because when you start adding in the the abilities and all that stuff and kind of how it all ties into the main story, I just there are plenty of Persona 5 social links that I can Oya is actually another one that I think has some really interesting stuff, but overall is not upper tier to me. And I do feel with Persona 4 there are just so many and they're so good, and I actually do like the tutoring student one. I think it intentionally starts out boring and pissing you off, and then I think it ends in an interesting place because that kid really fucks up badly. But anyway,
I have to admit I barely remember what happens in the social link at all.
I mean, he full up starts cheating on tests, and his mother wants to kick him out and all this stuff, so it's not a happy ending.
How young is his mother?
Yeah. Anyway, you cannot fuck that mother in that game. That's different than if that character existed in this. That would be a social link. And
they just don't tell you that you can, but they whatever fanfic you want to have.
Yeah,
it makes more sense with him.
But anyway, the honest answer is I could also make the case for Persona 3, and they're all fucking great. And this is a stupid conversation, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Best cell phone.
4 because it's a flip phone, and Narukami, the way he does it is so great. I love the chat client in Persona 5, but I'm sorry, smartphones are not as aesthetically sexy as flip phones, because you can't do the cool flip hanging up and back in your pocket, and the Narukami animation for that is amazing.
Okay, hold on. Because I misphrased the question. Let's back up. Best phones, generally speaking. Because there's one phone in Persona 5 I'm thinking about. It's a pretty good phone, both in an aesthetic sense and what you use that phone for. It's a pretty powerful, effective phone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The rotary phone.
Yeah.
And the cafe.
Yeah, you get your maid.
It's the access to your dreams.
Yeah.
And your ability to
go
out at night and fucking get your social links up, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's the best phone in the whole series.
Yes.
No doubt about that. I wish it was still a flip phone, because that'd be cool.
It's a rotary phone.
Can you imagine if there was just a flip phone on the counter, and after calling Kawakami, the Persona 5 protagonist flipped it shut and put it in his back pocket?
But can you imagine?
He has what if he had a burner that he called Kawakami on?
Jonathan, can you imagine walking up to a phone and dialing a number and that actually being the verb you would fucking use for that because it's a fucking dial?
It's crazy.
It's a fucking rotary phone, son. That shit's real.
All right. So since we're running out of time.
Yes.
This is probably a question we're going to have to answer on another show, is the actual answer.
Okay, fuck you. I already know what the question is. The answer is go fuck yourself.
On our first episode talking about Persona 5, you said we were going to get here eventually.
Sure.
You said we'd have to ask it. All right.
Yeah, I didn't say we'd have to ask it in episode 5 or whatever.
Okay, but I want to just get the conversation going so people can think about it. Persona 4, we agree, of the 3 we're talking about here, is the weakest, right?
Yes.
Would you put Persona 1 or 2 above 3 or 5?
No. I think there's an argument for it, taking the Persona 2s together and that basically being on the Persona 4 level for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
those games are really fucking good.
I need to play them.
Yeah.
And I'll commit to playing them before Persona 6 comes out. I think we're safe on that one.
Sure,
Am I safe on that one? All right.
You can just go ahead and say that. I know you're not going to do it.
Yeah. No, I will. I have them on my Vita.
Sure.
I want to.
Yeah, sure you will.
Anyway, so yeah, we're not saying... So Persona 1, 2, 4 are kind of their own tier, but we agree 3 and 5 are the uppermost tier.
Yes.
You don't have to answer this, but I like the 3 versus 5 debate. My answer is, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But like, do you have any instinct of where you might pick one of those if you had to for like number 1 on a game list or something?
I mean, it's got to be Persona 4 Dancing All Night, obviously. It's the best one.
Best title is Persona 4 The Ultimate Mayonaka Arena. No, not even that one. The
Ultimax Ultra Suplex Hold.
That's the one I meant, yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
It's hard.
I don't know.
They're
both really good.
I definitely had the thought several times while playing Persona 5, this is probably the best game I've ever played.
Okay,
and
yeah.
that's the only way it could beat Persona 3, let's be clear. So this is a big question to be asking. And the actual answer is, I need a year or two to sit on it.
Yeah, but I think there's also there's something that's frustrating to compare it because I feel like my relationship to Persona was so different playing Persona 5 versus playing Persona 3.
Yes.
Where it's like, there's just a lot of things in Persona 5 that are inherently less impressive than it was when I played Persona 4 and Persona 3 because I had 2 or 3 years or longer to sit with that system and this franchise coming to it that I feel like how could we ever know because we didn't play Persona 5 totally fresh. We played it knowing what social links were and all this stuff.
Sure, and I think the other thing you could say is obviously Persona 3 is a much more stripped down game compared to 5.
Yes.
So it's feature rich. It has things I know some modern gamers would consider annoying, even though we like a lot of those ticks in the game. There is something to be said. Persona 3 was the first of its kind in a lot of ways, and whenever you have an innovation like that, there's something about that can almost never be topped.
Yeah. And
Persona 5 is innovative in a lot of ways. It is not an innovation in the way Persona 3, by its very nature, remains.
Yeah, it feels like a culmination of this sort of experiment they created, but Persona 3 was the spark,
And what I ultimately want to get through with this conversation is, if you want to know how strong our recommendation for Persona 5 is, this is an actual debate.
Yeah.
We are asking, can this game supplant Persona 3, which we would both agree is the best game ever made, as having the title of the best game ever made?
Yes.
So that is how highly we are recommending Persona 5.
Yeah, that's fine. Here's another thing that makes it really hard for me is my experience playing Persona 5 the first time was so just amazing from a personal achievement point of view of being able to play it in Japanese. That's it's there's a part of me that just wants to say Persona 5 almost on the back of that kind of by default in a weird way.
But I could see you
but it's so hard to.
But I could see you in 2 years making that argument and it being completely valid. I mean, and if you said that to me today, I'd think it's completely valid. I can just see you're absolutely right. I can totally understand where you're coming from on that. But just on the quality alone, I mean, we can have this conversation. It's because there are a lot of ways in which Persona 5 is better than Persona 3.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot if you're trying to make the pro-con list. I feel like Persona 5 wins in that way, but that's not how you actually make that comparison.
Right. It's about
your heart. It's about what you feel.
It's about a lot of ethereal things you can't put on paper. Yeah. So speaking of ethereal things you can't put on paper.
Yes.
Next week's show is going to be our Twin Peaks retrospective.
That it is ethereal for sure.
That was a good transition, I think. So next week...
Twin Peaks is the best Persona game ever made. There you go.
We have been planning it for a very long time. We basically we had so many other things going on. This is the last week we can possibly do it before the revival. So we will be doing that. If other things come up, it might become a 2-podcast week. Hopefully it can just be Doctor Who and then Twin Peaks, and that'll be the whole episode. And we are going to talk about the show and Fire Walk with Me. So if you haven't, they're really old. If you haven't seen them, you're not going to, I would imagine. But you should. They're really good. You can skip a lot of season 2. But, Here, go, you can watch all of season 1, season 2 through episode 9, and then you can jump ahead to the finale, and then watch Firewalk with me, and you're probably good. If you want to rush it.
I mean, the finale, if you do that, finale will not make any sense to you, but don't worry. Half of it doesn't make sense anyways, and it's not supposed to.
That's so great. Yes. We're going to talk about Twin Peaks, and then, who knows? The Showtime Twin Peaks might be added into our regular rotation. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll figure that one out.
Doctor Who's going to continue. There's the sequel to Prometheus coming up, which I'm pretty sure we're contractually obligated to talk about.
I don't want to watch it, Jonathan! I don't want to go see another Alien movie!
But Prometheus, we're known for that, Sean.
I know. I know.
We did it to ourselves.
God damn it, why did we make those choices? We were so young.
We'll see you guys next week.
With all this Persona 5 and all this Twin Peaks, I need a fucking damn fine cup of coffee.